Hey everyone, I sincerely appreciate your support. If you enjoy my audiobooks, I would be truly grateful if you could subscribe to the channel. And if you'd like to support even further, you're welcome to become a Patreon member, where you can access audiobooks of novels as long as they are freely available on the internet. Your kindness and support mean so much. Thank you.
Underscore 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 underscore. How is this possible? The one-eyed nun exclaimed, taking a step back in shock. She stared at the iron chains, which were covered in eerie blood threads. With each inch covered, the chains became more real, adorned with dark red patterns that seemed to writhe like living things. These chains were originally an illusion created by her ability, but how could the opponent grasp them as if they were real? And why did they lose their connection to her the moment the blood threads covered them? Before she could react, Wei Weii pushed the professional woman forward as a shield. The crimson chains, like a giant serpent, wrapped around her and pulled her towards Wei Weii. You. The nun with a neck wound looked terrified, stumbling backward. Crimson. You are a demon's disciple. Wei Wei's face emerged from behind the one-eyed nun's head, his expression gentle, but his eyes filled with blood threads. He pointed at her temple. So, you're the ones looking for me, he asked softly. The remaining nun suddenly screamed, her eyes filled with anger and fear. Demon, you are a demon. The term 12 demon was used by the Foundation. In the wilderness, fanatics believed they worshipped the 12 main gods. So, in this world filled with demons, the word demon rarely left their lips. But now, the nun shouted it in terror. The next moment, she saw the red monster. No, demon, fire a gun. The one-eyed nun's face contorted in despair as she fell to the ground. The demon then pushed her into the hail of bullets and leaped away. Whoosh whoosh whoosh. He landed on the steel nails that had been transformed from grass, splashing blood everywhere. Pain? The sensation was like an electric shock to his brain, but he seemed more excited, his speed increasing as the blood threads on his body grew more frenzied. He wasn't as agile or precise as the Order demon, but he had a ferocious and maddening swiftness. The crimson chains whipped out, cutting a mercenary in half and then strangling another. Crimson demon. Living for slaughter, everything was just a means to kill. Legend had it that they could turn anything into a killing tool. Even the iron chains, which were just an illusion created by his companion's ability, became real ones stained with his blood, turning into a weapon for slaughter. He had killed many, and the more he killed, the more excited he became. This wasn't a fight, it was a massacre. The monster was treating his own companions like prey. In her anger, the one-eyed nun charged forward, disregarding her neck wound. She unleashed her strongest ability as a third-stage knowledge demon, spiritual baptism. A massive spiritual maelstrom surged towards Wei Weii like a wave. The language within was dense and strange, each syllable seeming to have its own mission and consciousness. Spiritual baptism was the most powerful ability of the knowledge demon's mentor stage. Each demon system had a major ability in its first 3 stages. They didn't recognize the Foundation's simple classification but followed the old 12 Gods Church's term, God's Blessing, naming the first 3 stages as disciple, deacon, and mentor. Those who mastered the strongest abilities of these stages could be called true mentors. For the knowledge demon system, this ability was spiritual baptism. It could erase an opponent's memories, consciousness, and self, turning them into a blank slate. Then, it could implant one's own thoughts, making them a disciple. As the only 2 mentor-level disciples in the combat group, the nun shouldn't have used this ability. She was severely injured and hadn't recovered yet. As she unleashed spiritual baptism, her neck wound burst with blood. But she couldn't care less. Quickly, retreat and report to the sect leader, she shouted. The others, facing the twisted monster in the air, were already terrified. Hearing the nun's command, they didn't hesitate and fled into the wilderness. Some glanced back at the truck, shaking their heads in frustration. The monster had ruined their vehicle, as if to prevent their escape. They could only flee on foot, pursued by the twisted laughter that seemed to follow them closely. The crimson shadow roamed the weeds. Harvest time had come. Demon, where are you? The nun cursed, chasing after the crimson devil. Her neck wound stained her clothes red. Her desperate cries filled the air, causing the surrounding grass to bend and break. But when she arrived, there was only silence. The grass swayed, but there was no sign of the person. She felt she couldn't hold on much longer, her voice hoarse from screaming. Suddenly, she felt strong lights shining towards her. In the jeep, Wei Weii lit a cigarette, his eyes fixed calmly on the nun in the wilderness. The blood threads around him gradually receded, seeping back into his wounds. Knowledge demon, 3rd stage, he murmured, shaking his head. How terrifying. He didn't dare provoke such abilities lightly, even though the knowledge demon system wasn't adept at direct confrontation. The gap between stages was significant, and carelessness could lead to disaster. He had come alone to hunt a combat group with 2 third-stage superhumans. The nun's distant cries filled him with some pity. He flicked away the cigarette butt and floored the gas pedal. The modified jeep roared like a wild beast, reversing before charging into the weeds. The blood threads seeped into the steering wheel and the vehicle, giving the jeep a surge of energy. It roared towards the nun in the wilderness. The nun looked like a helpless target before the charging jeep. She bit her lip, hating the sight of Wei Weii, who seemed relaxed as he drove towards her. In desperation, she stretched out her hands, unleashing a massive spiritual power. The jeep's wheels skidded, as if encountering an invisible resistance, slowly lifting into the air. The nun's power reached its peak, her eyes turning white. At this moment between life and death, her demonic power allowed her to exert a strength she had never achieved before. She lifted the jeep, which weighed nearly 3,000 to 4,000 jin, 1,500 to 2,000 kilograms, into the air. But her neck wound burst with blood under the intense pressure. Inside the suspended jeep, Wei Weii expressionlessly raised his gun. The nun's eyes filled with despair, her bitten lips trembling. Wei Weii gazed calmly at her, then smiled gently. Why use even children? He asked softly. They just want to grow up. The nun's eyes went blank. Bang! Wei Weii pulled the trigger, and the nun's spiritual power faltered. Bang 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 bang. Wei Weii fired shot after shot, the bullets hitting the nun like they were free. The jeep crashed to the ground, and Wei Weii stepped out, reloading his gun to continue firing. He didn't stop until the nun's body stopped convulsing, and the strange murmurs ceased. The grass stopped swaying, and all was silent except for the occasional tremor from the gunfire. Demon Transcendence had many tricks, so a few extra shots couldn't hurt. After all, he was just a pitiful crimson demon, unlike others with their fancy abilities. Except for killing, he was useless. Underscore 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 underscore. The bullets were spent, and the person was thoroughly dead. Wei Weii leaned against the jeep's door, his smile fading as his breathing grew heavier. He hadn't been injured, even the wound in his abdomen had healed. Yet, he looked extremely weak, with a profound sense of emptiness inside. The gun in his hand felt incredibly heavy. His heart pounded like a drum, and he could feel an unrelenting hunger raging within him like a beast. Now, even fighting a third-stage knowledge demon is such a struggle, a somber voice spoke up. It was the pendant. It was stuck between the seats, showing only one eye, which gazed at Wei Weii with a deep, mysterious look. I'm just a second-stage crimson deacon, Wei Weii replied, smiling. It's normal to struggle against a third-stage devil. But this is just a knowledge demon, the pendant retorted. What about order, fate, or war demons? Wei Weii hesitated, then smiled. Maybe it would be even harder. You'll die, the pendant whispered. The cost of your return was too high. It's not a cost, Wei Weii said, smiling. It was never mine to begin with, they just took it back. But you've returned in this state to the most dangerous third city defense line, the pendant continued. This is the front line facing the wilderness, filled with crazed fanatics and fallen monsters. Haha. I used to think you fit well here because you could hold your promotion ceremony without restraint. But now I see that with your current weakness, you're only going to get yourself killed by acting so recklessly. Wei Weii picked up the pendant and hung it back on the rearview mirror, his expression serious. Although we're friends, I have to warn you not to use words that might be misunderstood. I'm just a law-abiding citizen, the pendant said with a cold smile. Haha. The pendant was about to speak but suddenly noticed something and closed its mouth, pretending to be a dead head. Wei Weii also sensed something and turned his head sharply. In the wilderness, a dark wind began to blow. Except for the jeep's headlights, the surroundings seemed to darken further. There were faint rustling sounds, and ghostly shadows seemed to swim in the air like fish. Wei Weii slowly turned his head towards a particular direction. The grass parted, revealing a tall figure standing about 10 meters away. The figure was clad in thick silver armor, sitting on a massive motorcycle that was almost twice the size of a normal one. The motorcycle had mechanical parts covered with what seemed like flesh, and a red heart pulsed at the engine, beating powerfully. The rider wore a flat, frog-mouthed helmet, and cold eyes gleamed from the visor. The figure stood like a dark, eerie mountain. A strong smell of blood emanated from the armor's joints, causing the surrounding grass to wither and curl. Wei Weii felt a sense of danger that struck at his soul. He raised his head, took a drag on his cigarette, and exhaled slowly as the smoke dissipated into the wilderness. The frog-mouthed knight's gaze swept over the scattered corpses, their presence growing colder. Suddenly, the knight looked up at Wei Weii and spoke slowly. A citizen with a sense of justice. Wei Weii nodded. The frog-mouthed knight gazed deeply at Wei Weii, let out a low chuckle, and turned to leave. I am too. As the knight disappeared into the grass, Wei Weii tossed away his cigarette butt and stared forward, bewildered. A woman, he and the pendant exclaimed in unison, incredulous. The knight's oppressive aura still lingered, making the air feel thick. Was there such a monster even in a small place like Iron City? Wei Weii narrowed his eyes. No, it was precisely because Scrap Iron City was on the edge, between the wilderness and the spiritual barrier. Inside was the strict spiritual barrier, while outside roamed fanatics and night orders. The complex forces created a chaotic environment, making it easier for twisted monsters to hide. This was too interesting. It seems that guy isn't our opponent. Let's focus on the main task now. After resting for a while, Wei Weii sighed and began cleaning up the battlefield. The advantage was that they weren't in Scrap Iron City, so they didn't need to meticulously clean the floor. However, the scattered bloodstains, broken bodies, and other obvious signs needed to be cleared to protect the environment. The pendant looked disgusted but had an excited glint in its eye. It rolled onto the pile of corpses and began eating them, complaining. Actually, next time you could leave them half alive. That way, I can feed on them while their demon powers haven't dissipated yet. You can charge me less. Wei Weii, squatting to clean up, looked back at the pendant and smiled. I used to think you understood everything, but now I see you're missing something. What? The pendant asked. A bit of shame, Wei Weii replied. The pendant choked, wanting to retort but not willing to stop eating. It continued to devour the corpses, its body swelling slightly. Wei Weii watched, amused, as the pendant greedily consumed the bodies and licked the blood from its lips. Some people enjoyed playing games like Tetris or Snake, it seemed to be a similar psychology. The pendant, however, felt a chill from Wei Wei's satisfied and excited expression. Just as the pendant was about to consume the last nun's body, Wei Weii stopped it. What now? The pendant asked, surprised. I still have use for her, Wei Weii said with a smile. Leave her as a message for the other side. The pendant's eyes lit up, and it chuckled. You're a madman. It noted Wei Wei's unkind gaze and added with a smile, but I really like it. After cleaning the battlefield and removing any sensitive information, Wei Weii carefully placed the most combat-capable nun's body on the truck. He wanted the other side to see her desperate face and the numerous bullet holes, which looked particularly gruesome. Satisfied, he patted his hands and returned to the jeep, whistling as he drove back to the city. Ding ding ding. As soon as he entered the city limits, his phone received several messages. They were records of attempts to contact him, along with a message from Captain Weang. Call back. Trouble. Wei Wei's expression turned serious as he pondered. The pendant, which had fallen asleep after eating its fill, suddenly opened its eyes, curious. This guy is getting less and less like a forbidden demon artifact, Wei Weii thought. Holding the phone, Wei Weii furrowed his brow. How do I explain this to the leader when I get back? He asked. The pendant looked puzzled. You've killed everyone, and you're worried about this. I wasn't thinking that much earlier, Wei Weii said, taking a deep breath. I've been out for a while, and the captain must have noticed. I won't be able to hide it. He glared at the pendant. You know a lot, think of something. The pendant stared at Wei Weii, then took a deep breath, air leaking from its neck, and said, Wow, you're amazing. Over the years, people have asked me how to gain superhuman powers, suppress demon attributes, perform sacrifices, or poison an entire city without being noticed. But you're the first to ask me how to deceive a leader. Just then, the phone rang, sounding urgent. It was Captain Weang. Wei Weii glanced at the pendant and sighed, answering the call. Captain, hello. Where are you? Is everything okay? Captain Weang asked in a flurry of questions. Why didn't you answer your phone? The pendant's face twisted into a smug grin. Wei Weii sighed. Captain, I was chasing some suspects outside the city. What? Captain Weang's voice rose sharply, almost trembling. And then, I didn't catch them, Wei Weii replied with a smile. Their firepower was too strong. Underscore 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 underscore. It was unclear what Captain Weang's psychological reaction was at that moment. All that could be heard from the phone was a long, oppressive silence. Finally, he let out a deep sigh. Come back first. Yes, Captain. Wei Weii replied loudly and floored the gas pedal, heading towards the White Tower Hospital. In the rearview mirror, the pendant looked at Wei Weii in surprise. Does such a low-level lie make sense? No choice. Wei Weii sighed. The instructor told me before I left to use bullets to solve problems whenever possible and not to expose my crimson abilities. By the way, the bullets he promised me still haven't arrived. Hey, the pendant couldn't help but interrupt. You call this not exposing yourself? You're always like this, and you really think you can deceive the people here? It asked. What's it to me? Wei Weii looked at the pendant in surprise. The instructor told me to hide, and I've been trying my best to hide. Now, after every task, I make sure to clean up the battlefield. What more can I do? He complained. The pendant was momentarily speechless, blinking slowly. I'm an honest person, not good at lying. Can't people just force themselves to do things they're not good at? Wei Weii grumbled, accelerating towards the White Tower Hospital. From a distance, he saw fire trucks, armed police officers, and a long line of ambulances. It seemed all the ambulances in the city had gathered to evacuate the hospital patients, likely to transfer them to other hospitals to prevent further incidents. The hospital's front area was cordoned off, apparently to conceal the signs of Captain Weang's battle. This incident had caused quite a stir, and the aftermath would require considerable effort. As soon as Captain Weang saw Wei Weii approaching, he walked towards him, scrutinizing his face. Captain. Wei Weii saluted from 2 meters away. This time, Captain Weang didn't stop him, instead examining him with a serious gaze. Wei Weii looked calm, ready to answer any questions truthfully. He had prepared his story on the way back. However, Captain Weang asked something unexpected. Were you injured? Did you hear any strange noises or feel any intense desires? Wei Weii hesitated, then smiled. I'm fine, Captain. He pulled out the stabilizing injection that Uncle Yuan had prepared for him. I'll return this too. I usually don't use these. Captain Weang looked surprised. You're that stable? Are all trainees from your camp like this? He didn't mince words, taking the injection. As a superhuman, this was a valuable resource, almost strategic. Since it hadn't been used during the mission, recovering it was necessary. In the brief moment he interacted with Wei Weii, Captain Weang had already assessed his condition, expression, and even heart rate. He confirmed that Wei Weii didn't seem to have an unusual surge in demon activity or signs of recent combat. His concerns were somewhat alleviated, and his expression softened. What were you chasing? He asked. A truck, Wei Weii replied with a smile. It had some mercenaries and people dressed like dancing nuns. That's not a dancing nun style, they're combat nuns from the Wanderer sect, Captain Weang corrected instinctively, then realized his focus was off. Wei Wei's description was actually quite fitting. He paused, then remembered the main point. You didn't catch up. No, Wei Weii said honestly. And I met a weird person wearing a frog-mouthed helmet. Frog-mouthed helmet. Captain Weang raised an eyebrow, clearly interested in this detail. Wei Weii noticed he was right. Captain Weang must know something about this person since they were both in Iron City. Captain Weang didn't ask for a detailed description, simply inquiring, did they say anything? No, Wei Weii replied. They asked who I was, and I said I was a citizen with a sense of justice. They left after saying they were two. Right, they said they were one as well. Captain Weang listened, subconsciously pursing his lips. Although he still had many unanswered questions like how Wei Weii dealt with the soul-devouring banshee or why he left without notice according to the Foundation's regulations for Transcendence peace officers, after a confrontation, the first priority was to ensure the team members' stability. Then came the aftermath of supernatural events. Since he confirmed Wei Weii was fine, other issues could be postponed. He waved Wei Weii off to join the others, then turned to the police chief guarding the hospital entrance. It's safe now. The situation is under control, he reassured. Also, this incident was quite large, but it involved an inverse demonic field. You don't need to worry about many infected people appearing in the city overnight. However, those affected by the demon will likely experience some mental lethargy for a while. He suggested, you can recommend the TV stations air more energetic dance shows, the kind with exposed legs. Wei Weii walked to where the team was gathering, his face filled with a bright smile as he greeted them. Lucky Sister, dressed in a cheongsam, was sitting on the hood of a sports car, flipping a coin. Seeing Wei Weii, she tossed it high and caught it on the back of her hand. Little Wei, heads or tails, she asked. Wei Weii hesitated, then said, heads. Lucky Sister opened her hand to reveal tails. She was still as lucky as ever. However, she sighed, looking somewhat disheartened. I'm really just a useless person with nothing but beauty and luck. My only way out is to marry before my breasts sag. Wei Weii was surprised by her sudden negativity. He noticed Xiaolin leaning against a wall, watching the bustling crowd, and called out, Brother Xiaolin. I'm not Brother Xiaolinier. Xiaolin looked at him gently, his eyes soft. I'm a thorny flower. Wei Weii was taken aback, instinctively taking a step back. Sigh, don't mind him. Every time he uses that ability, he gets like this. Last time, he said he was a rutting male goat, Uncle Gun said, approaching them. Wei Weii quickly saluted, then reached into his gun pouch and pulled out a green bean fly bullet. Uncle Gun, you gave me 3 bullets. I used 2 during the operation, 1 for initial probing and 1 to stop unnecessary interference. I'll write it in the report. Here's the remaining 1, he said, handing it over. Uncle Gun took it, still silently staring at Wei Weii. Wei Weii felt a bit uneasy. I've already reported my absence to Captain. Uncle Gun nodded, still staring. Wei Weii was getting flustered, whispering, you know, it was Wei Weii who told me about you stealing Lucky Sister's makeup. Uncle Gun raised an eyebrow but said nothing. He walked up to Wei Weii and adjusted his collar. Feeling relieved, he waved Wei Weii off. Now it's symmetrical. Go. Wei Weii watched his seemingly abnormal teammates warily, then saw Wei Weii sitting on a street curb, looking unenthusiastic. She seemed relatively normal but a bit wilted, leaning against a lamppost. Concerned, he approached her. What's wrong? Wei Weii turned to him with tearful eyes. My stomach hurts. You're not even on your period. Wei Weii sniffled, sitting beside her with a quirky expression. I told you to drink more hot water. Meanwhile, in Scrap Iron City, as various forces worked to mitigate the effects of the incident, outside the city, a body bag had been retrieved and presented to the 7th sect leader of the Wanderer sect. It lay quietly on a stainless steel rack. A nun in a white coat was carefully removing bullets from the body, placing them in a dish with silver tweezers. The others are all missing, the nun said, her voice steady as she extracted an astonishing number of bullets. We went to support the 3rd combat team and the mercenary group, but none of them were found. Only Sister Mori's body was recovered. And I've removed 21 bullets from her body. The room fell silent. Some people looked angry, others couldn't bear to look, and some showed fear. The nun beside the 7th sect leader couldn't help but glance at him. Earlier, the sect leader had analyzed that the 3rd combat team should have returned alive because he understood the person involved. That person would only leave a mark as a warning. But now, the 3rd combat team hadn't returned alive, but a mark was indeed left. It was a body with 21 bullets lodged in it. Underscore 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 underscore. Someone used a little girl to search for something in the city, Wei Weii said. Or perhaps a clue, someone replied. The sky had begun to lighten as Captain Weang helped the security department investigate potential dangers and arranged for the city patrol team to resume their rounds. Once back at the base, he gathered his team to review the events while everyone was still present. Wei Weii shared all the clues he knew. The little girl isn't the key, she just has the potential to be chosen by the knowledge demon. Those who used her are the focus. They used a formula, or rather, a demon's directive, to make her do something even a soul-devouring banshee would find difficult, turning her brain into a memory search engine for the entire city. This is truly insane. The people around him listened quietly, the atmosphere somewhat subdued. The team members had just recovered from extreme disappointment, cognitive dissonance, and obsessive-compulsive disorder. They felt embarrassed, and talking about any problem seemed unenthusiastic. Occasionally, they would glance at Wei Weii, who was full of energy and clear-headed, and they couldn't help but feel envious. It was embarrassing to have newcomers see their embarrassing side. They wondered how people from the training camps could remain so stable. Regarding what Wei Weii said, everyone understood. When the little girl's mental state collapsed and the demonic energy field dissipated, similar information spread throughout the district. Other transcendents could sense her memories, especially little Lin, who seemed exceptionally skilled in intelligence and perception. After exchanging opinions, they could roughly piece together the events. Now, they were just reviewing the details to ensure nothing was missed. Wei Weii noticed that when he mentioned the little girl searching for something, the team members' expressions changed. They seemed to know something. Wei Weii thought to himself, also feeling a bit puzzled about the matter. There was a detail he hadn't shared. When the little girl first saw him, she suddenly said 3 words, "Found it." What did this mean? Moreover, not just her, but the head pendant also became certain it was related to Wei Weii after just coming into contact with the demon's directive. However, even it couldn't fully analyze the intent within the directive in such a short time. This needed further investigation before deciding whether to report it to Captain Weang. We understand what happened now, and we can guess who might be behind it, Captain Weang said, meeting Lucky Sister and Uncle Gun's gaze. He looked at the team members, who were all listless, and decided not to discuss it further. As long as the safety risks are eliminated, we'll investigate the causes and consequences later and include them in our report to the higher UPS. Also, tonight's incident was quite big, and little Lin needs to come up with an explanation. Okay. Little Lin rubbed his eyebrows, lacking energy, and said, "The incident was so big that we can only use the ultimate explanation, a gas leak." Wei Weii and Fei suddenly looked up, somewhat bewildered. Little Lin continued calmly, "A gas leak caused an explosion, destroying the hospital area and several public facilities and buildings in the 5th district. The mixed toxic gases spread, causing nearby residents to experience strange hallucinations. Afterward, many people will develop symptoms like headaches, lethargy, and insomnia. Isn't that reasonable?" He nodded slightly, and wasn't there a club that caught fire earlier? The infrastructure is old, with many safety hazards. It's perfect to combine these 2 incidents and criticize the city's inadequate public works, speaking up for the citizens. Wei Weii and Fei listened in astonishment. "Can we really do that?" "It's possible," Captain Weang said, standing up and scanning the room. "That's all for today. Go eat breakfast and rest for a while." "Okay." He glanced at Wei Weii. "Also, think about whether there's anything else you need to report." "Got it, Captain." The others were lethargic, but Wei Weii and Fei straightened their backs and responded loudly. Captain Weang narrowed his eyes in disapproval. After the meeting, Wei Weii had a breakfast carefully prepared by Zhu Zhe, then prepared to rest. Although there were enough rooms at the base where Wei Weii could stay, he preferred to return home. Only in a comfortable environment could he sleep well. Driving his jeep without a windshield, he stopped at a street corner where breakfast stalls were just setting up. Seeing the vendors selling fried dough sticks, buns, savory pancakes, and scallion pancakes, Wei Weii ordered, "Boss, give me 4 trays of buns, 10 tea eggs, 2 bowls of tofu brain, 1 with extra chili oil and scallions, and the other with more sugar." He carried a full bag back to his car, finally feeling a bit satisfied. Returning to his relaxing home, with its deep red walls, Wei Weii felt somewhat better. He sat alone at a large round table with a white tablecloth, tucked a napkin into his collar, and began devouring the food that filled him with a sense of life. Feeling full was always so captivating. Wei Weii lazily lay on the sofa, his long legs resting on the coffee table, and slowly lit a cigarette. The soft murmurs in his ear were like tinnitus, and the image of the girl with the large head kept flashing before his eyes. Until the cigarette burned his fingers, he suddenly snapped back to reality. Perhaps all this is normal after all. He muttered to himself, carefully extinguished the cigarette, and got up to tidy things. The head pendant was hung on the wall as a decoration. It was nice to have something watching over the house when he wasn't there. He checked his bullets, shaking his head in dismay. Except for the one he handed over to Uncle Gun, he had used up so many bullets again, despite being someone who lived a simple life. After changing out of his damaged combat gear and taking a shower, Wei Weii put on clean clothes and sat back on the sofa. He pulled out a hidden flask and examined it. Inside was a small amount of white substance. If you looked closely, it seemed quiet, but the air around it showed subtle ripples. Even through the glass, you could sense the vast information it contained. This was a knowledge demon material. The battle tonight might have had some luck involved. The group he encountered was very strong, especially the 2 in the 3rd state, 1 from the life system and 1 from the knowledge system, plus a skilled close combatant from the order system and mercenaries with suppressive firepower. Their abilities complemented each other well, and their firepower was formidable. Anyone facing them would need to think carefully. However, clearing them wasn't difficult for Wei Weii. First, they were all severely injured by Captain Weang. Second, the most troublesome life system user was taken out by Wei Weii with a single shot. Looking back, it was quite miraculous. Thanks to SpongeBob. As usual, Wei Weii pulled out a box from under the sofa and used the energy extractor inside to create an injection. He carefully observed it, slowly narrowing his eyes. If he injected this, his demonic power activity would increase slightly, and he could remember a simple ability by breaking down the knowledge demon's energy. However, he would forget one of his previous abilities. Currently, as a second-state Scarlet executor, he could only remember 2 abilities. One was the life demon's cellular vitality, which allowed him to recover quickly in combat. Although he couldn't regenerate like the DJ he met at the bar, who could still move with half his brain blown off, he could heal minor injuries easily, especially in intense battles. The other ability was the death system's death aura. This allowed him to become immune to non-death demon types whispers and demonic energy fields by making himself appear dead. It also helped him evade detection by transcendence with strong perception abilities, like during the ambush on the combat nuns. Otherwise, with the knowledge demon's keen perception, he would have been discovered long ago while waiting on the small road. The Scarlet sequence was truly pitiful. These were the most basic and useless abilities in each system, yet he treasured them like precious gems. After some thought, he found it difficult to decide. He had already prepared the injection. The extracted demonic material would dissipate quickly, but by making it into an injection, it could be preserved for 7 to 10 days. He could use this time to think about whether to replace his death aura with an unknown knowledge system ability. Or perhaps, as the brain of the knower said, he should consider advancing to the 3rd state, Scarlet Mentor. Happy reading? Underscore 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 underscore. As soon as the thought of advancement emerged, an unusual longing appeared. Wei Weii turned to look at the somewhat blurry mirror on the wall and saw that his eyes had faint bloodshot streaks. No wonder little Lin said earlier that the demon advancement ritual wasn't that difficult. Wei Weii had unintentionally awakened his scarlet powers at first, and it was quite smooth. In the training camp, he had easily advanced during a mission, and later, some special measures helped him control it for a while. Now, back in the unrestricted scrap iron city, that long-forgotten longing was returning. Just by adding a small class, the advancement ritual was again before his eyes. Collapsing onto the sofa, Wei Weii closed his eyes slowly, still dressed and resting his head on a gun pouch. As his mind became dazed, endless murmurs and illusions appeared, and he seemed to return to that deep red world. The surroundings were filled with a thick, blood-red mist. In the distance, shadowy, twisted monsters slowly roamed this world. Wei Weii walked forward, his feet submerged in blood, with massive gallows beside him. These gallows stood on the sea of blood, towering into the clouds like they were hundreds of meters high. On the giant gallows, numerous colossal giants were bound, their bodies mostly shrouded in blood mist. You could only see that blood continuously flowed from them, merging into the sea below. Wei Weii was walking on their blood. In this eerie and bloody world, Wei Weii slowly moved forward, passing by the first 2 gallows. These 2 gallows were no longer shrouded in mist, revealing their forms. The first giant on the gallows had its body cut into many pieces but was nailed back together. Its head hung low, filled with terror and surprise. From below, it was unclear if this giant was real or some kind of eerie statue, but Wei Weii believed that if it were a statue, the person who made it must be a master, even surpassing human capabilities. The giant was so lifelike that just one glance could evoke a strong sense of its terror, as if its intense experience at the moment of death was forever frozen. The second giant on the gallows was pierced by countless spears, resembling a hedgehog. Even its left eye was pierced by a spear, making its expression almost indistinguishable. However, the hand trying to lift towards the sky and the slightly open mouth seemed to convey its confusion and helplessness at the moment of death. Now, Wei Weii arrived at the 3rd gallows, stopped, and looked up. The murmurs in his ears suddenly intensified tenfold, and his eyes seemed to involuntarily redden. As his gaze fell on the gallows, the thick mist surrounding it slowly cleared, revealing a giant bound by iron chains. Its neck was broken, and its head rested in its own arms. As Wei Weii met its gaze, the head blinked and slowly opened its eyes. Since the head was held close to its body, it was closer to Wei Weii on the ground. Looking down at him with a hollow, mysterious gaze, the giant's massive, broken head had a powerful oppressive feeling. Yet, its expression seemed to convey an unspeakable pity, its empty gaze falling on Wei Wei's face. Its lips moved slightly, carrying a mysterious meaning. Endless slaughter of foolish violence. The Scarlet descends upon the world, like a deep night, blooming a tragic flower, granting peace to the lost souls, inspiring awe in the living. Wei Weii furrowed his brow. The giant on the gallows looked at him with a pitiful gaze, perhaps lamenting its own tragic fate. Its eyes were dull and empty, and it only repeated the same phrases. Each sentence overlapped with the next, forming waves that crashed against Wei Wei's mind. Advancement rituals. To further obtain demonic powers and enter a higher stage, one must complete these rituals. Whenever a transcendent's demonic power activity reaches above 75%, their mind often fills with vague images and phrases, along with more direct and specific things that tell them what their next advancement ritual and goal are. Wei Wei's demonic power activity had always been stable, consistently above 95%. So, he had known what his next advancement ritual was long ago, even before returning to Scrap Iron City. However, the problem was that he didn't understand it. According to Wei Wei's understanding, other demonic systems' advancement rituals were usually clear. For example, the War Demon Sequences ritual, as Little Lin mentioned, required specific actions and sacrifices. Other sequences had similar strict requirements and greedy demands for offerings. They disregarded the world's stability and peace, casting cruel directives into the minds of demon-infected individuals. Completing these rituals could grant more powerful demonic powers. It seemed difficult yet strangely simple. Each person had a clear direction in their mind. The more devoted to the demon, the clearer the direction. Thus, many ambitious transcendents, to achieve their advancement, would stir up bloodbaths in the spiritual barrier or the wastelands, leaving mountains of corpses or destroying cities. Human lives or cities were just numbers, necessary links in the ritual. However, Wei Wei's problem lay here. When he first awakened his Scarlet abilities, it was unintentional, happening when he entered a room carrying a scythe. At that time, he didn't realize why he awakened, he just knew he had to kill the monsters in front of him. The scarlet murmur sounded in his ears, and the blood from his wounds wrapped around the scythe. That was the first time, and he didn't even realize it until it was over. The second time was during a high-risk mission at the training camp. The instructor led them into a situation where they were surrounded by demon-protected thugs in an abandoned gymnasium. Everyone thought they would die, but when the rescue team arrived, they found Wei Wei sitting on a pile of corpses, laughing. After that, the instructor insisted on sending him to a mental institution for a few days. But that was it. Afterward, he was chosen by the Foundation and joined a mysterious program as an experiment, trying a different path. However, that path was already closed before he returned to Scrap Iron City. It had nothing to do with him or the Scarlet powers anymore. You could say that it wasn't until he formally left the training camp and returned to Scrap Iron City that he prepared to continue on the Scarlet path. And that's when the problem arose. The first 2 times, he had advanced unintentionally, but this time was different. Advancement rituals usually consist of 2 parts, offerings and the ritual itself. Wei Wei's offerings should have been more than enough, even excessive. However, the ritual itself became the most troubling part for him. Wei Wei could feel that the key to advancing to the 3rd state Scarlet Mentor lay in this ritual, but perhaps there was something subtle he hadn't grasped. It was as if he was just a thin layer of paper away from understanding. Maybe if he understood, he could smoothly enter the 3rd state the next second. But what was this subtle thing? Wei Wei felt frustrated. Hadn't he worked hard enough? Why was he stuck on this advancement ritual? Perhaps he was too kind? It's said that the crazier you are, the faster you can advance. His law-abiding and kind nature might be holding him back. In the famous haunted house of the 15th district, room 302, the thick curtains made the room dark even during the day. Wei Wei curled up on the sofa, sleeping with his gun pouch as a pillow. His brow was furrowed, as if his dream was influencing him, until a faint tick-tock sound appeared in the room and in his deep dream. It seemed like a voice was whispering in his ear, explaining and telling him something, touching the soul's emotion, triggering true awakening. At the same time, the head pendant hanging on the wall was quietly sleeping, but unlike its usual state, it occasionally moved its mouth. Its tightly closed eyes seemed like a computer running at high speed. After a while, it suddenly opened its eyes, filled with terror. God's legacy. Demon forbidden object God's death knell. With a sudden whoosh, Wei Wei was startled awake, instantly drawing his gun and facing the head pendant. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. Underscore 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 underscore. It's the tactical unit of the Wandering Sect, someone said. As Purify and Wei Wei each returned to their own cozy nests to rest, Captain Weang gathered a group of team members for an unusual meeting, and it's a high-level tactical unit. Besides the mercenaries providing firepower support, they even have 2 mentor-level followers. The threat level is so high that even He paused, then continued, I almost couldn't handle it. The team members all rolled their eyes, though logically, the statement wasn't wrong. Now that the side effects of their demonic powers had dissipated and they hadn't used any stabilizing injections, many transcendent security teams shared this habit. When their demonic powers were active, they would first try to manage the negative effects with their willpower. If possible, they wouldn't use stabilizing injections. This was not only to conserve the injections but also to minimize their own use of them. Lucky Sister held a mirror, adjusted her chest, and regained her confidence, smiling coldly. They've been lurking around for so long, they finally couldn't resist coming in. Uncle Gun couldn't help but ask, the most important thing is, what are they looking for? The others glanced at him, seemingly feeling the question was unnecessary. Little Lin spoke calmly, in all of Scrap Iron City, there are only 2 things worth their serious search. One is Captain Weang's head. He continued dryly, of course, his kidneys or heart would also do. If they could take his testicles, that would be even more popular. I heard one of his testicles could sell for 10 times its weight in gold on the black market. Captain Weang's face turned dark. Little Lin added, the other thing should be what we couldn't find earlier. The atmosphere around the meeting table became somewhat oppressive. They all knew what Little Lin was referring to. God's legacy. We all know they're searching for this, Lucky Sister said after a moment. She looked at Captain Weang, suspecting he was hiding something. Insane people's thought processes are impossible to understand. Captain Weang met the team members' gazes and spoke softly, fanatics are the same. Now, I'm not sure if this is just another crazy attack or a sign of something bigger, but either way, we need to be prepared. I'll inform the security department and patrol teams. Uncle Gun spread out and gathered more information on the movements of various forces in Scrap Iron City. If they try to do something, he narrowed his eyes and whispered, we'll immediately report it to the higher UPS. The others found this reasonable and nodded, leaving the meeting table. Only Lucky Sister stayed behind at Captain Weang's gesture, sitting across from him. Captain Weang furrowed his brow. I'm a bit worried about little Wei. Lucky Sister looked puzzled, having already confirmed some things. Not related to that legendary demon forbidden object. Captain Weang shook his head. I'm worried about him himself. Do you know? He sighed softly, when you stopped the demonic energy field from spreading, that kid rushed to the core without hesitation, even faster than me. After resolving the core, he saw the retreating tactical unit and chased after them alone without even saying goodbye. Luckily, he didn't catch up. If he had. Lucky Sister was surprised and hesitated. Your meaning is? After more than a month of interaction, they had just begun to let their guard down around Wei Weii. Although they knew he had a special identity and a somewhat unique aesthetic taste, he was a good kid, respectful to seniors, and diligent in his work. During this mission, they saw his abilities. At least he didn't drag the team down or embarrass the training camp. Of course, according to Uncle Gun, the young man didn't know how to live frugally. Given 3 bullets, he used 2 directly. But considering it was his first operation, maybe he was a bit nervous and unintentionally wasted some. It was understandable. Captain Weang slowly shook his head. I'm sure he's hiding his true strength, and even his records have been deliberately altered. Although he's a very good kid, especially respectful to me as his captain. He coughed. But whether it's his hobbies or personality, I feel like he's hiding something terrifying inside. Lucky Sister's expression turned serious as well. Then what should we? Captain Weang's face turned stern, speaking in a deep voice. We need to show him more care and concern. Lucky Sister was taken aback. Captain Weang smiled and waved his hand. It's only natural to care for new members who join our team. But we should still be cautious. Don't let him know about anything related to that thing. Arrange some other tasks for him. Young people, once they have specific things to do, won't have time to think wildly. Lucky Sister looked at Captain Weang speechlessly. Where do we have so much work? But we have streets to patrol. Captain Weang said. Assign him to patrol the streets. But don't let him team up with Purify. 1 radical and 1 jinx. If they combine, it'll be too terrifying. Lucky Sister accepted Captain Weang's arrangement with some resignation. Before leaving, she suddenly asked, but you need to tell me one honest thing. What do you think about God's legacy? Captain Weang paused, then spoke seriously. If God's legacy is really in Scrap Iron City, I'd rather it be taken away by the wandering sect immediately to avoid trouble. God's legacy? After waking up, Wei Weii was still pondering this unusual problem. It was hard to connect God's legacy with small Scrap Iron City. He didn't doubt the head pendant's analysis of the demon's directive. After all, before its current form, it was a high-ranking transcendent from the knowledge system. Even the person who created the directive might not surpass the original status of the number 206 brain. But Wei Weii was puzzled. Demon forbidden objects were ordinary items that became eerie after being tainted with demonic energy. The lowest level ones were usually paranormal items that could trigger anomalies or pollute the mind. However, these objects would gradually lose their demonic power over time and become ordinary again. Third-tier demon forbidden objects were typically born at the center of demonic magnetic fields and possessed demonic consciousness. Even if their power dissipated, they could automatically absorb demonic energy to recover. These objects were often used by transcendents as weapons or decorations to enhance their abilities. However, they continuously emitted demonic radiation, affecting one's consciousness. Some said that wearing them for long periods could make you increasingly irritable, while others claimed they made you more sensitive. There were even rumors that some objects could make you indifferent to women but more attracted to men. Higher than the 3rd tier were 2nd tier demon forbidden objects, like the head pendant in Wei Wei's possession. These objects had their own will and required sacrifices to use their power. 1st tier demon forbidden objects were legendary items blessed by demons themselves. They had authority, will, and goals, and could even escape or choose their masters. Such objects were usually locked away in the vaults of major forces. Each use was a significant event. Wei Weii had learned from his instructor that there were even higher tier demon forbidden objects in the world. However, at that level, they weren't called demon forbidden objects anymore. They were known as God's legacy. As the name suggests, these were things held by gods and left in reality. It said this God's legacy has a strong connection to me. Wei Weii asked while brushing his teeth, sitting with a trash can in his arms, and frowning at the head pendant. This thing had suddenly woken him from his daze, shouting about God's legacy and its strong connection to him before quickly falling back asleep. It seemed to have exhausted itself from analyzing the demon's directive or was perhaps frightened. Find it. Must find it. Or else, when it finds you, it might be too late. These were the words it shouted before falling asleep. Wei Weii thought he should be optimistic. After all, even when he used a lighter to scorch its hair, it didn't react. Maybe it wasn't pretending to sleep. But he still needed to find it. Such a dangerous thing couldn't be left to roam freely. Of course, he would find it and hand it over to the Foundation for proper storage. underscore 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 underscore. Ha ha ha. After finishing his bath, Wei Weii changed into a new set of clothes and even put on another SpongeBob SquarePants outfit. Feeling refreshed, he rushed to the base just in time. On his way, he thought about Brother Zuzé, who might be preparing a big feast like a roasted whole lamb. However, upon arriving at the team's base, he realized he had forgotten a serious problem and felt disappointed. Today was Wednesday, the day Wei Weii disliked the most. It was Brother Zuzé's turn to be on duty at the security department, so no one was cooking. Without Brother Zuzé's bustling presence, the small courtyard of the base felt empty. Captain Weang was not there. He had left early, drenched in half a bottle of perfume, looking stylish. Uncle Gun had also gone out early. Speaking of it, Uncle Gun was the most diligent person in the entire Scrap Iron City superhuman base. He always took the initiative to handle tasks. Of course, since Wei Weii arrived, there have been some changes. Wei Weii was also very diligent, which was why he got along well with Uncle Gun. Lucky Sister and Xiaolin seemed to be preparing to go out as well. Lucky Sister was still upstairs choosing clothes and doing her makeup, while Xiaolin stood downstairs by the flower bead, gazing at the scattered small flowers and muttering softly. Next time, I shouldn't use anything related to flowers. The after effects are too terrifying. Yefifei hadn't left for her patrol yet and was eating a French bread filled with sausage, fried egg, cherry tomatoes, and green peppers. Seeing Wei Weii arrive, she glanced at her bread and generously broke it in half to offer him. Smiling, she leaned against the pool table and said to Wei Weii, "Little Wei, didn't expect you'd start patrolling the streets from today." Patrolling the streets? Wei Weii asked, taking the bread and not fully understanding Yefifei's words. Yeah. Yefifei smiled happily. Captain said so. He said I should teach you if you don't understand anything. Originally, Wei Weii arrived later than her, but now he was being utilized more, which made Yefifei feel a bit unbalanced. She hadn't expected that after Wei Weii had relaxed for a month, he would also start patrolling the streets. This made Yefifei feel somewhat vindicated. It seemed it wasn't that she was underutilized, it was just that Wei Weii hadn't reached the level for patrolling the streets before. Now that the wandering sex attack hasn't been resolved, they still don't know what they're looking for. Maybe the captain doesn't want me to get involved in this matter, Wei Weii thought. He had initially planned to ask the team members about it and look through some documents. If all else failed, he could chat with Xiaolin, maybe he would say something useful. But after hearing Captain's arrangement, Wei Weii immediately dropped the idea. His past self had consumed Captain's resources too quickly. He couldn't keep changing teams every 2 months. Before long, Lucky Sister finished her preparations and came downstairs. She conveyed Captain's message to Wei Weii, emphasizing that due to recent events, they needed to focus on patrols. However, team rules had to be followed. They couldn't exceed their designated area or act rashly. If they find anything, they should report immediately. If they felt tired, they should take a leave, ensuring work doesn't affect their health. I understand, Lucky Sister. I'll definitely complete the task, Wei Weii replied with a smile, asking about his patrol area without any complaints. Yefifei, who was packing up her small electric vehicle, couldn't help but stare. Let little Wei patrol the streets, and he doesn't show any dissatisfaction or temper. His work attitude is really something to learn from. With the arrangements made, the 4 of them left together, locking the base door behind them. It didn't have much impact. Usually, people who came here were just asking if they accepted scrap. Wei Wei's Jeep was being repaired, so this time he didn't drive. Yefifei volunteered to take him, having recently bought a small electric vehicle for her patrols. Wei Weii gladly accepted her offer, folding his long legs to sit on the back of the vehicle. Yefifei wore a pink safety helmet and hummed a tune as she drove them toward the streets they would patrol. She was in a good mood because she had just had a streak of bad luck the night before, meaning her luck would be better for the next few days. If she went a long time without bad luck, it usually meant something big was coming. And if that coincided with her monthly cycle, it was even more ominous. Despite the team members' superhuman powers, they would avoid her during such times. Even Lucky Sister would steer clear. Yefifei's aura was so intense that it seemed like a meteor could fall from the sky if she walked down the street. Fifei. As Lucky Sister's sports car sped away, Wei Weii smiled and asked Yefifei, "You helped Captain organize documents before. Have you ever heard anything about God's legacy?" Yefifei, excitedly riding her new electric vehicle, was taken aback by the question. God's legacy? Yes. Wei Weii said, maybe it's called Zero-Tier Forbidden Object or something else. Think about it. No. Yefifei thought carefully and shook her head firmly. I've never heard of it. Okay. Wei Weii was certain that Yefifei wasn't someone who could hide things from him. If she said she didn't know, it was probably true. Or perhaps documents related to this were not stored in easily accessible databases. He didn't ask further. At a midpoint intersection, he jumped off the electric vehicle and watched as Yefifei rode away toward her own patrol area. Wei Weii relaxed and headed toward his designated street. Captain had assigned him a good area. There were plenty of snack stalls. Wei Weii wasn't picky about his work and did it well, which surprised the team members. For several days, Wei Weii arrived at the base on time for breakfast, patrolled the streets, had work lunches outside, and returned for dinner before clocking out. He even proactively reported his patrol details to the team, such as helping the police catch 2 thieves on flying bikes or retrieving a cat that kept running away from a neighbor by pointing a gun at it. Since then, the cat had become very obedient, trembling at the mere sight of the door. Wei Weii neither complained about his work nor asked the older team members about their recent busyness, making things easy for everyone. This made Captain Weang and others feel a bit guilty. From every angle, Wei Weii was a good kid. Captain Weang began to wonder if his concerns about Wei Weii were excessive. After patrolling the streets peacefully for a few days, the team felt at ease. On the day he finished his shift, Wei Weii called the base before leaving his area. He bought some oranges on the roadside and headed toward a raw meat factory in the southern district. Around 7 or 8 p.m., he saw a group of people lazily walking out of the factory. In the middle, a man with a strong aura of death was being pushed in a wheelchair. Wei Weii recognized him and excitedly waved, "Uncle Yuan, hello." Whoosh. A group of people immediately turned to look at him, including several with fierce and menacing gazes. The man in the wheelchair, Yuan, jerked violently, his face filled with rage. "It's me, Uncle Yuan." Wei Weii smiled and approached them, greeting several people who glared at him as if they were old friends. He walked up to Yuan and held out a bag of oranges. "Last time you helped me a lot, so I came to visit you when I had some free time. Look, I brought gifts." "Uncle Yuan, why are you in a wheelchair?" Yuan's gaze remained fixed on him. After his companions began to breathe heavily, he raised his hand to calm them down. He sighed softly, "What do you want?" Wei Weii looked a bit embarrassed. "It's been a while, Uncle Yuan. How about we go eat? I'll treat you." Yuan looked at him coldly, wanting to say something but couldn't. He withdrew his gaze. "I was going to eat out, but now I don't feel like it. Why don't you come into the factory? I'll treat you there." The surrounding henchmen revealed menacing glints in their eyes. However, Wei Weii suddenly became cheerful, smiling. "Great, Uncle Yuan. You're too kind. Let's go. Here, let me push you. Underscore 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 underscore. In the cold storage room, half-cut pigs hung from iron hooks everywhere. The thick steel-reinforced concrete walls and the single locked iron door created a sealed space. The light from the fluorescent tubes seemed even colder in this environment. Wei Weii and Yuan Guizi sat at a frost-covered iron table, each with a small alcohol-fueled hot pot in front of them. Beside them was a block of high-quality 5-flour pork, sliced into thin pieces. The room was surrounded by people holding iron hooks for hanging pigs, some with sharp cleavers, and others with their hands tucked into their clothes. They formed a circle, their eyes cold and brutal, exuding a violent aura. Wei Weii was savoring his meal. The thinly sliced pork was cooked in clear water and served with a sauce made from sesame oil, oyster sauce, scallions, and fermented bean curd. Each bite filled his mouth with the flavors of meat and sauce. The spicy small rice wine and 65-degree low-quality white wine added to the delightful experience. "Uncle Yuan, you're too kind." As he ate, he invited Yuan Guizi to join him. "Why don't the brothers sit down and have some too?" No one responded. Instead, their cold gazes intensified. It seemed they were impatiently waiting for Yuan Guizi's signal to attack the person in front of them. Yuan Guizi watched Wei Weii eat with enthusiasm, his expression growing darker. The storage room was too cold, and his leg, which hadn't fully healed, began to ache subtly. Just over a month ago, this leg was fine. No one could understand how much a man with a broken leg valued his other leg. But now, he had no good legs, both were broken. Even his original good leg was more severely injured. People no longer called him Yuan Guizi. They said he didn't deserve the name since he was in a wheelchair. Recalling this made him feel an unspoken anger. Just a week ago, he had broken the legs and arms of a man who smiled at his broken legs and threw him into a stinky ditch. Now, the culprit sat before him. The pork was the finest rib meat, with 3 layers of fat inside and 3 outside. But Yuan Guizi had no appetite. If it were meat cut from the person opposite him, fresh and raw, perhaps. The last time with the black goat, thanks to you, it wouldn't have been resolved otherwise. As Yuan Guizi fantasized about this pleasant scene, his suppressed anger slightly dissipated. Wei Weii smiled and raised his cup. "Let me toast you for that." Yuan Guizi snapped out of his reverie, looked at Wei Weii, and slowly lifted his cup. The black goat incident was something he had mentioned to Wei Weii because he couldn't not say it at the time. It was also because the rise and madness of the black goat family had caused discontent among certain circles in the city. Perhaps by involving Wei Weii in related events, he might see some unexpected surprises. A crazy person against a fool was perfect. But what Yuan Guizi didn't expect was that after the incident, no one mentioned the black goat family again. This bold and crazy family had been silent for over a month. Was it because they were hiding after the farm incident, or was there another reason? Yuan Guizi couldn't be sure, but his anger slightly subsided. He unintentionally raised his cup deeper, finishing it like Wei Weii, Transcendent Security Officer. Yuan Guizi put down his cup and spoke slowly. When mentioning this title, he habitually paused, wanting to show some mockery, as he often did when talking to Uncle Gun. After all, in the eyes of wild ability users, Transcendent Security Officers were no different from the Foundation's lapdogs, and few people respected them. However, seeing Wei Weii across from him, he suppressed his mockery and continued expressionlessly. After all, you're responsible for maintaining order in the entire city, managing demons and monsters, like the police. As law-abiding citizens, it's only right that we help out when we can. He rotated his cup slowly in his hand, looking up at Wei Weii, but this small favor isn't worth your personal visit to thank me. Just say what you want to ask, there's no need to beat around the bush. Wei Weii seemed a bit embarrassed, smiling, I really just came to visit you. As he spoke, he took a piece of meat and ate it, wiping his mouth and lowering his voice, with so many brothers around, it might not be convenient. Do you want me to send my brothers away? Yuan Guizai's eyebrows twitched, his face darkening, my brothers keep their mouths shut. Okay. Wei Weii nodded with a smile, about the zero-tier demon forbidden object, God's death knell, do you know anything? What? Yuan Guizai was taken aback, his face suddenly changing. He forcefully gestured to the people around him, signaling them to leave. Before they could react, he slammed his fist on the table. The circle of subordinates exchanged glances, then quickly exited the storage room. Don't you have any confidentiality rules in your team? Yuan Guizai asked in a lowered voice after everyone left, you discuss such things in front of so many people. Wei Weii looked at Yuan Guizai and smiled, this isn't a team matter. I came to ask you out of personal curiosity. If it were a team matter, I'd focus on efficiency. I wouldn't have time to dine with you. Yuan Guizai's inner voice raged, his expression changing unpredictably as he watched Wei Weii. Uncle Yuan, Wei Weii slowly poured himself another drink, looking seriously at Yuan Guizai. His expression turned serious for a moment before he broke into a radiant smile, I came with sincerity. Every time I have to reintroduce myself, it's too tiring. Besides, you only have 2 legs. His smile was gentle, but Yuan Guizai felt the cold storage room grow even colder. His facial muscles tensed, his breathing heavy, as he stared intensely at Wei Weii, who looked back at him with kindness. After a while, Yuan Guizai took a deep breath, slowly dissipating his aura. He shook his head, that's a legend about Scrap Iron City. Wei Wei's eyes lit up with interest. He took another piece of meat and began to slice it slowly. Listening to stories required good wine and meat. You asked me about the murder case on 15th Street before. Haven't you heard anything about it? Yuan Guizai furrowed his brow, looking at Wei Weii, I only inquired about it after you asked me last time. That murder case caused quite a stir in Scrap Iron City. It seemed even the upper-level cities were very concerned, sending many professionals to investigate. However, we all know that case was too simple, not worth investigating. What's interesting is that for such a small case, the Foundation sent several batches of people to investigate, including some legendary figures. At the same time, high-ranking members of several mysterious forces infiltrated the city. It's said there were several high-level confrontations in secret, even involving the White Ghosts. Now, the Scrap Iron City security team was dispatched after that. Wei Wei's hand paused as he cooked the meat, his eyes fixed intently on Yuan Guizai. These were things he didn't know. During his time at the training camp, he had only seen official reports on the matter. The reports mentioned that specialists came to investigate but didn't elaborate further. How could a small blood sacrifice case have such a significant impact, attracting so many investigators? Yuan Guizai sneered. Plus, the commotion at the time led to some rumors. Wei Wei's pupils seemed to shrink, his voice softer. What kind of rumors? Yuan Guizai's expression became hesitant. After a moment, he looked at Wei Weii and whispered, do you believe in the existence of God? This topic was intriguing. Wei Weii found it difficult to answer, especially since Yuan Guizai was a former priest of a death cult. In this world, some people believed in God's existence, while others did not. However, even when the 12 gods were worshipped in churches, they never revealed themselves. After being condemned and demoted to demons, no one had seen them. Due to the presence of superhuman powers, various divine signs and mysterious creatures emerged. There were also rumors of higher-order totems that occasionally appeared around gods. Wei Weii had seen one recently, a black goat. He had pointed a gun at it, and it ran away. However, these signs or totems were not gods themselves. Even if every transcendent could hear mysterious whispers, and some claimed to be agents of gods, hearing gods well clearly, it was uncertain if it came from the true God. Without appearing in person, there would always be doubt. Underscore 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 underscore. This world has always continued in such contradictions. Now, it's generally possible to distinguish 2 different camps based on their attitudes toward this matter. The Foundation, led by superhuman organizations, fundamentally doesn't believe in the existence of God. Even the powers they demote as demons are not believed to be real, they're just a term. They prefer to view these superhuman powers as viruses or unknown forces, refusing to acknowledge the existence of God. On the other hand, the wandering sects in the wastelands and the occasional surge of fanatics deeply believe in God's existence. They don't believe in powerful transcendence, higher-order totems, or divine agents, they genuinely believe in a supreme, unimaginable God that exists somewhere, watching over the real world. Beyond the spiritual barriers, countless fanatics spend their lives trying to prove God's existence. Wei Weii, coming from the Foundation's training camp, naturally doesn't believe in God's existence. But he didn't expect Yuan Guizai, a former death cult priest, to ask such a question. These former church members were educated and reformed to live as ordinary people again. It seemed Yuan Guizai's reformation was successful. Some people believe in God's existence, thinking the massive explosion 70 years ago was evidence of God's manifestation, Yuan Guiza said, rubbing his aching leg. His voice was low, but others don't believe. If God truly existed and favored his followers, the 12 Gods Church wouldn't have lost the secret war 30 years ago. 30 years ago, the second secret war. Wei Weii was taken aback, looking up at Yuan Guiza. As someone from the Foundation's training camp, Wei Weii was familiar with the Foundation's rise. 30 years ago, the 12 Gods Church had millions of followers and controlled significant discourse in the world. The Foundation rose during that time, destroying the Church's power center and changing the world's landscape. The war was so unknown that it was called a secret war. The outcome was clear: the 12 gods became demons. Their statues were destroyed, and their church personnel scattered. Some were recruited by the Foundation, while others entered the wastelands. The Foundation and Transcendence became the mainstream, guarding the world. But why did Yuan Guiza mention something so far in the past? It's said that 30 years ago, the Foundation-led war to suppress the gods was essentially a war about whether God exists, Yuan Guiza whispered, looking up at Wei Weii. Originally, the Foundation wouldn't have won. His face flushed from the wine, because this world has always been rumored to have something that can prove God's existence, that is, God's legacy. And at that time, the Church controlled one of these. The zero-tier demon forbidden object, God's death knell. Wei Weii stopped eating, gesturing for Yuan Guiza to continue. Yuan Guiza seemed hesitant, as if saying the next words was a psychological burden. This demon forbidden object is special, because in the Church's legends, it was an item that once killed a god. Wei Wei's expression became more interesting. It was understandable that Yuan Guiza seemed to have psychological barriers when saying this. As former church members, they believed their gods were omnipotent and eternal. But now, they had to say that there was something that killed a god, which sounded contradictory. True or not, I don't know. Yuan Guiza added, looking up at Wei Weii, but if an item once killed a god, it could certainly prove God's existence, right? Wei Weii felt like he learned something new. It made sense to prove a person's existence through the weapon that killed them. Sigh. Yuan Guiza's voice dropped significantly as he shook his head. Whether to use this demon forbidden object for its power or as proof, the 12 Gods Church was fully prepared to face it. Unfortunately, he sighed, during the crucial moment of that secret war, the Church suffered the most terrifying betrayal. One of the 3 high priests of the United Church stole that zero-tier demon forbidden object, leading to the Church's defeat. Wei Weii slowly put the meat into his mouth, savoring the rich flavors. The story was hard to judge as true or false. There were many similar rumors. The defeated Church escaped into the wastelands, constantly seeking reasons for their failure. Everything was just to maintain the cohesion of the wandering believers, thinking of returning to the empty churches. He smiled and said, and then? Yuan Guiza's emotions subsided, and he sighed, then, it's just speculation. There were rumors that 3 years ago, Scrap Iron City suddenly became lively because the god's legacy item, taken by the traitorous high priest, appeared in Scrap Iron City during that time. That's why the Foundation sent so many people to investigate. Powerful figures from the wastelands also entered Scrap Iron City. But how it turned out, I don't know. I only know that since then, Scrap Iron City has had transcendent security officers, and the wandering sects have a presence outside the city. Wei Weii listened, his brow furrowing. It wasn't surprising that Yuan Guiza seemed uncertain. Such stories were indeed far-fetched. However, considering the information he received earlier, this might not be simple. These people. He furrowed his brow. Why do they think this thing is in Scrap Iron City? Yuan Guiza suddenly fell silent, looking at Wei Weii before sighing. You think I'd still be in a wheelchair if I had the energy to uncover such core secrets? Wei Weii was taken aback, smiling. Uncle Yuan, I really think you look good in a wheelchair. It gives you more of a big shot aura. Just don't end up on a stretcher someday. Yuan Guiza's breathing became heavier as he silently watched Wei Weii. Ah, just kidding. Wei Weii quickly laughed. Uncle Yuan, you're great in every way, you just lack a sense of humor. Yuan Guiza's silent gaze seemed to say, humor you to death. What about the 15th district? Wei Weii asked, changing the subject. Could this be related to the case in the 15th district? As he spoke, he seemed somewhat expectant. The 15th district. Yuan Guiza was taken aback but shook his head. Although the time isn't far off, I think it's unlikely related. Perhaps they used this as an excuse to investigate, since they couldn't openly come looking for something. But the scale is too different. Wei Weii listened, feeling a bit disappointed but certain that Yuan Guiza wasn't hiding much at this point. He took a deep breath, wiped his hands with a towel, and stood up, satisfied. Uncle Yuan, you're a good person. Really, don't make that face, I think you're someone I can get along with. He put on his coat and turned to Yuan Guiza with a smile. So next time I come, don't let your subordinates look at me with that kind of gaze. Otherwise, I'll dig out their eyeballs and feed them to you. Yuan Guiza's face suddenly changed, gripping the armrests of his wheelchair tightly. Not today, Wei Weii quickly explained with a laugh. I'll give you some time to educate your subordinates. Okay, thanks for today, anyway. He pulled out his wallet, took out 2 10 yuan bills, and placed one on the table. I understand the rules, this is the fee. He put down another bill, and this is for dinner. As Wei Weii prepared to leave, Yuan Guiza's chest began to heave violently. This time, he hadn't been threatened with a gun, perhaps because he no longer had legs to be shot at, and Wei Weii had been more polite. But Yuan Guiza still felt a fear no less intense than before. Watching Wei Weii leave the 2 bills, Yuan Guiza suddenly spoke up. What I said earlier was unconfirmed. According to the rules of the underworld, I shouldn't have taken your money. But since you paid, I'll give you more reliable information. Wei Weii was surprised, turning back to see Yuan Guiza narrowing his eyes and whispering, I don't know if those people had evidence that God's death knell was in Scrap Iron City, nor do I know who exactly came. But I received intel that high-ranking transcendents once had a fierce confrontation in Scrap Iron City. The location was the Faceless People Church in the west of the city. Maybe if you go there now, you can still find traces of their battle. This can somewhat verify the truth of this matter. Wei Wei's face lit up with a smile. Thanks, Uncle Yuan. Next week we are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day. Underscore 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 underscore. Uncle Yuan is indeed a kind-hearted person. After leaving the raw meat factory, Wei Weii smiled and bid farewell to the workers. In his mind, he imagined the scene of digging out their eyes, but his expression became even more gentle as he turned to say goodbye. He drove his car, feeling somewhat unenthusiastic, through the night streets of Scrap Iron City. The sky was drizzling, and the lights seemed distorted. Today's harvest was significant, but useless. Was Uncle Yuan still holding a grudge, so he deliberately gave him this lead? Everyone knew that places with traces of high-level transcendence battles often represented danger and fear. Some powerful high-level transcendents, like bishops or proxy-level figures, could turn a gathering point in the wastelands or even an entire city into a demon's playground with just a thought. Even years later, it was uncertain whether some remnants of their will might still linger. Rushing in without caution could result in nothing at best and disaster at worst. This was precisely why Wei Weii liked Uncle Yuan. Telling the truth to deceive people was a virtue. Although the destination was the Faceless God Church, perhaps the last place he wanted to visit, he decided to go for work. Wei Weii had many thoughts flashing through his mind. In the end, he made a sudden decision, turning the steering wheel toward the west of the city. It was late at night, and the church was empty. Only a few candles lit the main hall. Outside, a nearby garbage mountain loomed in the darkness, its only intact streetlight casting long, distorted shadows on the rats rummaging through the trash. The heavy knocking sound echoed again. A nun carrying a lantern approached from the side hall, peering through the door. It was late, and the location was remote, so she dared not open the door. Who is it? She asked. There was no response, but a gun was inserted through the door, pointing at her forehead. The nun was terrified, trembling as she opened the door. The man outside walked into the church calmly. What do you want? The old nun stuttered, fearfully explaining. We don't have any money here. The bank is just a short walk ahead. Banks don't have money at night, the man said softly, a smile spreading across his face. Besides, I'm just here to visit relatives. Visit relatives. The old nun was shocked, her expression a mix of surprise and terror. Looking at her wrinkled face, Wei Weii couldn't help but think of times when she would take mischievous children to her office and punish them by pricking their thighs with needles. His smile became more gentle. The gun touched her forehead, and he chuckled. Don't you remember me, Sister Sue? The old nun stared blankly at Wei Weii, trying to widen her cloudy eyes, but clearly didn't recognize him. Wei Weii didn't rush to introduce himself. His current appearance was vastly different from 3 years ago. Few people could recognize him at a glance, except perhaps someone like Ye Fifei, who had an incredible memory and always seemed to be in bad luck. He smiled and turned his head, slowly surveying the church. He hadn't thought he'd return here until today. The years he spent in this church were dull and uneventful, filled with things that made him unable to get angry. The rows of old pews, the few white candles lit in the corner, the dusty stained glass, and the faceless god statue in black robes, with no discernible features, all seemed unchanged. Everything was just older than he remembered, without any changes. The clue he was looking for was nowhere to be found. This was normal, transcendence abilities were mysterious, and few could leave traces lasting 3 years. Perhaps he understood this but wanted an excuse to return? A faint creaking sound came from the side door. Wei Weii turned to see a figure peeking from behind it, cautiously looking inside. Hello there, he said with a smile, adding, don't wake up the sleeping children. You can come in too. The figure behind the door trembled but didn't seem willing to enter. Wei Weii pointed his gun, and the figure finally stepped inside a young nun in a black and white habit, who stood obediently by the wall, her hands clasped together. That's more like it. I'm just here to visit relatives, Wei Weii said, smiling as he pointed his gun toward the window. You can come in too. A quivering face appeared at the window, another familiar face, the chubby chef from the restaurant. He had a fierce look, holding a rolling pin, but trembled as he faced the gun. With some effort, he climbed in through the window and stood beside the young nun, hiding the rolling pin behind him. Don't be afraid, I really mean no harm, Wei Weii said, sitting down on a pew. He checked the bullets in his gun and clicked it back into place. Smiling, he glanced over them. Is that all of you? Except for the unfamiliar young nun, the others brought back many memories. Like the food that was never enough, the legs pricked by needles, the lecherous gazes at little girls, and the endless farm work. His smile grew warmer as he lit a cigarette. Where's Fatherin? He asked, his expression slightly more subdued. Perhaps the one person he didn't want to see was father and the old man with a red hat who was the only source of warmth during his time in the orphanage. He would patiently teach Wei Weii about the world, how to listen to his heart, and how to control his anger. Maybe he didn't want to see Fatherin because he had changed, or perhaps it was because Fatherin wasn't there when he and the others needed him most. After all, the others, like Chi-Chi, were all dead. As memories flooded his mind, Wei Wei's expression faded. He regretted asking the question. What about Fatherin? The old nun hesitated. Wei Weii was taken aback. The Fatherin who played the piano in the church, is he no longer here? The others looked at each other, seemingly perplexed. In the church. The old nun mustered her courage to answer. There's no Fatherin here. Wei Weii turned to her, puzzled by her apparent lie. Fatherin was clearly the only male clergy member in the Faceless God Church. He remembered Fatherin giving sermons and sitting quietly with a red-covered book, watching the children play. Why would she say he wasn't there? Noticing Wei Wei's furrowed brow, the old nun seemed frightened. Really, there isn't. She explained, trying to convince him, our place is small, we've never had a priest come here. Wei Wei's pupils suddenly contracted. He sensed that the old nun wasn't lying. A sense of foreboding rose, and he turned silently toward the side door. He strode through the door and into the orphanage's courtyard. Without taking in the vivid impressions from his memories, he pushed open the door to a room filled with bunk beds. The few children there were startled awake, sitting up to look at him. Wei Weii took a deep breath, holstering his gun. He didn't speak but quickly scanned the room, noticing an old photograph on the wall. It was a group photo of the orphanage children. However, as his gaze swept across the photo, his expression faltered. Everything in the photo matched his memories, including the positions of the children. He saw Majia, Digua, Huochai, and Chi-Chi with her 2 small braids. His heart ached sharply, and he bit his lip, scanning the photo again. He saw his younger self, standing beside the chubby chef, who was supposed to be the one taking the photo. But there was no Fatherin in the photo. His younger self had clearly stood beside Fatherin, but the photo showed the chef instead. Happy reading? Underscore 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 underscore. Wei Wei's brain suddenly felt dizzy, and he experienced a disorienting sense of displacement. The memories he had held onto for so long now seemed like shattered glass, full of cracks. Memories were false, and Fatherin didn't exist? Wei Weii slowly closed his eyes, feeling his heart pounding. After a while, he opened them again, and his gaze had become much calmer. Many sinister demonic powers often began by eroding a person's inner self, causing self-doubt and leading to downfall. Although the current situation made him feel uneasy, he quickly adjusted his state. The more uncertain one's heart was, the more likely they were to be exploited by demons. Wei Weii never doubted himself. If one day he discovered that everything in the world was proving he was the problem, it would only mean the world was flawed. He turned around and headed straight to a room on the 2nd floor of the courtyard. He walked to the leftmost room with a dark purple door, beside which a small, dusty stove was placed. In his memory, this was Father An's bedroom. Wei Weii had once roasted sweet potatoes and peanuts on this stove. He pressed the door handle, but it was locked. Wei Weii stepped back and kicked the door open. Whoosh! The stale air inside stirred, and a musty smell wafted out. Wei Weii narrowed his eyes, looking into the room. As expected, there was nothing that matched his memories. It wasn't even a bedroom, it was a storage room. Broken furniture and farm tools were piled up, and the room was filled with junk and garbage. Thick cobwebs hung in the corner of the ceiling. Every detail seemed to tell him that no one had ever lived here. However, Wei Weii patiently began to search through the musty clutter. Each old item seemed to carry a sense of abandonment, quietly leaning against the walls. Everything looked normal, but Wei Weii continued to search patiently. Demonic powers could do many unbelievable things, even severing logic in the present. However, they couldn't restore everything to normal after disrupting logic. There must be some trace, no matter what. Thinking this, Wei Wei's gaze swept through the dark room, and bloodshot eyes began to appear. This made his vision take on a faintly bloody hue, enhancing his ability to see in the dark. His intuition also became more sensitive and intense. After a while, he suddenly realized something. With a swift motion, he pulled down the piled-up junk in front of him. The loud noise made the nuns downstairs tremble with fear. Wei Wei's eyes scanned through the dust-filled air. He focused on a spot and slowly approached it, crouching down. On the wall were children's graffiti drawings. There were figures dancing, people praying around a bonfire, and figures being roasted on a fire. However, Wei Weii was drawn to a peculiar symbol among the drawings. It was a twisted rose, its strokes childish and awkward, resembling a mass of writhing flesh and blood. Wei Weii examined it closely, and memories began to surface in his mind, overlapping with the graffiti. Blood flesh rose. Wei Weii was unable to describe the shock he felt. His expression was uncontrollable, and he opened his mouth in astonishment. He had seen this pattern before. 3 years ago, the leader of the Red Rose Demon family had it on her wrist. It was the family's emblem. Demon families often designed unique symbols for themselves, and the Red Rose family was no exception. Wei Weii had studied their information countless times, knowing everything about them, including the vibrant, blood-flesh rose pattern on the leader's wrist. He had seen this pattern in his dreams every night but never expected to find it in reality. Wei Weii stretched out his hand to touch the mark, but his palm trembled. He was afraid that this was just an illusion, and touching it would shatter the dream. However, he mustered his courage and touched the symbol. In that moment, his heart almost leaped out of his chest, and intense joy flooded his heart. Official reports and Scrap Iron City's news had stated that the Red Rose family members were killed 3 years ago. If they were just ordinary, spontaneous demon followers, and all were killed by him, how could their symbol appear in the Faceless God Church? This was too good. For 3 years, Wei Weii had been unwilling to accept that they were truly dead. He always believed there must be other accomplices or followers. The possibility of encountering them again, sitting down to have a drink together, had always been on his mind. Occasionally, he realized that his enemies might all be dead, but he quickly shifted his focus away from such thoughts. How could it be? His enemies couldn't all be dead, they must be waiting for him somewhere like old friends. And now, he had seen the Red Rose again. The sounds around him seemed to fade away, leaving only the pounding of his heart in his ears. Wei Weii stared deeply at the blood-flesh rose symbol, which seemed to have come alive. This wasn't a coincidence or a similarity. It was the same symbol, with its twistedness and vivid, eerie feel, impossible to replicate. The missing fatherin, the mysterious demon-worshipping family, and the blood-flesh rose drawn in graffiti on the wall. In this moment, Wei Weii felt his brain's blood vessels pulsating. Some things he had considered hopeless, scattered, and insignificant, or even planned to forget, suddenly seemed connected by an invisible thread. They formed a whole, though it wasn't yet clear due to missing pieces. But it didn't matter. Wei Weii shook his head vigorously, and his eyes sparkled with surprise. Blood-flesh rose. Since this symbol had appeared again, it meant that there were still secrets from back then. There were others out there. It was great, just great. What exactly was happening, and who was involved? It seemed that things hadn't ended yet. For a moment, Wei Weii felt like the blood-flesh rose was a beam of light illuminating his world. Ha ha, ha ha. He couldn't help but laugh, his footsteps light as he jumped down from the floor. He even performed a dance step, like those from a community dance. Downstairs, the old nuns were trembling. They had discussed calling the police, but the phone was in the office on the 2nd floor, and they dared not go up. The tricycle in the church was broken, so they couldn't escape either. This person, or rather, this madman was incredibly agile. Who knew if he would chase them down if they tried to flee? As they watched in terror, Wei Weii jumped down from the 2nd floor and even performed a dance step. He looked at them with excitement, and they wondered what he had discovered, but they didn't dare ask. As Wei Weii passed by, he suddenly turned to them. He raised his gun, pointing it at the chubby chef. With a gentle smile on his face, he said, "Take off your pants." The chef almost collapsed. He had no idea what Wei Weii wanted to do, but facing the gun and Wei Wei's smile, he didn't dare refuse. Shaking, he reached for his waistband and pulled down his pants. They were tight, strawberry-patterned briefs. Neither the design nor the size seemed fitting for the chubby chef. "I really haven't forgotten, even something as disgusting as this I remember. How could I forget one good thing?" Wei Weii looked at the chef's underwear, and his smile seemed to broaden. His finger on the trigger felt a strong urge, but he restrained himself. Wearing underwear wasn't a crime, and he had worn childish underwear himself. In his memories, the chef had a lecherous gaze toward Chi-Chi, but perhaps because Wei Weii and the other kids reacted quickly, nothing happened. Unfortunately, this disgusting chef hadn't been infected by demons either. After a long moment, he sighed and put away his gun. With a swift kick, he sent the chef crying out in pain, like a slaughtered pig. Wei Weii turned to leave, his footsteps light. Behind him, the old nun's face turned pale, and her body trembled violently. Underscore 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 underscore. As Wei Weii walked away from the church, the terrified cries echoed behind him. His footsteps were light, and he felt a sense of purpose he hadn't felt in a long time. What could be more meaningful than finding direction in life? Bloodflesh rose. He could instinctively feel that this graffiti wasn't placed there by chance. If someone had the ability to erase Father N's presence from this place, they wouldn't leave such an obvious clue. Perhaps they knew Wei Weii would return and intentionally left it for him to find. In his heart, Wei Weii had always hoped that things hadn't ended yet. Did this person know his hopes? The situation was becoming more intriguing, though confusing. Wei Weii felt exceptionally grounded, even with just the rose symbol. Knowing they were still out there, knowing this mark, how could he not find them? The question was how to bring them out. In this moment, his brain was racing, his thoughts clearer than ever. The night was deep, and in a bedroom with a grotesque, mutated wolf head hanging on the wall and a strange grey carpet on the floor, Yuan was lying on a large bed covered with bare skin. He had just endured the most agonizing dinner ever, having sent away 2 voluptuous women and downed a large glass of whiskey. Due to exhaustion and the effects of the alcohol, he was sleeping soundly. Unaware of what he was dreaming, his expression was slightly ferocious, his teeth grinding as if he were gnawing on something that made him happy. Everything around him was dark, except for the wolf head's eyes, which emitted a faint, eerie glow. Whoosh! A cool breeze blew into the room, filling it with a sense of security. Yuan frowned, suddenly alert, and opened his eyes to find a face right in front of him. It was a black figure sitting on the edge of his bed, leaning forward to observe him closely. The figure occupied his entire field of vision. Yuan's hair stood on end, and he made a muffled sound in his throat. He flipped over, pressing himself against the cold wall. "Thank you, Uncle Yuan, really, Thank you, the Face's owner said, just as Yuan Guize was frantically searching for his gun under the pillow. The person kindly turned on the bedside lamp, and the soft light dispelled the darkness. Yuan Guize finally saw Wei Wei's face, filled with gratitude and excitement, and his gentle gaze. Wei Wei was sitting on his bed, even holding a half-smoked cigarette. Recognizing Wei Wei, Yuan Guize didn't relax at all. Instead, his fear intensified, and he almost jumped up. You, what are you doing here? He shouted, his voice trembling with rage. Are you crazy? How did you get in? Really, thank you so much. Wei Wei didn't respond to his questions but continued expressing his gratitude. Thanks to you, I've found my life's purpose. Yuan Guize was completely bewildered. What was this about? Was this guy insane? He had sneaked into his room in the middle of the night, sat on his bed, and watched him sleep. All to say this? The fact that Wei Wei had been sitting there for a while, judging by the state of his cigarette, made Yuan Guize's worldview almost collapse. He felt a chilling sense of being stalked by a demon. Sorry, Uncle Yuan. The matter was too important. I couldn't wait until tomorrow morning to come find you. Yuan Guize's eyes, filled with terror, watched as Wei Wei apologized politely and stood up. Wei Wei walked to the desk, picked up Yuan Guize's whiskey, examined it, and seemed to appreciate it. He opened the bottle, took a swig, almost choked, and quickly put it back. Then, he sat down in the chair in front of Yuan Guize's desk and began drawing something on a piece of paper. It wasn't until then that Yuan Guize was certain he wasn't dreaming. He suppressed his lingering fear and slowly pulled out the gun from under his pillow, gripping it tightly. In his heart, he wanted to shoot this guy who had appeared in his room in the middle of the night to thank him. However, the fear that still lingered made him hesitate, and he couldn't muster the courage to raise the gun. After a long moment, he rasped out, "What do you want, sneaking in here in the middle of the night?" "I have something important," Wei Wei replied, picking up the paper and walking over to Yuan Guize. He sat down beside him and handed him the paper. "Uncle Yuan, do you recognize this symbol?" Yuan Guize was both shocked and terrified, but he glanced at the paper instinctively. His brow furrowed. The paper depicted a strange rose with an eerie aura. He took a few deep breaths, suppressing his anger, and said, "You came to me just for this." Wei Wei smiled. "Yes, for professional matters, one should seek a professional." Yuan Guize glared at him, angry. "What do you think I am? Someone who knows everything at a glance." Wei Wei laughed and explained, "I just wanted to show it to you urgently. Leave this paper with you. Help me investigate it, but please hurry. I'm in a rush." Yuan Guize looked at Wei Wei's radiant but also terrifying smile. He didn't want to agree, but the memory of waking up to find Wei Wei sitting beside him made him shiver. His courage to refuse was gone, and after a long silence, he took the paper, holding it between his fingers. "All right, Uncle Yuan. I won't disturb your rest anymore." Wei Wei smiled, waved goodbye, and said, "If you have any news, please let me know right away." "Wait," Yuan Guize called out as Wei Wei was about to leave. Facing Wei Wei's surprised gaze, he took a deep breath and said, "Leave your phone number." He looked at Wei Wei intently. "Next time, please don't appear like this again." As Wei Wei left Yuan Guize's meat factory, he thought to himself, Uncle Yuan really cares about his privacy. It was reasonable that he would have to visit often when asking for favors, but entering his place was always troublesome. He had to catch people, interrogate them, and sometimes even pick locks. Now, with a phone number, things would be much easier. Wei Wei believed that Yuan Guize would be moved by his personal visit and would help him with this matter. However, with just a symbol, it was uncertain whether he could find the people he was looking for. Although Yuan Guize was professional, Wei Wei couldn't rely solely on him. That night, Wei Wei was too excited to sleep. He drove around, thinking quickly, and stopped under a street light. He pulled out his phone and opened an encrypted system he hadn't planned to use soon. He clicked on a profile with a woman wearing a crown and sent 2 smiling emoticons. After a while, there was a response, "Who do you want to kill this time?" Wei Wei sent a photo of the bloodflash rose. "I need all the leads on this symbol." The response came quickly. "Why not go through official Foundation channels?" Wei Wei, smiling emoticons. Crown profile, "I'll try to help, no guarantees." Wei Wei, kissing emoticons. Crown profile, "I'm getting engaged soon." Wei Wei, kissing emoticons again. Crown profile, "You're making me look forward to it. Are you considering crashing the wedding?" Wei Wei, embarrassed emoticons. "Can a normal person do that?" Crown profile, "Your words fill me with anticipation." Sighing, Wei Wei closed the communication app and thought for a moment before calling Ye Fei. The phone rang in an empty villa. Ye Fei, wearing a bunny-eared sleep suit and slippers, came downstairs and took the phone from the nanny. "Little Wei, why are you calling so late? Is there a mission?" "No, no mission. It's actually a personal matter. I need your help." Ye Fei was surprised. "What person?" "A friend of mine." Wei Wei sighed, "A very good friend. I returned to Scrap Iron City thinking he wasn't here, but now I have new information. Unfortunately, all I have is this photo as proof that he's still in the city. So, I want to ask if you've seen any similar patterns or clues in Scrap Iron City. This is really important to me." I don't want to bother Captain Weang with this yet, it's my personal business. But maybe there are some leads in the database." Ye Fei seemed hesitant but said, "If it's worth calling me this late, it must be important, right? Of course. I live my life for him." underscore 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 underscore. After setting a life goal, everything felt different. Even waking up in the morning came half an hour earlier than usual. Wei Wei carefully took a shower, changed into fresh clothes, and put on the SpongeBob underwear that Lucky Sister had given him. Fortunately, she had gifted him 2 pairs back then, otherwise, he wouldn't know how to deal with it now. The only issue was that the quality of these cheap street market underwear wasn't great. They faded a little. But it didn't matter. Once all the color faded, there'd be nothing left to fade anymore. Feeling energized, he went downstairs. Skipping breakfast, he stepped on the gas and drove straight to the base. On the way, he pondered where to start searching for clues about his beloved Bloodflesh Rose. Although he had already asked several people for help last night, sitting idly waiting felt unbearable. He needed to take action himself. Perhaps starting with the simplest place, the archives, would be best? If that Bloodflesh Rose still existed somewhere in Scrap Iron City, there might be some mention of it in the records. Ah, little Wei is finally here. Lost in thought as he entered the base, Wei Wei was greeted by Brother Zuzei's excited gaze. Brother Zuzei was already seated at the table, eagerly presenting a plate of pancakes wrapped around sauced meat. Beside it was a bowl of pork offal soup garnished with fragrant scallions. The aroma was mouth-watering. Thank you, Brother Zuzei. Wei Wei sat down at the table without needing to lift a finger. Brother Zuzei had already brought over chopsticks, a spoon, and some pickled vegetables. Where's the captain and everyone else? Wei Wei asked curiously while eating, glancing around. Out again. Ever since he started patrolling the streets, it seemed like the team had gotten busier too. The days when everyone gathered around one table for meals or played ball together were becoming rare. Almost every senior team member had tasks assigned and often went out except for Brother Zuzei. Whether it was during the Black Goat summoning demon incident or the big-headed little girl case, Brother Zuzei remained steadfastly at the base every day, cooking meals and tidying up. Wei Wei speculated that it might have something to do with follow UPS from the big-headed little girl case. He wondered if these senior members were planning some grand scheme. In the past, such things would have tempted him greatly. But now, he had more important matters to attend to. The others went out. The captain hasn't come yet. Maybe he's still sleeping. Zuzei glanced toward the captain's office/bedroom before handing Wei Wei another pancake roll with a smile. Eat more. No problem. Wei Wei looked at what was left in the basket and said, I'll take care of all of it and even pack some for lunch while patrolling. Oh my. Brother Zuzei's eyes lit up with excitement. I'll make you fresh ones for lunch. Brother Zuzei, you're too kind. No, you're kinder. The two exchanged knowing smiles as if they'd found kindred spirits in each other. That said, Wei Wei did feel like his teammates had been treating him better lately. Uncle Gun, Chen Xiang, though busy, occasionally dragged him to play billiards and clearly held back so as not to crush him too badly. Lucky Sister didn't even bother saying hello. She just used team funds to pay 3 months of his rent in advance. The handsome little Lin observed him for a while last time and gifted him a men's moisturizer. As for Captain Weang, his concern was even more evident. He once secretly invited Wei Wei out for a stroll. But unexpectedly, as soon as he made the suggestion, everyone in the courtyard started giving strange looks. Uncle Gun and little Lin looked worried and subtly shook their heads at Wei Wei. Brother Zuzei appeared terrified and hesitant to speak. Lucky Sister went upstairs without a word and returned with a shotgun, promptly aiming it at Captain Weang without hesitation. Captain Weang fled in disgrace, lamenting his lost opportunity for deeper bonding with his subordinate. How should one put it? Wei Wei always felt like his teammates were showing him more care and affection lately. After finishing breakfast, Brother Zuzei declined Wei Wei's offer to help wash dishes. So Wei Wei quietly approached Captain Weang's office window instead, half worried about seeing something he shouldn't, and prepared himself to feign surprise if necessary. Peeking inside through the window, disappointment struck instantly. There was nothing unusual. Captain Weang was already up and had slicked back his hair early in the morning. He sat in an imposing swivel chair while fiddling with an old pocket watch and speaking seriously on the phone. Thinking it might involve work secrets, Wei Wei decided to step aside quietly. But then he overheard Captain Weang raising his voice sharply. No way. His tone grew louder. Yesterday I only called 3 girls over and one of them I even had to call Big Sis. Why are you charging me for 4 people? Huh. You're saying Big Sis counts as 2 because of her seniority. Ridiculous. Ask around any venue in Scrap Iron City who doesn't know I'm 28 this year. Bah. I won't pay. What? You're threatening to blacklist me from all red light districts. Wei Wei panicked momentarily and tried retreating stealthily, only for Captain Weang to slam down his phone abruptly before turning toward his office door with a stern expression. Little Wei, I was just discussing work matters. You're here because... Good morning, Captain. Wei Wei saluted hastily before explaining, I have something to request. A request? Captain Weang seemed flustered. Haven't you been doing well patrolling lately? Yes. Wei Wei smiled, but besides patrolling duties, I'd like access to some base records for better understanding of our work. Sigh. Captain Weang sighed deeply. Young people shouldn't always focus on work. The outside world is still wonderful. But despite his words, he tossed over a keychain adorned with a red high heel pendant. Feel free to browse low-level files in the archive room, but mid-level ones require formal promotion first. High-level files need my explicit approval. Thank you very much. Underscore 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 underscore. Upon entering the archive room, Wei Weii realized that despite Scrap Iron City being a small base, its archives were unexpectedly extensive. The records included supernatural incidents handled by their so-called Environmental Protection Agency, as well as numerous murder cases and unsolved mysteries filtered and sent over by the Security Bureau. Among these, there were both truths and fabrications countless in number. For instance, there were rumors of water monkeys appearing in certain areas, tales of haunted houses, and even a case where a married woman claimed she was impregnated in her dreams after her husband lost his sexual ability. She swore she had been violated in her sleep. Note: water monkeys are part of Chinese folklore commonly believed to be formed from drowned floating corpses. After skimming through the files, Wei Weii concluded that, apart from the dream violation case which warranted further investigation, the rest were clearly fake. Nevertheless, he patiently sifted through the files while forming a plan in his mind. The demon family he had encountered before worshipped the life demon, represented by the bloodflesh rose. Its grotesque, writhing flesh-like appearance left a deep impression. Thus, it was likely that the person he sought was also connected to the life demon system. Wei Weii meticulously sorted through one file after another in the archive room. His strategy was to first identify cases categorized under or resembling traces of the life demon system and then examine them thoroughly. However, the results surprised him. Although Scrap Iron City was a small place, it was located on the border of the third defense line, a chaotic mix of dragons and snakes. Confirmed or suspected cases involving demon worshippers and supernatural factors filled an entire shelf in the archive room. Yet after over an hour of searching, Wei Weii was astonished to find not a single file directly related to the life demon system. The few related files only involved missing persons suspected to be connected to it or incidents occurring outside the city that were recorded due to proximity. There were also confiscation records of inferior life serum seized on the black market, nothing substantial. In contrast, cases involving death demons, order demon, knowledge demons, and even war demons were plentiful. Strange. Wei Weii couldn't help but feel puzzled. The life demon sequence ranked first among all demon systems and undoubtedly had the most followers worldwide. In almost every city, supernatural incidents related to the life demon were always among the most numerous. After all, life itself is what stirs human desires most deeply and what countless people yearn for above all else. But why was Scrap Iron City so peculiar? While other cases seemed normal in quantity, there wasn't a single confirmed life demon-related case here. Upon closer examination, it almost felt as though the city repelled the life demon entirely. As he continued flipping through files and organizing those he had reviewed, Wei Weii noticed something peculiar about these archives, or rather, about how they had been systematically recorded since Captain Weang and his team arrived at Scrap Iron City 3 years ago. Among all these records, only one case was explicitly categorized under the life demon system, his own. The 15th District Demon Boy Murder Case. Internally, however, it was referred to by another name, 15th District Youth Demon Slaying Case. Seeing this label gave Wei Weii pause for a moment. Judging by the handwriting, he couldn't tell which team member had written it during file organization, but strangely enough, he felt a faint sense of warmth. Sighing nostalgically, he flipped through this file briefly before placing it back on the shelf. After all, during his time at training camp, he had already obtained a more formal internal report from the Foundation through his instructor. In terms of completeness and accuracy, it far surpassed anything recorded locally in Scrap Iron City. The file left here was merely a copy transferred from the Security Bureau archives. Still unwilling to overlook anything important, Wei Weii read through it carefully again but found no new discoveries. One thing became certain: within Scrap Iron City, or at least since records began being systematically archived 3 years ago, there hadn't been a single confirmed life demon-related incident besides his own case. It was as if all traces of life demons had been wiped out 3 years ago. What nonsense! How could he possibly be that thorough? After spending an entire morning poring over records and grabbing lunch specially prepared by Zhu Zhe, Wei Weii resumed his street patrols with lingering doubts clouding his mind. Unable to shake off his confusion about what he found or didn't find in the archives room, he called Ye Fei for advice. Ye Fei had once been groomed as Captain Weang's potential secretary but ended up nearly burning down the archive room instead. Her greatest accomplishment during that time was treating classified case files as ghost stories for her personal entertainment. While she might not have as clear an understanding of organized data as Wei Weii now did after combing through it himself, she possessed an uncanny familiarity with obscure events thanks to her unconventional reading habits. After hearing Wei Wei's question, Ye Fei thought carefully but confirmed she had no recollection of anything relevant either. This only deepened the mystery. Could there be a link between his youth demon slaying case from 3 years ago, the strange absence of life demons in Scrap Iron City, father and from the long-forgotten Faceless God Church, and the lingering questions about the origin of his abilities, questions that neither the training camp nor the Foundation's reports had ever been able to explain? Wei Weii tried calming himself down to think rationally but quickly gave up. It was too difficult. In any case, focusing on finding the bloodflesh rose seemed like the right move for now. If there was anything capable of tying these threads together, if there was any key to unraveling everything, it would undoubtedly be that rose. To say that Wei Weii wasn't anxious would be a lie. Years had passed since he first formed his theories, and now that he finally found something resembling proof or direction, he couldn't wait any longer to uncover answers about him or them. Yet despite days upon days spent investigating 7 or 8 straight with no progress, the results remained disappointing. His search through archives yielded nothing useful. Yuan Guize, whom he'd entrusted with inquiries elsewhere, hadn't reported back either, making him question Yuan's competence or sincerity in helping out altogether. Perhaps it was time for another nighttime visit? We are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day this week. Please give the novel a rating and a review on https://www.novelupdates.com/series/Scarlet-descent. Brother Wei, over here. As soon as Wei Weii entered the cafe, he saw Fei sitting in a secluded booth. She had already ordered coffee for him and was waving enthusiastically when she spotted him. When Wei Weii approached, she immediately pulled out a napkin with a drawing of a tattoo on it, sketched from memory. She nervously asked, "Quick, look, is this what it looks like?" At that moment, her face radiated excitement, as if she were silently asking for praise. "Am I amazing or what? Compliment me already?" Given her personality, it was rare for anyone to ask her for help growing up. It was even rarer for her to not mess things up. Wei Weii quickly took the napkin and examined it closely. The tattoo sketch on the napkin was drawn based on Fei's memory. Although her drawing skills were quite poor, the tattoo's design did share some stylistic similarities with the blood-flesh rose he was searching for. However, many crucial details seemed to be missing. Even Wei Weii wasn't entirely sure, but he felt a surge of excitement nonetheless. Staring at the sketch for a long time, he finally asked Fei, "How did you come across this?" "I was just patrolling as usual. Since you asked me to keep an eye out for this, I've been paying attention whenever I can, just in case I come across something. I figured it might be a tattoo, so I started walking around places where delinquent girls hang out." Fei gestured animatedly as she recounted the events leading up to her discovery. Her storytelling included her reasoning and analysis tinged with a bit of pride, which left Wei Weii torn between wanting to cover his face in exasperation and being impressed by her effort. It felt like an honor student watching a struggling classmate try their best. But as she continued describing the white-suited man she encountered, Wei Weii grew increasingly intrigued. He began interrupting her frequently, asking her to describe the man's actions during their encounter, his smile, every subtle change in his expression, and even the faint feelings she experienced at that moment. Even with Fei's excellent memory, there were limits to how much detail she could recall. Once she ran out of information to share, Wei Weii nodded thoughtfully and replayed the sequence of events in his mind. After piecing everything together, his initially disappointed heart started pounding with excitement again. Suppressing the joy threatening to break through his composure, he stared blankly at Fei for a moment before suddenly raising his hand and slapping himself across the face. "What's wrong with you?" Fei jumped in surprise. "Fei." Wei Wei's gaze softened as he spoke gently. "Have I ever told you that you're a goddess?" Fei quickly shook her head. Wei Weii grasped her hands excitedly and said earnestly, "Well, you are now." Meanwhile, Wong Mo sat in a bar, rubbing his still aching back while muttering to himself, "What rotten luck. It's so rare to meet such a pretty girl. Who would have thought she'd be so wary? And on top of that, her skills are ridiculously good." Just thinking about how he had been thrown onto the ground in front of so many people made him feel utterly humiliated. As the bar owner and someone admired by countless infatuated young women, Wong Mo had always prided himself on being elegant and composed. "It's a shame I didn't manage to rest my hand on her shoulder. If I had succeeded, I wouldn't be drinking alone right now." Reflecting on how perfectly she fit his criteria yet slipped through his fingers filled him with regret. Despite possessing extraordinary talents himself, Wong Mo's abilities required certain conditions to activate. For example, he needed to breach someone's personal space through flirtatious or provocative gestures without triggering their defenses first. To him, this process carried an air of elegance, a ritualistic quality. Of course, success depended on actually making contact. Getting thrown over someone's shoulder halfway through clearly didn't count. Given how alert she was and considering the public setting, he couldn't resort to more forceful methods either. Perhaps he needed more practice. After downing his drink in one gulp, Wong Mo headed into a private room within the bar. The walls were lined with large mirrors reflecting every angle of his appearance. In one corner stood several mannequins posed in various positions, some holding handbags with hands clasped together, others mimicking pedestrians or seated figures. The room suddenly felt lively despite being filled only with lifeless props. Wong Mo removed his hat and hung it on a rack before slowing his pace and walking forward gracefully. "Nope, too effeminate." He critiqued himself in the mirror before stepping back to adjust his posture and trying again. "Too fast? Too stiff, it'll make people wary." Over and over again, Wong Mo practiced walking while tweaking every detail of his movements. Even something as simple as taking a few steps became an exercise repeated countless times. Next came interacting with one of the mannequins, a shy-looking figure holding a handbag that resembled the posture of the girl on her electric scooter earlier. With restrained yet deliberate steps, Wong Mo approached the mannequin. He flashed a slightly bashful yet undeniably handsome smile before casually extending his hand toward its shoulder as if by accident but oh so naturally. His body turned fluidly into position until they stood face to face within 20 centimeters of each other, a calculated distance designed to create subtle tension between intrusion and intimacy. In that instant, the abruptness of resting his hand on her shoulder, the pressure from leaning closer, the impact of seeing his face up close, all these elements had to harmonize perfectly within mere moments. Through relentless practice and fine-tuning each gesture down to its subtlest nuance, Wong Mo's movements grew increasingly polished, oozing charm with every action. Though blessed by fortune himself, being confined within this city for so long had dulled some of Wong Mo's edge or perhaps left him jaded. But no matter, his time was nearly up. Once he completed feeding that thing, freedom awaited him at last. They say powerful individuals like me can even own estates outside city limits with servants at their beck and call. Perhaps such a life isn't far off for me either. Brimming with anticipation for what lay ahead, as night fell over Scrap Iron City, stepping out onto brightly lit streets after hours spent honing his craft, Wong Mo exuded renewed confidence. Donning his black hat once more while spritzing himself lightly with custom-blended cologne, he walked elegantly into bustling nightlife scenes brimming with opportunity. Spotting a waitress carrying drinks nearby, Wong Mo turned toward her with an easy smile. Caught off guard by his gaze alone, the waitress froze mid-step as if forgetting what she was about to say, her eyes locked onto nothing but that smile. Gliding closer effortlessly, Wong Mo picked up one of her glasses while resting another hand gently upon her shoulder. The waitress trembled slightly under his touch, sliding down toward her abdomen briefly before withdrawing discreetly. Wong Mo checked whether everything went smoothly before flashing another satisfied grin. It felt smooth. When he walked onto the street, gazing at the brightly lit city outside, he felt like the king of life. In this world, with so many people striving and struggling, how many of them were doing so just to have a woman stay by their side? As he walked down the street, how many women were there that men could only dream of but could never touch? But for him, none of this was a problem. He was a predator, and in this city, everywhere was his hunting ground. Just as he was indulging in these thoughts, he suddenly froze slightly and noticed a man standing across the street. The man leaned against an old, battered jeep, holding a pancake roll in his hand, eating while smiling at him. Wong Mo suddenly felt a little uncomfortable. Focusing his gaze, he waited for the traffic on the street to pass, but when it did, both the man and the vehicle had vanished without a trace. What the hell? Sequence 8, Love Demon. In a corner, Wei Weii suppressed the faint excitement in his heart and rubbed his face hard to confirm two things. First, this was indeed a wild transcendent. Second, all that talk about Yuan Guizhi and some intelligence department goddess was nonsense. Fei was truly divine. From now on, anyone who dared to say Fei was half-baked would get slapped. That's exactly why he had slapped himself earlier. But stepping back to analyze it, Fei accidentally noticed that the tattoo did indeed differ significantly from the blood-flesh rose he had been searching for. If such a pattern appeared on an ordinary person, it would basically have no investigative value. Yet coincidentally, it appeared on a love demon transcendent. Now that makes things interesting. Was it really a coincidence or were there other factors at play? He pressed his wildly beating heart and quietly followed along. He needed to have a proper talk with him. But with the current evidence and speculation, it wasn't enough for him to have an open-hearted conversation about secrets with him just yet. He needed an opportunity. The Foundation had strict regulations regarding its investigators' behavior. Wild demon ability users living within the spiritual barrier were allowed as long as they abided by laws and regulations. Investigators were prohibited from abusing their authority to harass or oppress them. If the Foundation or local official organizations received related reports, inspectors would form an investigation team to look into the matter. This rule had been established after the Second Secret War to protect disbanded church personnel and neutral wild transcendents. When teaching this lesson, the instructor had knocked on the blackboard. Bonus question. It's obvious this rule is telling us we must never give them an opportunity to report us. We are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day this week. Wong Mo furrowed his brows, feeling a deep sense of unease. However, he quickly adjusted his mood, hailed a taxi, and headed toward his destination. Even though he owned a bar himself and would soon gain the freedom to leave Scrap Iron City and establish himself elsewhere after completing this task, he decided to visit another bar tonight out of respect for his regular patrons. As for the man he had encountered at the bar entrance earlier, Wong Mo didn't dwell on it too much. Perhaps it was just a trick of the mind? Even if it wasn't, he had lived as an ordinary person for so many years no one could interfere with him now. Besides, he had been preparing for this day for a long time. Taking a taxi to a newly opened bar, Wong Mo entered and was greeted by the sight of various beautiful women. His mood instantly lifted. Yet, instead of acting immediately, he ordered a cocktail and sat at the bar, slowly scanning the room for his prey. Occasionally, admiring glances were cast in his direction, but Wong Mo ignored them. Among these admirers were women who fit his preferences, but Wong Mo adhered to a different set of criteria when selecting his targets. What a pity. The girl on the pink electric scooter he had encountered earlier at the bar entrance was truly exceptional. If he could offer her up, that one would undoubtedly be pleased. Perhaps there would still be an opportunity later? After all, before leaving, she had stared at him for quite some time and even taken his business card. Who knows, she might contact him. If she did so before he was fully prepared, she could be offered up as a sacrifice. If it happened afterward, well, maybe he could keep her for himself? Indulging in these delightful fantasies, Wong Mo's spirits soared, reigniting his enthusiasm for tonight's hunt. He carefully searched for his ideal target amidst the colorful lights of the bar. Too plain? No. Too old? No. Overly made up? Also no. Neither promiscuity nor excessive desire made someone suitable as an offering. It was amusing in its own way. Apart from those rare individuals blessed from birth by supernatural forces, most people only attracted attention from higher powers due to their intense desires in certain aspects of life, desires strong enough to draw notice from the unknown. Yet once someone acquired such gifts, they paradoxically preferred pure and untainted sacrifices when making offerings. Patiently and elegantly, Wong Mo continued his search without noticing that someone was sitting not far behind him in the shadows, a figure completely obscured except for one hand slowly reaching out to pick up a potato chip. In the darkness came a faint crunch. Wong Mo found his target. She was sitting by the window with an innocent look in her eyes. She had ordered a non-alcoholic Long Island iced tea and was curiously yet timidly observing the lively crowd around her. Hello. Wong Mo raised his glass gracefully as he approached her with a smile and greeted her softly. Ah. The girl froze momentarily, clearly inexperienced in such situations, and appeared flustered. May I sit here? Wong Mo's voice carried a magnetic charm perfectly suited to the quiet bar atmosphere. Well, I don't think that's appropriate. The girl hesitated nervously and instinctively wanted to refuse. At that moment, Wong Mo casually raised his hand and gently placed it on her head in a seemingly affectionate gesture. He even gave her hair a light ruffle. The girl initially recoiled as if to dodge, but suddenly felt that this action seemed natural, especially after his hand touched her head. Something strange began to stir within her. Sure. She smiled up at Wong Mo, feeling inexplicably drawn to him. Wong Mo sat down with a smile and asked, Are you alone? No, I'm waiting for a friend. In that case, could you ask your friend not to come? As Wong Mo said this, he lightly held her hand and traced his finger across the back of it. The girl's pupils seemed to dilate slightly, a sign of extreme pleasure. After a brief moment of confusion, she suddenly replied cheerfully, Sure, I didn't really want her to show up tonight anyway. Wong Mo smiled inwardly. Those who prioritize love over friendship, you deserve to be marked by love itself. In the distant corner shrouded in shadows, another person smiled too, their eyes gleaming brightly. When Wong Mo extended his hand earlier, he had caught sight of the rose tattoo on his wrist. It really did look familiar. Wong Mo chatted happily with the girl. Within 2 minutes, they were conversing like old friends who had known each other forever. A strange feeling began to grow within her, a mixture of attraction and trust that gradually eroded any lingering resistance she might have had. Under Wong Mo's gentle gaze and the influence of the cocktail he ordered for her, which contained alcohol despite its appearance, whatever resistance remained melted away like snow under summer sunlight. The girl was not good with alcohol. Soon enough, her eyes became misty with intoxication. Wong Mo felt immense satisfaction watching her shy yet nervous glances toward him, her lack of rejection when he moved his chair closer, and finally when she rested her head against his shoulder voluntarily. Eventually, under Wong Mo's warm smile and soothing voice, she agreed without hesitation when he suggested leaving together, even taking it upon herself to settle their bill before calling a taxi. As they rode together in the cab and Wong Mo saw how completely captivated she was by him, her eyes reflecting nothing but his image, his sense of triumph reached its peak. But just as he basked in this euphoria while gazing into her eyes, something stirred within him again, a sudden jolt of unease. He turned sharply toward the car window only to glimpse what appeared to be a man standing near an electric pole outside, smoking casually, but upon closer inspection, there was nothing there anymore. Who? Maybe I've just been playing this ordinary role for too long, it's making me paranoid, Wong Mo muttered under his breath before turning back toward the girl beside him, whose delicate features instantly lifted his spirits again. He playfully pinched her nose lightly before leading her back home, where everything had already been meticulously prepared. Candles flickered softly amidst scattered rose petals, red wine sat ready alongside heart-shaped cherry cakes, deep-colored silk drapes adorned every corner, intoxicating fragrances filled every breath, all creating an atmosphere both mysterious yet irresistibly alluring. Standing amidst this carefully crafted scene surrounded by candles' glow stood Wong Mo himself, reaching out toward her like some enigmatic deity cloaked in elegance. Summoning all courage born from chasing ultimate happiness itself, the girl stepped forward into that circle of light. Do you love me? Wong Mo asked softly with magnetic charm laced through every syllable as he gazed deeply into her eyes. The girl closed hers briefly before nodding gently in response. A cold smile crept across Wong Mo's face as he whispered, Then are you willing to offer yourself up to me? Blushing deeply yet utterly entranced, the girl nodded shyly once more. Say it out loud. I'm willing. Good. In that moment came an icy sensation around her neck, accompanied by faint metallic clicks echoing ominously through candlelit silence. She opened wide, startled eyes, only now realizing what had happened, catching sight through nearby mirrors reflecting back at herself wearing a black leather collar studded with iron spikes around her neck. Before she could comprehend, further horror unfolding ahead. The room darkened further, revealing behind drawn curtains 6 naked girls kneeling silently inside glass walls, all bound identically, wearing similar collars. The girl was terrified by the horrifying scene before her. She wanted to scream but found she couldn't make any sound at all. Not only her voice, but even her body seemed to have lost all control. Go on in. There's a place for you in there. Wong Mo smiled, his expression gradually turning cold and sinister, like a triumphant hunter reveling in his success. This batch of sacrifices was almost complete. His mood soared to its peak as he prepared to lead the girl toward her final destination. But just as he turned back around, a sudden and intense sense of foreboding struck him. He whipped his head around sharply and saw, outside the floor-to-ceiling window, someone pressed tightly against the glass. The person's face was filled with an expression of pure joy, far happier than him. Happy reading? Please give the novel a rating and a review on underscore 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 underscore. What the hell? The sudden face outside the window jolted Wong Mo out of his triumphant joy, just as his hunt was about to succeed. It was as if a thunderclap had struck at the climax of a performance. His hair stood on end, and he stumbled backward in shock. The next moment, with a loud bang, the floor-to-ceiling window shattered into pieces, scattering shards of glass everywhere. A black figure, cloaked in an aura of hostility, stormed into the room. Brother, have you considered turning yourself in? The man wore an exaggerated grin, but his words were calm and gentle as he strode forward confidently. An official transcendent. Wong Mo couldn't process what he was hearing. Overwhelmed by terror, he instinctively retreated. The sudden shock left him with no intention of fighting back or even thinking about how this man had tracked him down. After all, he had just used the bathing girl to survey his surroundings moments ago. Without hesitation, Wong Mo turned and bolted toward the door. He barked sharply at the girl standing dazedly among the candles. Stop him. The girl, her eyes filled with infatuation, turned without hesitation. The black collar around her neck seeped dark energy into her skin. Though her heart was gripped with fear, her body moved against her will, unleashing strength and speed far beyond what she should have been capable of. Not just her, even the girls behind the glass wall suddenly became alert and threw themselves against the glass in an attempt to break free. However, they merely bounced off and fell back inside. Only the girl outside the glass managed to dash toward Wei Weii with a ferocious and venomous expression on her otherwise delicate face. Slap! Wei Weii raised his hand and delivered a resounding slap that sent her flying into the wall. She hit her head and passed out instantly. Love slave. He glanced at her briefly before continuing forward. He hadn't hit her too hard. People under such influences usually needed a slap like this to snap out of it. Meanwhile, Wong Mo dashed madly toward the door with uncharacteristic desperation. His speed was astonishingly fast for someone like him. However, when he yanked on the door handle, it only opened about 3 centimeters before being stopped by an iron chain tightly wrapped around it from outside. It had been perfectly fine when he entered earlier. Who would do something so despicable? Confused and panicked, Wong Mo almost cried out in frustration. You didn't think I'd be so amateurish as to leave the door unlocked, did you? Footsteps echoed leisurely from the living room as Wei Weii strolled toward the hallway leading to the door. He seemed relaxed, even whistling softly. Despair washed over Wong Mo as he let go of the door handle. Gritting his teeth, he smashed through a thin panel on the shoe cabinet beside him and retrieved a compact submachine gun wrapped in bandages from within. Quickly mounting it on his shoulder, he pressed his back tightly against the door frame and aimed down the narrow hallway no more than 2 meters wide, waiting for those approaching footsteps. Rat-a-tat-tat. As soon as a shadow appeared in his line of sight, Wong Mo pulled the trigger without hesitation. Bullets sprayed wildly, gunpowder filled the air with its acrid smell, and the powerful recoil numbed Wong Mo's shoulder despite his tight grip on the weapon. He wasn't skilled with firearms, it wasn't his forte. But knowing that his system lacked strong offensive capabilities in its early stages, he had hidden weapons throughout this room as a precautionary measure. Until now, he had never imagined actually needing to use them. After emptying an entire clip of bullets downrange, Wong Mo released his grip on the trigger and squinted through dissipating smoke to see if he had hit anything. Was it dead? He wondered, but as visibility cleared, there was nothing in front of him. No one. A sense of dread crept over him as he instinctively looked up, and there it was, a black figure hanging upside down from above with a grin plastered across its face. Wong Mo's heart nearly stopped as he scrambled to aim upward, but before he could react further, a fist came crashing down onto his head. Bang! His head snapped sideways from the impact before a hand grabbed him by the collar and slammed him against one wall, then another, like a ragdoll being tossed around mercilessly. His body felt like it was falling apart. Every bone seemed ready to shatter under this assault. Through blurred vision filled with pain-induced tears, Wong Mo saw a hand wrap around his throat while that grinning face leaned closer. What a pity. You resisted. This must be some misunderstanding. Wong Mo stammered through clenched teeth despite being overwhelmed by fear and pain. Forcing himself to smile despite his swollen face, he croaked, "Let me explain." Even amidst excruciating agony, Wong Mo tried desperately to maintain an air of confidence and composure, a hallmark trait of those aligned with love demon systems. Affinity. Every demonic system possesses its own unique attribute. The researchers over at Vanguard Laboratory refer to it as a buff. The attribute of the love demon is affinity. Now, as Wong Mo forced a smile despite suppressing his inner panic, Wei Wei's impression of him improved significantly. If they were mere strangers meeting by chance and Wei Wei only saw that smile, he would feel an inexplicable sense of goodwill and an urge to get to know him. Even if they were in a tense standoff, that smile would subconsciously ease the tension. You've got to be kidding me, Wei Wei said, his tone seemingly much calmer now as he chuckled. You've lured people in, and then you turn it into this mess. Wong Mo grew increasingly composed, forcing his swollen eyes open as he replied, life always needs a bit of fun, doesn't it? He acted as though he were casually chatting with Wei Weii while slowly raising his hand to place it on Wei Wei's shoulder. The movement was subtle and didn't seem out of place at all. The hand that oversteps. If this action succeeded, the other party would find it difficult to refuse any requests Wong Mo made in the short term. However, this ability typically worked better on the opposite sex or individuals whose sexual orientation aligned with Wong Mo's. Occasionally, it could also affect individuals of the same gender. The downside was that after using this ability, if one's willpower was stronger than the target's, the target might experience a shift in sexual orientation and become inexplicably drawn to Wong Mo. Conversely, if the target's willpower was stronger, Wong Mo's own orientation could be distorted toward them. Outwardly calm, Wong Mo's heart was pounding furiously. He used his affinity attribute to weaken Wei Wei's vigilance and hostility. Seizing the moment, he aimed for Wei Wei's shoulder. This entire sequence of actions was his form of attack. The early stages of the love demon sequence severely lacked effective offensive methods. And then, bang! Without any warning, a sudden gunshot rang out. Intense pain tore through his chest and abdomen. The agony of shredded flesh and ruptured organs flooded Wong Mo's mind like a tidal wave. A gaping hole had been blasted into his stomach. Yet he wasn't dead, not yet. Even though the physical resilience of love demons in their early stages ranked among the bottom 3 within the 12 demon systems. Back in training camp, Wei Weii said with a grin as he crouched beside Wong Mo, someone once told me that I'm a natural counter to love demons. He laughed lightly and added, I don't know why either, but the person who said that was much stronger than you. So stop making such futile attempts at resistance. I've been following you all day. I know you're not just hunting prey or spreading some doctrine. So tell me, what is your goal? Who are your accomplices? Wei Weii spoke slowly while lifting Wong Mo's wrist, the one adorned with a rose tattoo, and smiled. Most importantly, where did this tattoo come from? In the near gentle tone of his questioning voice, Wong Mo broke out into cold sweat from the excruciating pain racking his body. His entire frame convulsed uncontrollably. But when he heard Wei Wei's question, his heart suddenly froze for an instant. Gritting his teeth fiercely, he flipped his hand over and grabbed hold of Wei Wei's wrist. Click. It was as if an invisible sound echoed, a noise akin to handcuffs snapping shut. Even visible to the naked eye, a faintly discernible shackle manifested between their hands, a chain with 2 rings instantly locked onto both their wrists. Love Demon second stage ability, Love Shackles. Through physical contact, this ability forcibly establishes a contractual relationship with the target. Until the contract is broken, the other party cannot harm Wong Mo without suffering equivalent damage themselves. It was like love, mutual destruction through affection and enmity intertwined. Only then did Wong Mo's body relax slightly. Clenching his teeth tightly, he let out a low growl, don't think you can get anything out of me. Tisk. Wei Weii glanced at their shackled wrists without losing his smile. He nodded in satisfaction and said, really stubborn ones like you? You. A sudden sense of foreboding surged within Wong Mo's heart, a deep unease filled with suspicion. But before he could react further, Wei Weii had already holstered his gun. Leaning down, he picked up Wong Mo and brought him into the living room. There, he pulled down the curtains and used them to tie Wong Mo up before suspending him from the chandelier in the center of the room. Then he walked into the kitchen. Moments later, he returned with salt, chili oil, a saw, a full set of kitchen knives, an egg beater all neatly arranged on the coffee table, and even donned a cooking apron over himself. Back during training camp, his scores in interrogation techniques were exceptionally high, nearly record-breaking. What is he doing? Watching Wei Wei's actions filled Wong Mo with both shock and terror. He knew that any attempt by Wei Weii to harm him would result in mutual damage. Bang! Before he could finish that thought, Wei Weii suddenly punched him squarely in his already torn chest wound. The brutal strike caused Wong Mo to feel his flesh tearing apart anew, his bloodied wound compressed and mangled under renewed destruction. The pain nearly sent him into unconsciousness. At that same moment, Wei Weii felt an intense jolt in his own chest and abdomen, so severe that sweat appeared on his forehead. Yet even so, he grinned widely as he reached for a kitchen knife on the table. After some thought, he set it down and picked up the egg beater instead. Finally hesitating once more, he grabbed a lit candle from nearby on the floor. The flickering flame illuminated his smiling face as he approached Wong Mo, who was struggling violently with slow yet deliberate steps. What are you doing? What are you doing? Be good, don't struggle, it'll be fun. I promise. Outside by the glass window stood several girls who had fallen silent. Their vacant eyes stared blankly at everything unfolding before them as though they couldn't comprehend any of it at all. Happy reading? Our demon worshippers these days really this useless. They can't even last half an hour before giving up. Wei Weii sat on the clean floor, disinterestedly lighting a cigarette. In front of him, the love demon worshipper hung motionless from the chandelier. His body, well, let's just say there were still a few parts that could be recognized as human. And besides, Wei Weii hadn't gone that hard on him, he was still alive. A mysterious organization. 7 high-quality sacrifices. Sitting across from him, Wei Weii smoked while organizing the information he had extracted during the interrogation. The love demon system transcendent in front of him had been recruited as an outer member of a mysterious organization 3 years ago. However, this organization was peculiar. It wasn't active and hadn't assigned him any tasks that would expose his identity. On the contrary, they had even eliminated a few members who couldn't control their desires and excessively used their demonic powers to satisfy themselves. His only responsibility was to begin breeding when given instructions. 20 days ago, he finally received an order. Within 1 month, he was to regularly deliver sacrifices. He had already delivered 2 batches before this, mostly homeless or streetwalkers because they were less likely to attract attention. However, his superiors had expressed dissatisfaction and imposed stricter standards for this final batch of sacrifices, 10 pure souls. Since this was the last task he needed to complete, he didn't refuse. I couldn't refuse. You have no idea how mysterious and powerful our leader is. I don't believe there's anyone in this world as powerful as him. Just sitting quietly in front of me, he made me lose the courage to even lift my head. Even stealing a glance at him through a mirror almost burned out my eyes with an invisible force. I can only obey everything he says. He promised me freedom and blessings as long as I upheld our agreement. This love demon system transcendent didn't even believe that man was human. He thought he was either a demon or God. That was why he had been so desperate to keep this secret at all costs. Of course, Wei Weii quickly found a way to persuade him otherwise. It was obvious that compared to the God who appeared before him 3 years ago, he was far more terrified of the handsome law enforcement officer standing before him now. Wei Weii believed the man wasn't lying, but he didn't particularly care about most of what he said. He only cared about one thing. Where did you get that blood flesh rose tattoo on your wrist? Blood flesh rose. I don't know what a blood flesh rose is, but I've seen similar patterns on the wrists of the stewards. This love demon transcendent answered while on the verge of death. Summoning all his strength, he asked weakly, I don't even know if the patterns on their wrists are what you're looking for, but did you find me because of this tattoo? But didn't you notice something? This thing on my wrist, it's just a damn rose. Wei Weii was stunned for a moment. He thought back to Purify's unreliable efforts. He'd asked her to find a rose-like tattoo and she'd found this. A rose instead of a blood flesh rose? She couldn't tell the difference between 2 flowers? Lost in thought, Wei Weii slapped himself in frustration. He'd let it get to his head and started doubting Purify's goddess-like abilities. Who? Unpolluted, pure sacrifices. Having gotten the answers he wanted, Wei Weii slowly stood up and surveyed the room filled with 7 girls wearing black collars around their necks. The man before him belonged to the love demon system and thus had an exceptionally keen intuition in this area. Sacrifices were selected based on 2 criteria: the quantity of sacrifices, the quality of sacrifices. Quality referred not only to whether the sacrifices met specific standards but also to their purity. This purity indicated how free from inner turmoil or resistance they were during the sacrificial process. The more pain and struggle within their hearts when sacrificed, the more impurities and malice would taint the results. Such sacrifices were undesirable for those receiving them. The calmer and purer a sacrifice's heart was, the higher its quality would be during the ritual. This explained why many evil texts often targeted infants or children as ideal sacrifices. They were seen as lambs. The organization's symbol is something like this rose pattern. Wei Weii recalled his photos, childish doodles with twisted designs resembling roses, and realized Wong Mo no longer had enough energy to distinguish such details anyway. He didn't even need to take out his photos for confirmation. Instead, his thoughts raced. Is this organization somehow related to the blood flesh rose I'm searching for? What exactly are they doing with so many sacrifices? Closing his eyes briefly before reopening them with newfound determination and barely concealed excitement, Wei Weii resolved, whatever it takes, I have to see this for myself. After all, this was the closest lead he'd ever gotten on anything related to the blood flesh rose. Though excitement bubbled within him, it also made him calmer than ever. Purify, come immediately to Hua Apartments Building 4 Unit 3 Room 1805. The door is chained shut, bring bolt cutters. There are 7 victims here under some form of restriction from the love demon system. The suspect has been neutralized after resisting arrest. 1 victim has a large bump on her head that's from the suspect. There's also at least 1 demon forbidden object in here, a girl bathing in a tub covered by black cloth. Don't look at her, she's naked and very shy. Carefully editing his message, Wei Weii sent it off to Purify for cleanup assistance. He then pulled out his black pistol and ejected its loaded bullet before replacing it with another round. Greenhead Ghost, a specialized high-energy bullet from the Hunter series designed specifically for demons. Its magnetized tip disrupted demonic magnetic fields effectively but wasn't particularly useful against living transcendents. It was meant for corrupted monsters devoid of reason. I've told you everything. Wong Mo seemed aware of what was coming as he weakly pleaded, spare me. Wei Weii stared at him coldly before breaking into a smile, don't be ridiculous. Your talking doesn't count as your contribution anyway. Bang! As he spoke, Wei Weii fired directly into Wong Mo's chest. Electric currents coursed through Wong Mo's body, burning his skin black until none of his former elegance remained, only charred remains devoid of life. This way, there'd be no chance for Wong Mo to report anything about him later. More importantly, it meant no one would see Wong Mo's tortured injuries anymore, especially not Purify. Between leaving behind either a tortured victim or a neatly executed corpse, Wei Weii chose what would look better for Purify's sake. It was an act of respect for his goddess. With renewed excitement coursing through him, Wei Weii rummaged through Wong Mo's belongings until he found a black robe and white mask as described earlier. Trying them on happily while admiring himself in front of a mirror briefly, he then grabbed a car key wrapped in white tape from Wong Mo's desk drawer. Whistling softly, he walked toward the shattered floor-to-ceiling window. Bloodflesh rose. At the same time, on the outskirts of Scrap Iron City, in a slum where the radiation from the spiritual barrier was at its weakest, Captain Weang, with a cigar in his mouth and an expressionless face, walked into a dimly lit mahjong parlor with low-hanging curtains. Behind him, Uncle Yuan carried a hunting rifle on his back, his eyes scanning their surroundings warily. The two of them walked straight through the smoke-filled hall. Captain Weang resisted the urge to sit down and play a couple of hands, heading toward a small door next to an altar for the god of wealth at the end of the room. He raised his hand and knocked lightly a few times. The small door opened slightly, revealing a small window. A hand extended from inside, shaking up and down. "What do you want?" Captain Weang was slightly taken aback and barked angrily, "Asking for money up front? That wasn't the rule before." A woman's voice called out from inside, "There wasn't a rule before. But after you skipped out on your tab last time, there is now." "What do you mean, skipped out?" Captain Weang shot back. "I was just 2 days late." The voice inside responded, "And today?" Captain Weang paused, then muttered, "Make that another 2 days." The person inside said nothing but stubbornly kept their hand extended, shaking it insistently without withdrawing. Captain Weang helplessly turned to glance at Uncle Yuan. Uncle Yuan sucked in a sharp breath and took a step back. "Captain, you can't keep dragging me into your mess." Captain Weang said seriously, "This is for the safety of all of Scrap Iron City." Uncle Yuan took another sharp breath but reluctantly pulled out a roll of cash from his inner pocket. Handing it over, he hesitated for a moment before adding, "I'm going to write this off with Lucky Sister later for reimbursement. Don't you dare deny it when the time comes." "Nonsense. When have I ever done such a thing?" Captain Weang took the cash. Behind him, Uncle Yuan muttered quietly, 2 days ago. Finally, the small door opened. A woman wearing a short white skirt and draped in fur swayed her hips as she walked out while counting the money. Captain Weang admired her figure for a moment before shifting his gaze forward. There, by a table surrounded by colorful lights, sat an old woman covered in black grime. Her body was adorned with decorations made of animal bones and feathers. "Hello there, elder sister." Captain Weang quickly moved his gaze away from the plump figure's waist and hips. With open arms and an enthusiastic smile, he approached the old woman. The old woman stared at the animal bones on the table before her while pulling out a revolver from under it with her other hand. Without hesitation, she pointed it directly at Captain Weang. Captain Weang didn't even flinch as he allowed the muzzle to press against his chest and still went ahead to give her a firm hug. He even tilted his head to plant a loud kiss on her cheek with an audible smack, laughing as he said, "I missed you so much, my dear elder sister." The old woman silently withdrew her gun and stuffed it back under the table. With a low sigh, she muttered, "Weang, your damned charm. It's truly impossible to resist." Next week we are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day. Please give the novel a rating and a review on https://www.novelupdates.com/series/Scarlet-Descent. It will help the website and also help people find this novel. Wei Weii arrived at the parking lot beneath the building and found Wong Mo's dedicated cargo truck, which he used for transporting goods. He unlocked it with the key and eagerly drove toward the location Wong Mo had disclosed. The truck's cargo hold was filled with empty cages, clanging noisily as they rattled around. To make it look more convincing, Wei Weii stopped by an unattended construction site and tossed a few rocks into the cages. Now the noise was gone, and everything seemed much more authentic. Work requires this level of meticulousness and dedication. He then drove straight along the route Wong Mo had provided, heading eastward through the city. One must commend the Love Demon system friend. His directions were remarkably detailed. Driving further and further away from the city center, Wei Weii eventually reached the outskirts of an upscale villa district in the eastern part of the city. Following Wong Mo's instructions, he circled a small ring road 3 times with his lights off before finally turning inward and arriving at an imposing villa. Wei Weii turned off the engine, letting the truck sink into darkness. Quietly, he slipped out of the vehicle and concealed himself in the shadows nearby. Scaling a nearby tall building, he climbed to its rooftop and hung from its eaves, using their shadow to obscure his figure while silently observing any movement near the truck below. According to Wong Mo, every time he came here, he would park by this abandoned villa. After turning off the engine and lights, someone would come to contact him within 5 minutes. All Wong Mo needed to do was hand over the keys and wait quietly. 10 minutes later, the truck would return. The steward who contacted him never showed their face, they would only follow up afterward to evaluate his performance. In essence, Wong Mo knew only where to unload but not where his goods were taken to. Another villa? An underground lair? A demonic space? It could be anything. However, Wei Weii was certain that Scrap Iron City couldn't possibly contain such a large folded space. Even at its edge, Scrap Iron City lay within the coverage of a spiritual barrier. The Kwafa Group, under recommendations from the Foundation, had been implementing the spiritual barrier plan for over 20 years. It had long since become society's greatest defense against demonic power erosion. The Wall of Spirit. The Canopy of Will. Within its coverage area, large demonic force fields couldn't exist, nor could a folded space capable of concealing an entire villa go undetected. Similarly, high-level transcendence would find it difficult to infiltrate without being noticed unless employing special means. Corrupted monster hordes would also be repelled by its power. Even Wei Weii admitted that the spiritual barrier plan was one of humanity's greatest creations under Foundation oversight, the other being the training camp plan. It seemed like less than 5 minutes had passed when Wei Weii noticed two figures approaching in the darkness. They appeared to be holding submachine guns and moved with impressive stealth as they neared the truck. One of them whispered, "Password. Today's New Year." Wei Weii thought excitedly but kept his mouth shut. Seeing no response from inside the truck, one of them grew impatient and peeked into its cargo hold only to be startled by what they saw. Signaling to his partner, they quickly opened the back doors of the truck. Empty iron cages and scattered rocks greeted their eyes. "Something's wrong." They exchanged hushed words before splitting up in two directions. One raised their gun cautiously while scanning their surroundings. Hanging beneath the eaves in his black robe that blended seamlessly with nightfall, Wei Weii remained undetectable. His gaze followed one figure as they moved northward down a narrow path. Squinting slightly, he silently flipped onto the rooftop above him and began tailing them with light footsteps. Suppressing his excitement momentarily, red blood vessels appeared in his eyes as everything in his vision became sharper, like seeing through darkness tinged with crimson hues. Slaughter intuition. Wei Weii knew that given how cautious these individuals were about even their parking spot, their base must be well hidden and possibly equipped with methods for erasing evidence quickly. Finding their location as swiftly as possible was paramount. The closer he got, the sharper his intuition became, like reaching a crescendo during applause at an exciting performance. About 30 seconds later, Wei Weii locked onto a group of villas ahead. Through blood-tinged vision, he focused on one particular villa with tall white walls adorned with numerous surveillance cameras covering every angle outside its perimeter. Stopping in his tracks with a grin forming on his lips. The surveillance cameras on those high walls left almost no blind spots, but if he activated demonic powers directly to dash past them, the cameras would distort due to interference from demonic energy, but doing so would also alert those inside that someone had breached their perimeter. Instead, taking a deep breath, Wei Weii crouched low, aimed carefully, and whispered, "Turn away." A barely perceptible ripple spread out as two cameras facing him seemed to shudder in fear before subtly tilting away like shy girls averting their gazes. With just a slight adjustment in angle, an unmonitored gap appeared along this wall, barely noticeable even on surveillance monitors inside. Seizing this opportunity swiftly yet silently, Wei Weii darted forward, scaled the high wall, and perched between two cameras now tilted awkwardly away from him like embarrassed children avoiding eye contact. Peering into the villa grounds below, his heart surged with excitement as goosebumps prickled across his skin. The concentrated demonic energy emanating from within couldn't be entirely hidden despite clever concealment techniques. Taking another deep breath, he leaped down into its courtyard, hands casually tucked into pockets while whistling softly, a leisurely stroll through enemy territory. Turning a corner suddenly brought him face to face with three men dressed in black robes smoking beneath cypress trees, their wide sleeves revealing vivid rose tattoos on their arms. Bloodflesh roses. Staring harder confirmed it, these tattoos matched perfectly with those worn by members of that demon family from his past encounters. Happiness overwhelmed him as gratitude toward divine providence nearly brought him to his knees, though he managed not to collapse entirely when one robed man noticed him approaching curiously. Smiling broadly now as he stepped closer, "Give me one." Inside the mahjong parlor, the old woman covered in black grime sighed deeply, her voice low and somber. "Weang, you're the only one who dares to owe me money, but you're also the only one who's willing to hug me so tightly after I've become like this." "What do you mean by like this?" "Don't talk nonsense." Captain Weang put on a serious face and said, "Elder sister, you look even younger than the girls in the red light district." The old woman silently glanced at Captain Weang and said, "I'll take that as a compliment." As she spoke, she rolled her eyes halfway and looked toward the plump woman in the distance. Seeing her make an okay gesture, she knew the payment had been received. Only then did she turn back to Captain Weang with a faint smile and said, "Go ahead, what do you want to know this time?" Captain Weang's expression turned more serious as he lowered his voice, "Is that thing really in Scrap Iron City? I know you can't track its movements either, but you've always been able to notice more clues than the rest of us." The old woman remained silent and didn't answer directly. Instead, she asked in return, "If it is here, what would you do?" "Report it to the higher UPS." Captain Weang immediately replied, "I'm not interested in that thing and haven't considered my previous task as a task for a long time. Whether it's here or not doesn't matter to me. The higher UPS want it, those outside the city want it, that's their business. If things get too chaotic, I'd even be willing to lead my team out of here and avoid getting caught up in this mess." The old woman narrowed her eyes slightly and gave Captain Weang a long look. At this moment, Captain Weang's face showed no trace of his usual playful demeanor, it was completely open and honest. "That's something said to be capable of killing gods." The old woman glanced at Uncle Yuan beside him and said slowly, "It doesn't surprise me that you think this way. But does everyone around you think the same?" "They do." Captain Weang replied firmly, "I'm very sure." "Haha." The old woman raised her head to look at Captain Weang, a mysterious smile slowly spreading across her face. Her voice suddenly dropped into a deep tone, "If you're so willing to give it up, Then why did you kill all the combat teams sent by the wandering sect during that memory search incident? And even fire 21 bullets into one of their nuns? Hearing this, Captain Weang froze for a moment before his expression suddenly changed drastically. Underscore 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 underscore. This was a small monastery hidden within the villa district. Taking the opportunity while smoking, Wei Weii confirmed the nature of this place. At the same time, he vaguely guessed where the missing life demons from Scrap Iron City had gone. At least within this small monastery, he could sense over a dozen individuals from the life demon system. Aside from the one who kindly shared a cigarette with him, there were others passing by, each exuding a strong vitality. It was a stark contrast, as if comparing someone who exercises daily, eats nutritious meals, and goes to bed early with someone who stays up all night and barely eats once a day. They wore uniform black robes and appeared to live an ascetic lifestyle. This was entirely inconsistent with the typical habits of life demons. Due to their excessive vitality, life demons generally led hedonistic and depraved lives. The people in that run-down bar from before were much more in line with their usual demeanor. Yet here, these individuals seemed content just gathering in the courtyard for a smoke. This miserable life, it's almost over, isn't it? The black-robed individuals seemed relaxed. Initially wary of Wei Wei's suspicious presence in the monastery, their concerns dissipated when he asked for a cigarette. Smokers are never bad people. Still, they couldn't help but pity Wei Weii. Just how desperate was this guy for a smoke? When handing him a cigarette, they noticed his hands trembling slightly. As they smoked together, one of them glanced at Wei Weii and asked, "Brother, which area are you responsible for? You look unfamiliar." Wei Weii withdrew his gaze from observing the surroundings and replied, "I'm an investigator from the Foundation, here to inspect your operations." The group burst into laughter at his words. Wei Weii laughed along with them before casually adding, "You've brought in quite a few people recently. Where did they go?" The smiles on the three smokers' faces grew awkward as unease crept in. Following their instinctive glances toward a black building across the courtyard, Wei Weii chuckled. "So that's where they are." Their expressions became even more uncertain and embarrassed. Maintaining an even brighter smile than theirs, Wei Weii continued, "So, are they alive or dead now?" This time, none of them could muster a laugh. Just then, a whistle sounded in the distance. The previously quiet monastery erupted with hurried footsteps as shadows darted eastward through the darkness. The smokers around Wei Weii and others nearby immediately turned pale. Forgetting whatever questions they had for him, they hastily extinguished their cigarettes and rushed toward the arched building across the courtyard. To their astonishment, Wei Weii was running even faster than they were, leaving them utterly baffled. Wei Weii was the first to burst through the arched doorway into a spacious yet empty hall. Black-robed figures poured in through other entrances as well. Scanning his surroundings quickly, his gaze landed on rows of empty iron cages stacked against one wall, some partially covered with black cloth while others had open doors revealing nothing inside. A shadow fell across his face. It was clear these cages had been used to imprison something or someone. Suppressing his growing agitation and maintaining composure, he surveyed the hall once more. Apart from those cages, there was nothing else in sight. The real activity must be happening in the inner chamber ahead. He strode toward it but stopped abruptly when someone emerged, a figure clad in ceremonial robes that clearly marked them as higher ranking than the others. The two locked eyes as they stood face to face at the doorway. Wei Weii frowned slightly and reached for the gun at his lower back when suddenly, the robed figure barked, "What are you all waiting for? Get inside quickly." Before Wei Weii could draw his weapon, he noticed a line forming behind him, impatient gazes urging him to move along. Clicking his tongue in annoyance, he led the group past the ceremonial figure into the inner chamber. Moving from the brightly lit hall into the dimly lit inner chamber caused an immediate shift in atmosphere for Wei Weii. Bright electric lights outside gave way to flickering fire pits along the walls inside, a stark transition from light to shadow. The center of this inner chamber had been excavated into a large pit. At its heart stood an intricately carved stone platform entwined with countless chains binding something dark red at its center. It was a massive lump of flesh over 20 meters in diameter with no discernible features like eyes or limbs. No hair or skin, just pulsating dark red flesh that seemed to breathe rhythmically without consciousness. Something this advanced exist here. Wei Weii furrowed his brow slightly as memories of certain life demon system entities surfaced. Shifting his gaze from that grotesque mass of flesh to his surroundings, cold dread crept into his heart. The pit surrounding the stone platform was filled with bones of various shapes and sizes, shredded clothing scattered among them like remnants of discarded meals. Some remains were blackened and shriveled as if drained until only husks remained, but what caught Wei Wei's attention most was atop this pile of carnage, a pair of small white shoes. They were tiny, no larger than size 31 or 32. One stood upright while its partner lay askew. Faint bloodstains marred their pristine white surfaces. Staring at those little shoes, echoes of a girl's scream seemed to pierce through time into his ears. "Brother Wei, they're eating my feet." A phantom cry, whether real or imagined, stabbed sharply into Wei Wei's heart for an instant. "What are you doing?" A push from someone nearby snapped him out of his daze as others hurriedly took positions around the pit's edge. "What's going on here?" Taking a deep breath to steady himself, Wei Weii turned toward one of them with a warm smile, the kind that put people at ease effortlessly. "Haven't you heard? The whistle outside means something's wrong," replied his companion anxiously without suspicion. Guards are investigating now, but once they confirm any danger, we'll need to evacuate immediately no matter what happens. Ensuring this final sacrifice succeeds is our top priority. Nearby, someone muttered under their breath. Who knows where we'll have to go next? Who? Nodding slightly as understanding dawned upon him internally. As chaos swirled around him above ground level, Wei Weii nodded, having already grasped the general situation. As the people around him bustled about, spreading out around the deep pit in the inner hall, he suddenly jumped into the pit. The surrounding onlookers were stunned, some even thinking he had accidentally been pushed in. Wei Weii landed in the pit and began moving slowly among the debris and bones. The faint crunch of delicate bones breaking underfoot resonated with each step. He could feel that most of these bones likely belonged to young girls, perhaps even children. A faint sense of emotion stirred within him. He had found it. So, he had truly found the blood-flesh rose from his dreams. It wasn't just a symbol. Even their actions, their style, their taste, there was no significant difference. They still loved one thing: lambs. Back at the training camp, he had read about such things in forbidden cult texts, how they selected and appreciated their sacrifices. These people had always loved lambs like this, because lambs were inherently pure and didn't know how to resist. Thus, when they chose sacrifices, they always preferred those with a lamb-like quality. Because they didn't resist, lambs made the best sacrifices, didn't they? From the remains of these sacrifices alone, it was clear that this was a large-scale sacrificial site. Moreover, these offerings couldn't have been provided by just that love demon alone. This meant that outside, there were likely many other hunting dogs like that love demon being herded. It fit perfectly with his vision of the blood-flesh rose. Suppressing his inner excitement, Wei Weii walked over to a pair of small white shoes and tied their laces together. He fastened them to his waist, letting them dangle back and forth. This was evidence. Then he raised his head and looked at the circle of people dressed in black robes around him. Their pale faces peeked out from under their hoods. He could feel the helplessness and despair of lambs being thrown into this pit. Slowly, he reached beneath his robe and pulled out a black handgun from its holster. Smiling at them, he said, "Why don't you all go straight to hell?" At the same time, in the underground mahjong parlor, as soon as the old woman spoke, the atmosphere in the room grew oppressively heavy. Whether it was the plump woman counting money or Uncle Gun standing guard with his hunting rifle while glancing around nervously, everyone froze for a moment as chills ran down their spines. They stared at Captain Weang in stunned disbelief. Taking out the entire combat team of the wandering sect wasn't enough. He had gone so far as to leave 21 bullets in one of their nuns. Had he completely lost his mind? Facing their horrified gazes, Captain Weang's pupils seemed to tremble as though experiencing an earthquake. Without needing to think deeply, countless questions flashed through his mind with answers already forming in his eyes. After a long pause, he finally exhaled slowly. His expression was resolute, though his voice sounded hoarse. "Yes." He nodded slowly and said, "I did it. Underscore 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 underscore. Kill him." Wei Wei's words caused a heavy silence to fall over the group of black-robed individuals. Countless suspicious and shocked gazes landed on his face. Among them, 3 people looked especially startled, their expressions gradually turning into fear. At that moment, a figure in ceremonial robes at the back of the group spoke in a low voice. "Or just kill him outright. Everyone else, prepare to evacuate." The surrounding people were stunned, their panic evident as they looked around nervously. Before they could react further, 3 men emerged from a corner of the inner hall, each carrying an M249 light machine gun. Without a word, they aimed their weapons at Wei Weii standing in the pit. The priest didn't even need to give an order. Blazing tongues of fire erupted from the gun barrels immediately. Clatter. 3 streams of bullets crisscrossed toward Wei Wei's position. The air twisted with the heat of the bullets, and the deafening roar of gunfire filled the hall. The flashes from the muzzle lit up the surroundings in bursts, but when the light dimmed for a moment, the pit was empty. Wei Wei's smiling figure had vanished. The next instant, bang, 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 gunshots rang out suddenly, and 4 black-robed figures were struck in the head, their bodies flung backward. "There he is!" Someone shouted immediately upon spotting commotion among the crowd and pinpointing Wei Wei's location. The 3 guards didn't hesitate. They opened fire on the area of disturbance, even though many of their own companions were still there. The Life Demon system's unique traits ensured their remarkable vitality. In situations like this, where both friend and foe could be caught in crossfire, it was considered an acceptable trade-off. Even among the 4 who had been shot in the head and knocked down earlier, 2 of them began trembling and soon got back up. Life Demon's second form ability, damage sharing. Even fatal injuries like headshots could be distributed across all cells in their bodies. For others, such injuries would result in an exploded skull. For them, it was akin to receiving a full-body massage down to the cellular level. The only difference was that this ability required immediate activation upon receiving damage. If their heads were blown apart before they could activate it, death was inevitable. Thus, out of 4 people struck earlier, only 2 survived. Rat-tat-tat. Amidst the sweeping gunfire from afar, Wei Weii darted swiftly through the group of black-robed individuals like a crimson shadow. Around him was a constant spray of torn flesh as bullets ripped through bodies. The black-robed life demons screamed and wailed as they were mercilessly gunned down by their own guards. Wounds appeared on their bodies only to heal almost instantly except for injuries to vital areas that healed more slowly. Even as they cried out in pain, they flailed desperately toward Wei Weii with outstretched hands. Most of them were at life demon first or second stage levels. Wei Weii quickly assessed this while gaining a clearer understanding of his current overtime. Life demons at these stages lacked strong combat capabilities. They were essentially punching bags. Their reflexes and speed showed little improvement compared to ordinary humans. Their enhanced vitality made them slightly stronger than average people due to better physical health and stamina, but that was nothing compared to Wei Wei's Scarlet abilities and his rigorous training at the camp. Excitement surged within him. When it came to killing, his professional skills had always been top-notch, and life demons were his favorite targets. Sturdy, resilient, moving like a blood-red blur amidst flickering flames and chaos. In an instant, he reached one of the guards wielding a machine gun. Blood vessels surged visibly in his eyes as he crouched low and lunged forward, driving his knee into the man's groin. The guard groaned in pain and bent over instinctively. Without hesitation, Wei Weii raised his black short-barreled pistol and fired, bang, blowing a hole through the man's head. The body collapsed as its flesh twitched briefly before succumbing to death. Against second-stage life demons who could share damage across their bodies, shooting them directly in the head wasn't enough to kill them outright. First came a knee strike to distract them with excruciating pain, forcing their attention and energy toward that area instinctively. Then came a well-placed headshot to deliver effective damage instantly. Kicking away the fallen machine gun into the pit below, Wei Weii surged with bloodlust as he crouched low again, hoisting another black-robed individual onto his shoulders before charging toward a second guard like a human battering ram. Bang 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 bang! The second guard opened fire without hesitation, intent on blasting both Wei Weii and his makeshift shield into pieces. The black-robed individual used as a shield was indeed torn apart by bullets exploding into a mist of blood, but Wei Weii had vanished amidst the carnage. The next moment, sensing danger from above, the guard looked up sharply, and there he was, hanging from the ceiling with his pistol aimed squarely at him, instinctively focusing all his energy on protecting his head while raising his weapon. Life demons never feared shootouts. Bang! Wei Weii fired first. A searing bullet tore into the guard's skull before he could react fully. This wasn't just any bullet, it carried eerie blue flames that clung tenaciously to its target upon impact. The flames spread relentlessly across his body while inflicting excruciating pain that pierced through his very soul, shattering nerves completely as he writhed on the ground, screaming uncontrollably. Hunter Series High Energy Bullet Model 2, Green Head Ghost. Designed specifically for combating life demons, it delivered continuous damage over time but came with one drawback: its exorbitant cost. Bang bang bang! Before Wei Weii could finish off this second guard entirely, a third opened fire furiously at him. Aware that eliminating these guards was crucial in such confined quarters, the third guard roared as he unleashed wave after wave of bullets toward where he thought Wei Weii might be lurking. But amidst his rage-filled barrage, there was no sign of that crimson shadow approaching him stealthily. Calming himself slightly while scanning around cautiously, he finally spotted his target, crouched beside one of his burning comrades' corpses with unwavering focus, kneeling precisely while aiming directly at him from across the pit. Panicking slightly, the third guard redirected fire toward this stationary target. Come on, let's see who wins this shootout. Before his bullets reached their mark, a single shot rang out from Wei Wei's position. This time the bullet carried strange crimson patterns etched along its surface. In an instant the third guard's weapon shattered violently as fragments embedded themselves throughout his body. As silence fell over what remained of this blood-soaked hall, the air thickened with metallic tangs mingled with agonized cries echoing faintly amidst scattered survivors. Many black-robed individuals, even those possessing first or second stage life demon powers, were left utterly terrified by this sudden massacre. Desperately scrambling toward exits, they found themselves blocked by yet another barrage of bullets raining down mercilessly. Standing at one doorway with blood dripping from every inch of him was none other than Wei Weii, cradling one of those heavy machine guns now transformed grotesquely by crimson tendrils snaking through its structure. The small white shoes tied to his waist swayed back and forth. Who the hell are you? Amidst the panicked crowd, the priest roared angrily and charged toward Wei Weii, but the chaotic flow of people hindered his movements, making him far less agile even as a third-state life mentor. His combat abilities were no match for the guards wielding heavy firepower. At the door, Wei Weii faced the crowd. He raised his leg high and slowly closed the half-open door with his foot. I'm just a person, that's all. Looking at the terrified faces and black robes before him, his smile grew even gentler. Both of his hands were bleeding, and the blood, along with strands of crimson threads, seeped into the heavy machine gun he held. The weapon's structure began to change gradually. Blood-red patterns emerged, its barrel turned grotesque, and its caliber expanded bit by bit. It was as if a demon had opened its jaws wide. Don't rush. He smiled as he spoke, no need to fight or scramble. You'll all die soon anyway. Thank you. As he finished speaking, terrifying bullet fire suddenly erupted like a demon's roar echoing through the narrow space. Why? In the underground mahjong parlor, everyone's expressions changed upon hearing Captain Weang admit to it. Hadn't the White Ghost Knights maintained a stance of tolerance and reconciliation toward those outside the city ever since entering it? Why had their attitude shifted so drastically this time, issuing such a stern warning in such a forceful manner? Weren't they afraid of provoking the seventh wandering sect leader? Uncle Gun was especially shaken. He began to doubt whether he and his teammates had underestimated Captain Weang all along. He even felt an overwhelming urge to rush back and check their bullet inventory immediately. Why? Facing the old woman's narrowed eyes, Captain Weang suddenly felt a surge of anger rise within him. I'd like to know why too. But before his anger could fully erupt, a woman's soft gasp suddenly echoed through the room, a sound that felt entirely out of place in this solemn and even grim atmosphere. Captain Weang furiously stopped mid-sentence and grabbed his phone. What is it, Fifei? Suddenly enraged and aggrieved, he shouted, I only told you to patrol the streets. We are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day this week. Underscore 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 underscore. Rat tat 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 tat. Severed limbs flew through the air as scarlet bullets tore through the room, weaving grotesque lines of blood. Wei Weii fought his way from the inner hall to the outer hall, his body drenched in splattered blood, his feet treading on writhing chunks of flesh. The heavy machine gun, infused with blood threads, unleashed terrifying firepower. Each bullet ripped through the black-robed figure's flesh and bodies with a destructive force 3 times greater than usual. Faced with such overwhelming firepower, even the formidable vitality of first and second stage life demons was no match. They were nothing more than wheat being harvested. The bullets entwined with blood threads didn't merely strike individuals, they pierced through multiple bodies, creating crisscrossing lines of blood in the confined space, each line carrying an aura of death. Damn it! Damn it! The third stage priest roared in fury as he pushed through the crowd, charging toward Wei Weii. His rage reached its peak, and with a roar, his body began to swell rapidly, tearing apart his black robes. One grotesque arm, a bloated amalgamation of flesh and blood, extended over 4 or 5 meters toward Wei Weii in an attempt to grab him. While the first 2 stages of life demons lacked significant combat capabilities, reaching the third stage marked a terrifying threshold in their manipulation of life energy. Life demon third stage, flesh symbiosis. The enraged priest's body transformed into a monstrous mass of flesh. As he charged toward Wei Weii, he passed by struggling or lifeless followers on the ground. His body writhed and stretched, pulling them in and absorbing them into himself. He became a grotesque amalgamation of multiple bodies. By devouring those who were still alive or recently deceased, he extracted their remaining life energy while fusing their flesh into his own to increase his size. Within moments, he swelled to a height of 3 or 4 meters, a towering monstrosity adorned with agonized human faces across his body. His massive arm was an entangled mass of countless smaller arms, reaching out toward Wei Weii from afar. Under the flickering lights of the monastery, the sight was nothing short of horrifying. Bang! Holding the heavy machine gun in one hand, Wei Weii drew his black short-barreled pistol with the other and fired at the priest's hand. Blue flames erupted upon impact, forcing back the priest's grotesque fist. Don't let it touch you. In this state, any contact with a life demon's body, no matter how small, would result in instant assimilation. The demon could absorb your flesh and turn you into just another face in its grotesque form. This isn't efficient enough. Wei Weii retreated rapidly while maintaining an eerie calm. Life demons might lack offensive power, but their terrifying regenerative abilities made them like rubber balls that couldn't be flattened no matter how hard you stomped on them. Even first and second stage life demons could consume vast amounts of ammunition as they repeatedly rose from what should have been fatal injuries, like blood-soaked maggots refusing to die. The third stage priest was even more nightmarish, relentlessly attempting to attack despite being pushed back repeatedly. Even Wei Weii didn't harbor illusions about defeating a third stage life demon quickly. He relied on his green head ghost bullets to keep the priest at bay while draining his energy. Thankfully, he had anticipated this when pursuing his dream of finding the bloodflesh rose and always carried enough ammunition with him. But at this rate, the already limited supply of greenhead ghost bullets was depleting alarmingly fast. From behind him came hurried footsteps. The monastery's outer guards had heard the commotion and were rushing over. Time for a change in tactics. Wei Weii emptied the heavy machine gun's magazine before leaping backward and discarding it. He could grab another weapon later if needed, but there was no point now. Using his own blood to enhance large-scale high-damage attacks was effective but came with a significant downside: excessive blood loss. As he retreated across the monastery lawn, his eyes landed on something hanging from the wall, a scythe. Perfect. Leaping forward, he seized it in one hand as fresh blood dripped from his wounds. The blood threads writhing from his injuries enveloped the scythe until it transformed into a massive weapon 2 or 3 meters long, gleaming scarlet with menacing threads snaking across its surface. In dim light amidst fluttering black robes torn apart by chaos, Wei Weii charged forward once more. The scythe gleamed like death's cloak billowing in this blood-soaked world, a harbinger of slaughter. In one hand was his scythe, in the other was his short-barreled pistol loaded with greenhead ghost rounds. A crimson shadow darted through the monastery, harvesting lives one by one as heads fell amidst futile struggles for survival. SHHHK. A guard who had just arrived barely had time to raise his weapon before that crimson shadow appeared before him, a youthful face marred by scars stitched together with blood threads smiling brightly at him. Slash! Before he could react further, a scarlet scythe cleaved through him mercilessly, his head joining others on the ground with expressions frozen in agony. Wei Weii laughed maniacally, his wounds writhing with blood threads that seemed to grow more frenzied and vibrant with each kill. While firearms were undoubtedly efficient tools for him, there were times when he didn't mind rekindling an old flame, his first love, scythes. After all, wasn't frugality and understanding what made first loves so special? Madman, madman. The priest, now a life mentor, chased after Wei Weii helplessly while countless faces on his body screamed curses filled with despair and rage. Despite absorbing so much flesh and increasing his size dramatically, the priest's speed hadn't improved significantly. Meanwhile, Wei Weii weaved around him effortlessly, slaughtering others within the monastery as frustration boiled within the priest's monstrous form. He had prepared extensively for contingencies, implementing numerous defensive measures to protect this sacrificial site against potential threats. He had considered scenarios where Scrap Iron City's supernatural law enforcement might suddenly surround them, or where patrol teams armed with rocket launchers might rain destruction upon them. Even imagined facing despair-inducing figures like Captain Weang descending upon them. But never, not once, did he expect someone like this. A lone intruder who picked up a pair of sacrificial shoes without hesitation before launching into wholesale slaughter. This wasn't combat, it was pure butchery. The priest roared furiously as massive arms formed from intertwined limbs stretched toward Wei Weii, desperately trying to catch him amidst chaos. But amidst laughter echoing through this crimson world, Wei Weii danced nimbly around every grasping hand while continuing his grim harvest. His heart raced wildly, not from fear but exhilaration, as memories flooded back vividly. Amongst severed limbs adorned with blood-flesh rose tattoos, he saw flashes of 3 years ago, a girl named Chi hanging lifelessly beneath a chandelier, her white dress soaked in blood. His heart skipped a beat, a twisted grin spreading uncontrollably across his face as laughter bubbled up from deep within. "What are you doing?" A voice suddenly boomed, not from reality but within his mindscape, a furious intrusion into this slaughter-filled world. Blood froze midair, everything distorted unnaturally as whispers rained down like droplets falling into still water. But just as Wei Wei's exhilaration was about to reach its boiling point, an angry voice suddenly echoed. This voice did not come from reality, it resonated from the spiritual world. The blood-soaked, slaughter-filled realm around him abruptly felt as though it was being watched. Endless murmurs began to fall like raindrops from the sky, cascading into this world. The surrounding air thickened, becoming viscous and oppressive. Even the metallic stench of blood that lingered in the air seemed to freeze in place. Everything before his eyes began to distort, stretching, elongating, and pulling away, as if some surreal force had instantaneously enveloped the entire monastery. In the inner hall of the monastery, the mass of flesh atop the stone platform suddenly split apart, revealing a massive eye. The enormous pupil contracted into a tiny point, brimming with fury as it glared outward with intense malice. This gaze seemed to pierce through layers of stone walls, landing squarely on Wei Wei's face. Even the enraged life priest, who had been consumed by anger moments ago, froze in place. The countless faces covering his grotesque body simultaneously displayed expressions of shock and stupefaction before quickly shifting to disbelief and unrestrained ecstasy. Countless mouths cried out in unison, "Master! The Master has turned his gaze upon us. We are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day this week. Underscore 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 lesser demon." At the same time, Wei Weii also sensed the terrifying presence descending upon the monastery. His body felt slightly heavier as the blood threads coursing through him swiftly retracted back into his body, though they remained in an unusually active state. Gripping the scarlet scythe tightly in both hands, his gaze turned cold as he faced this overwhelming force head-on. This was a willpower no weaker than that of the black goat. So, had some form of consciousness just descended upon this small monastery? Wei Weii thought back to the piece of evil god flesh he had seen in the inner hall earlier. He knew that this was an ability within the life demon system, belonging to its 4th stage, flesh parasite. A life demon at this stage could sever a portion of their own flesh and allow it to exist independently. This severed flesh could parasitize other bodies or consume sacrifices on its own while maintaining a mysterious connection to its original form. Thus, when Wei Weii saw that mass of flesh earlier, he was certain it belonged to a 4th stage entity, or perhaps something far beyond that level. After all, ordinary 4th stage entities could sever parts of their bodies, but not such a massive piece. Moreover, consuming so many sacrifices and exuding such an evil aura, it couldn't possibly be a mere transcendent. It had to be a corrupted monster. Corrupted monsters in their first 3 stages were collectively referred to as monsters. However, once they reached the 4th stage or higher, they gained a new title, lesser demon. If they advanced even further to the 7th stage, they would no longer be classified as monsters but as higher totems. Still, Wei Weii didn't believe this entity was a higher totem. At most, it was a demonic scum. A higher totem couldn't physically manifest within the confines of a spiritual barrier without being detected. Or as his instructor had put it, not under normal circumstances. When faced with an entity of such immense power, respect was necessary regardless of one's allegiance. Thus, at this moment, Wei Weii tightened his grip on the scythe while maintaining his stance for slaughter. Yet he also forced himself to stay rational, remembering both his responsibilities and the manners instilled in him by his instructor. He responded to this mysterious will with composure. "Of course, I'm fulfilling my duty, kindly advising these misguided individuals to stop committing evil." The will that had descended into the flesh on the stone platform clearly didn't understand Wei Wei's humor. The mass of flesh squirmed violently as countless angry faces emerged from its surface. A voice resonated directly within their minds, a mental shock so intense it felt like their heads might burst. "Fool! You are the greatest fool! You've chosen the wrong side. We are on the same side. We share the same mentor and mission. You returned to Scrap Iron City because of my call. You were meant to help me complete my final task, not to ruin my plans. What? The third stage life mentor froze upon hearing these words. His mind buzzed as he stared blankly at Wei Weii. Too many things were impossible to comprehend. The will of the rose had descended before him, a miracle akin to divine intervention. Such a will never expressed emotions, it simply eradicated all heresy without hesitation. But now, will this be conversing with that lunatic? And it claimed that lunatic was one of them? Wei Weii himself was baffled by these words. It felt as though something foreign had entered his mind, his thoughts muddled and unclear. He suddenly recalled countless murmurs he'd heard before, twisted and incomprehensible dreams he'd experienced repeatedly. Fragments of broken clues and images seemed to coalesce at this moment, lifting a fog from his mind and granting him fleeting clarity for perhaps the first time. The blood threads within him receded slightly as he frowned and asked, "Do entities at your level really need to form cliques?" Buzz, buzz, buzz. The furious yet powerful will seemed to be breathing heavily now. With each emotional fluctuation, layers of invisible psychic pressure pressed down upon the air around them. Under this intangible weight, even one's eardrums felt assaulted by constant reverberations, an indistinguishable hum between reality and illusion. If thoughts were tangible entities, then at this moment, they would be fracturing inch by inch. You've returned to your starting point yet remain ignorant of your mission. A voice filled with deep frustration echoed. You slaughter recklessly without understanding your allegiance. Why must it be you? Why did our mentor choose someone as foolish as you? My mission? My allegiance? A fleeting look of confusion crossed Wei Wei's face before it quickly gave way to an unclear smile. And which allegiance do you think I belong to? He asked with feigned innocence. The mysterious will's anger became almost palpable, flowing through the surrounding air like a tangible force. I never imagined you'd ask such a question. You belong to the rose. You should dedicate your life to its bloom, to offering me perfect lambs, not ruining my plans. Then you're mistaken. Wei Weii suddenly smiled warmly, even shaking his head slightly. I don't quite understand what you're saying, but my mission? My allegiance? I've always been very clear about those things. You've chosen their side. No. Wei Weii shook his head firmly. Images flashed through his mind, the small teams he'd worked with during training camp, those endearingly terrified teammates, the Foundation's emblem, Captain Weang, and his laid-back colleagues who rarely took work seriously. Finally, his gaze fell upon the small white shoes tied at his waist. In this moment filled with uncertainties, he found one certainty. His smile grew warmer. I may not be sure about everything else, but there's one thing I know for sure. I choose to stand with the lambs. As he declared this, bloodlust surged within his eyes once more as he swung his scythe toward the life mentor. The mysterious and terrifying will. The shared mentor. The countless murmurs from dreams past. And now, his supposed betrayal? These sudden revelations left his mind in chaos, his rising killing intent faltering momentarily. Even his usually vibrant demonic energy seemed briefly subdued, until his gaze landed on those small white shoes tied at his waist. What am I even thinking right now? He thought abruptly. Isn't my job still unfinished? With renewed focus on what mattered most, the scarlet scythe slashed toward its target once again. Madman? Madman. The life mentor, the last living entity within this monastery, felt terror surge through him like never before. How could this monster move so freely amidst such overwhelming divine pressure? Even as thoughts froze under this oppressive force, Wei Weii acted without hesitation or restraint. In that moment, even as a third-stage life mentor, all he could do was scream in fear. I didn't expect what awaited me would be a lunatic. Simultaneously, the mysterious and enraged will release waves of immense psychic energy, as if realizing something unexpected about Wei Weii. This man aligned with its expectations in some ways yet deviated entirely in others. As boundless energy surged like tidal waves, a climactic confrontation loomed ahead. Swish, swish, swish. Countless tendrils of flesh erupted from within the stone platform's mass, piercing through layers of stone walls like fluttering ribbons before lunging toward Wei Weii midair. Yet even as those tendrils closed in around him, Wei Weii raised his gaze toward them with unmistakable amusement in his eyes, as though fear or threat were concepts foreign to him entirely. Instead, he swung his scythe faster than ever toward the terrified life mentor below. In that instant, his thoughts crystallized into simple clarity. Damn it, I'm about to die. So before that happens, I need to finish my job. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. At that exact moment, as Wei Wei's scythe swung toward the life mentor, and just as countless tendrils of flesh were about to pierce through his body, the sound of frenzied clock hands spinning filled the entire space. The tendrils of flesh extending toward Wei Weii suddenly froze in place. It was as if a camera shutter had clicked, capturing a single moment in time. Yet, the scarlet scythe in Wei Wei's hand seemed unaffected. With a sharp swish, it cleaved into the life mentor's grotesque, 3 to 4 meter tall writhing mass of flesh. The strike carved a horrifying gash straight through the creature's body. Go now. A different will, one filled with an almost playful tone, echoed through the air. Go find what truly moves you. Go seek what you are missing for your ascension. I can't wait to see what he thinks when he sees you. Haha. Underscore 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 underscore. The sound of a clock ticking reverberated, freezing everything in place, except for Wei Weii, who was swinging his scarlet scythe. Even the terrifying tendrils of flesh were momentarily immobilized, unable to pierce through Wei Wei's body. But the effect lasted only an instant. You think you can escape? The next moment, the endless tendrils of flesh abruptly retracted as the mysterious will roared in anger. Somewhere in Scrap Iron City, in a hall filled with statues of the goddess of life, the cheerful ticking of clock hands echoed, as though celebrating something. At the same time, a face made of flesh on the wall suddenly opened its eyes. Its expression was one of intense rage mixed with traces of confusion. But there was no doubt, its primary mission was to suppress this entity that dared to seize an opportunity to escape. Its pupils contracted sharply as countless chains of flesh intertwined and tightened. The chains wrapped around a vertical stone coffin that had begun to rise from beneath the floor, forcing it back down into the ground. Ha ha. From within the stone coffin below, a voice filled with malice chuckled. You know I'll leave eventually. Even if that guy has ambitions beyond anyone's imagination, even if he has a loyal dog like you, at most, you can keep me here for 3 years. And even then, how do you know I didn't stay willingly? Impossible. The face on the wall suppressed a violent cough, seemingly comforting itself. I don't know why it's someone as insane as you who returned, but the mentor never makes mistakes. Anyone who betrays the mentor will suffer eternal curses. The rituals are still being conducted across this city. I'll have enough power to suppress you. The bloom of the rose cannot be stopped by anyone's will. Ha ha ha. The voice from beneath the floor laughed loudly. Do you know what mistake your mentor made? His intimidation and fear might make cowards like you submit and earn your loyalty. But it doesn't work on lunatics. That little guy is insane? Ha ha ha. Madness doesn't bow to anyone. Back at the monastery, two invisible wills clashed violently in the air, colliding and surging against each other. Finally, both the furious voice and the ticking clock reached their peak before extinguishing simultaneously. The oppressive pressure that had enveloped the small monastery vanished entirely. The life mentor suddenly snapped out of his daze, his massive body shrinking as he retreated rapidly. The countless faces on his flesh screamed in terror all at once. Ha 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 ha. Wei Wei hadn't expected to survive either, but as long as his work wasn't interrupted, nothing else mattered. With renewed vigor, he charged forward even faster, swinging his blood-red scythe mercilessly at the grotesque life mentor before him. Chunks of flesh were sliced off, writhing briefly like eels before rapidly rotting away. Wei Wei dashed toward the massive body of the life mentor, circling it swiftly while slashing repeatedly with his scythe. The third-stage life demon was a monstrous entity with immense vitality and a twisted appearance. But Wei Wei didn't take it too seriously. After all, his instructor had covered this topic extensively. This thing is only dangerous if it develops some kind of mutation or special ability, otherwise, there's nothing to fear. First through third stage life demons are basically useless unless they're turned into syringes or hung up as life batteries. Their strongest ability at third stage, flesh symbiosis, only has 2 features. 1, they're hard to kill. 2, they look creepy. So when you encounter one, just make sure it doesn't grab you and keep shooting until it's dead. The biggest challenge when dealing with one is figuring out how to justify your ammo expenses afterward. Of course, that might have been a bit discriminatory on the instructor's part. But since life demons weren't admitted into training camps anyway, everyone discriminated against them by default. Could someone even call themselves a training camp graduate if they didn't look down on life demons? Thus, Wei Wei felt no psychological burden at all. Having nearly exhausted his ammunition supply, he now relied on more economical methods. His scarlet scythe danced around the life mentor like a blade slicing noodles. The massive body of the life mentor shrank rapidly under Wei Wei's relentless assault, but at this point, all it could do was defend itself. Earlier, when that mysterious will had descended upon them, it had drained all life energy from within the monastery, not intentionally but as an inherent effect of its presence. This natural aggregation effect left behind by such an overwhelming will had weakened even the life mentor's strength. More importantly, that will's conversation with Wei Wei had left him shaken to his core. At first, he thought he was dealing with a madman. Now, he wasn't sure what kind of monster he was facing. Meanwhile, Wei Wei himself didn't fully understand what had just happened, the cryptic dialogue about alliances and factions. That powerful will claiming they were on the same side. Was this some attempt to corrupt him, a proud Foundation-trained officer with bright prospects? Thankfully, he'd resisted. This subtle difference in mindset led to vastly different outcomes. Wei Wei grew increasingly focused and excited while unleashing his scarlet power to its fullest potential, even surpassing his usual limits, while fear and doubt consumed the life mentor. Despite being a third-stage entity, a step closer to becoming a true demon, it couldn't put up meaningful resistance against Wei Wei's relentless assault. Madman? Madman. The life mentor reverted rapidly toward its original form, scrambling on all fours like a cornered animal desperate to escape. Wei Wei followed slowly behind him, scythe in hand, with an unusually radiant smile on his face. Though he could have moved faster, he deliberately slowed down to savor every moment of his prey's despair. Cornered against a wall, the life mentor screamed like prey caught in a trap. Wei Wei burst into laughter before raising his scarlet scythe high overhead. But just as he was about to strike, a fleeting hesitation crossed his mind, as though listening intently to something. Amidst lingering traces of dissipated wills, a faint psychic whisper drifted into his ears along with subtle currents of air. True awakening comes from touching your soul and finding what truly moves you. Swish. Wei Wei furrowed his brows thoughtfully. Fragments of past dreams and fleeting thoughts resurfaced faintly within him, things he'd once overlooked now stirring faintly in his heart. He realized something he hadn't noticed before. From discovering traces of blood-flesh roses earlier tonight, to gathering evidence, to persuading others within this monastery, and now facing off against this life mentor. He'd maintained an extraordinary level of motivation and excitement throughout it all. But now, he suddenly realized that something still felt missing. His ascension ritual for reaching third state had been stalled for months despite maintaining perfect stability in both mental state and demonic energy levels, and consistently exceeding sacrificial quotas during missions. So why hadn't he advanced yet? What was still missing? For so long, he couldn't figure it out, but now, clarity seemed just within reach. I guess I really do need something more moving after all. As if sensing this shift, the cornered life mentor froze momentarily before hope flickered faintly within its terrified eyes. It turned sharply toward Wei Weii, only for him to sigh deeply instead of delivering another blow with his scythe. The blood threads surrounding him retracted swiftly, the scythe reverted back into its original rusted form before clattering onto the ground. Killing you guys is starting to bore me. Squatting down lazily before his prey, Wei Weii sighed again softly. These words reignited faint hope within what remained of the life mentor. It turned its head sharply toward him once more. Reaching into his pocket, Wei Weii pulled out a cigarette and placed it between his lips, but failed miserably at lighting it, the cigarette soaked through with blood. Letting it dangle limply between two fingers, he sighed again quietly. You people. Why are there always so many more waiting to be killed? Holding onto an unlit cigarette amidst blood-soaked chaos, he gazed down at this trembling creature without raising his weapon again. I guess I really do need something more advanced after all. Standing slowly, the faintest trace of emotion flickered across Wei Wei's face, a glimmer resembling genuine sentimentality. Underscore 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 underscore. As the eastern sky began to brighten, Captain Weang led his team swiftly toward the villa district. His face was grim, as though a storm of anger brewed beneath the surface. What the hell is going on? All he had done was assign those two to patrol the streets, hoping they wouldn't cause trouble so he could focus on handling Scrap Iron City's current crisis. Yet out of nowhere, they called him to report discovering a love demon system predator targeting young women. Worse yet, there were 7 victims at the scene. Weang had seen the fear on Fei's face when she called him. He was sure those two hadn't planned on informing him initially. If not for discovering 7 victims and realizing the gravity of the situation, Fei probably wouldn't have said anything at all. They must have intended to handle it quietly on their own, right? The worst part was that when Weang arrived with reinforcements, he indeed found the charred corpse of a love demon and 7 victims. But what terrified him even more was this: one of those 2 patrolling officers had gone missing. Where had he gone? Weang immediately ordered Lucky Sister to check surveillance footage. They saw Wei Weii gleefully driving off in a small truck and, together with little Lin, tracked his route. Finally, just as dawn broke, they arrived at this villa district. The stench of blood hit them like a tidal wave, making Weang heart tremble. This time, they didn't even need to search. They rushed straight toward the innermost villa and entered what could only be described as a monastery. Or rather, a slaughterhouse. The ground was littered with corpses, bodies shredded by bullets or something unimaginably sharp and terrifying. Faces frozen in despair stared blankly at the world, their expressions still etched with fear and horror from their final moments. Uncle Yuan squinted at the scene before him. It was horrifying beyond words. Lucky Sister immediately pushed Fei outside to spare her from witnessing it. Weang walked forward with a dark expression, stepping carefully between the mangled remains as he tried to imagine how brutal this battle must have been. Step by step, they moved from the outer hall to the inner hall, and then stopped in unison. A faint tremor seemed to resonate through their hearts, making their palms tingle slightly. In the center of the inner hall lay a massive pit with a solitary stone platform at its center. Upon this platform rested an unknown mass of flesh, lifeless now, its color grayish-white and carbonized. Kneeling before this mass of flesh was a figure clad in black robes, likely someone of high rank within this ritualistic group. But now, he knelt lifelessly before the carbonized flesh, arms outstretched as though offering something, his own severed head. The head's expression was frozen in terror and shock, completely devoid of any reverence or confidence it might have held in life. Around the pit were scattered bones, meticulously arranged, with their faces turned toward the stone platform as though bearing witness to some horrific event. Even for those accustomed to gruesome scenes, this grotesque tableau struck a nerve deep within them. Lucky Sister held her breath against the overwhelming stench of blood and whispered, "What is this?" Weang remained silent for a long moment before replying softly, "A corpse, but not just any corpse. Perhaps it's more accurate to call it an artwork." He spoke slowly, almost wistfully. An artwork titled Sacrifice. And it was created with great care. The surrounding team members tensed visibly as they struggled to mask their shock at what they were seeing. Weang sighed deeply, his thoughts drifting back to what that old woman had told him when he first received Fei's call. "Weang, I know what you want to ask, but I can't see things that are far above me. I can only tell you this: Scrap Iron City is about to undergo major changes. When I look into its near future, all I see is an ocean of blood falling from the sky, a sea of blood that will drown everything." At that same moment, Wei Weii returned home. His heart felt unusually calm. He hadn't killed the life mentor directly but had found him an appropriate destination. Tick-tock, tick-tock, tick-tock. As Wei Weii stepped through his door, he heard the clear sound of clock hands turning in his mind. Normally, such sounds would awaken an insatiable desire within him, but now he felt an unprecedented tranquility. Despite being covered in blood from head to toe, he quietly sat down on his sofa. His expression grew distant, as though transported back into that endless sea of blood. Blood lapped against his feet like waves stirred by an invisible wind, parting gently on either side. A massive execution scaffold loomed against a dark red sky. Wei Weii felt countless whispers flooding into his mind, madness pouring into every corner of his thoughts. Beyond the veil of blood mist stood towering and twisted monsters, their movements halting momentarily as if acknowledging his presence. For the first time ever, Wei Weii felt himself entering a new state entirely different from anything before. As he approached the third execution scaffold beneath which stood a giant cradling its own severed head, the creature's eyes were closed, its face bore an expression of strange contentment. Ahead lay another scaffold, the fourth one shrouded in thinning blood mist. Beyond it loomed another towering figure, its form faintly visible yet still unreal. My ascension ritual is finally ready. Wei Weii understood with newfound clarity why his progress had been stalled despite meeting all other requirements for advancement. While he had accumulated enough sacrifices, what he lacked was something intangible, a soul. His previous killings had been mere acts of venting frustration, they lacked any semblance of soul or meaning. Without that emotional resonance, there could be no ritual worthy enough for true ascension. As endless whispers flooded his mind once more, Wei Weii looked down at his feet where waves of blood surged forward relentlessly. Raising his gaze toward that infinite sea of crimson, he saw countless tormented souls floating amidst its depths, each wave crashing like thunderous applause against unseen shores. At that moment, it felt as though layers upon layers within Wei Wei's mind were being peeled away, his blood threads quivering excitedly within him. He glimpsed something entirely new, a higher state beyond comprehension. Scarlet Mentor. To truly understand slaughter's meaning, to transcend mere violence, that was what defined a Scarlet Mentor. On one execution scaffold stood a giant cradling its severed head, its hollow gaze fixed upon Wei Weii as it spoke. Slaughter is not mere senseless violence. The Scarlet descends upon this world like a deep night blooming with tragic beauty. It grants peace to lost souls, and instills reverence among those who remain. This profound realization washed over Wei Weii like an unstoppable tide, and for just a moment, it seemed as though even reality itself blurred. Hanging by his door, the small white shoes swayed slightly, as though trembling faintly. A phantom figure emerged from within his dreams, a girl obscured by bloodstains save for her unmistakable white shoes. She stood silently before him, her face hidden beneath layers of gore, but her eyes shone through with piercing clarity. Reaching out gently, she grasped Wei Wei's bloodied hand with her own cold fingers. Brother. Her voice was soft yet haunting. Thank you. Wei Weii opened his eyes slowly, forcing himself into what he hoped was a reassuring smile despite everything, and asked quietly, "Have I managed to ease your pain?" The girl shook her head gently. "Brother, I've already died, I'll forever remain trapped in my most painful moment." Then, Wei Wei's voice trembled slightly, as though pierced by countless needles. "If I find everyone responsible for your suffering, and kill them all." The girl didn't shake her head this time, instead, a faint smile appeared amidst her blood-stained features. "At least then no one else will endure such pain again. But brother, would you really do that for us? We're just lambs destined for sacrifice, we know nothing else. When God's gaze falls upon us, we can only lie obediently upon his altar. And besides, we're already dead. No matter what you do, we'll never come back." Her gentle voice carried truths more cruel than anything else, but despite this, Wei Weii forced himself into calmness once more, even as veins bulged across his forehead. "I will," he said firmly while nodding resolutely, "no matter what, I'll keep going. After all, I chose to stand with the lambs." The girl smiled softly. "Brother, will you make me a promise?" "Pinky swear." Amidst blurred lines between reality and illusion, a small blood-stained hand intertwined with another equally stained larger hand, their pinkies locking together gently. For just an instant, it seemed as though crystalline tears fell from her unseen face while those tiny white shoes swayed faintly nearby. And there on his sofa, tears rolled silently down Wei Wei's cheeks too, for at last, he had entered third state. Scarlet Mentor. Underscore 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 underscore. So this is the third stage of the Scarlet Path. Feeling the changes in his body brought by the Scarlet Power, Wei Weii experienced a surge of complex emotions. From his initial unconscious awakening, to his accidental ascension during training camp, to the subsequent blockage on his Scarlet Path that led him to join the Foundation's experiments, and then to returning the experimental subject and coming back to Scrap Iron City, rediscovering the Bloodflesh Rose had finally given him a conscious opportunity to ascend to the third state. Taking this step forward symbolized that he had truly embarked on this path. This room, where his uncontrollable life began, was now where he set out once more. It seemed as though everything had its meaning, didn't it? Wei Weii found himself unaccustomed to such clarity of thought. He closed his eyes silently, feeling the changes in his Scarlet Power. Now that he had entered the third state, what new abilities would he gain? As this thought crossed his mind, the sound of blood flowing began to echo in his ears, a rushing noise like wind howling through arteries as blood sprayed from them. Faces of those on the brink of death flashed before his eyes, spreading out one by one as though imbued with some mysterious significance, unfolding in his mental world. In the empty room, endless murmurs began to emerge at some point, as though something distant and mystical was gazing down upon him. For the first time, Wei Weii deliberately stepped onto the staircase of the Scarlet Demon's path. At that moment, a human head ornament mounted on the wall behind her seemed to sense the strange and powerful aura. Silently, one of its eyes creaked open. Last time, it hadn't stirred even when scorched with a lighter. But now, it could no longer remain dormant. Its eyeball rolled downward, glancing at Wei Weii sitting on the sofa. It seemed intoxicated by the pervasive smell of blood in the room. The true demon is beginning to awaken. Meanwhile, deep within the spiritual barrier, at the First City Defense Line's Vanguard studio, someone opened a file classified as A-level confidential. The first thing displayed was a photograph of Wei Weii from 3 years ago. Name, Wei Weii. Age, 19. Identity, inheritor of Scarlet Demon powers, trainee at East Mountain Soaring Snake Training Camp, experimental subject for Scarlet weapon research. Scarlet essence, slaughter. System base attribute, slaughter intuition, greatly enhances perception and insight when targeting slaughter, grows stronger with intensity and determination. Abilities. First state abilities. Death threat, the ability to threaten any entity with a weapon, even elevators, wild dogs unfamiliar with guns, cats, beasts, or even demon-forbidden objects. Note, threats toward inanimate objects only work when within a demonic magnetic field, otherwise, they have no effect. Ability memory, randomly retains one ability after using different demon serums, usually basic abilities. Second state abilities. Slaughter imbuement, the ability to channel Scarlet power into firearms, blades, vehicles, or other objects, turning otherwise ordinary items into instruments of overwhelming destruction. The greater the user's intent to kill, the more devastating the effect. While tests have shown it can be repurposed for tasks like climbing or physical regeneration, its effectiveness in such applications is significantly diminished. Third state abilities. Awaiting documentation. Remarks. The Scarlet weapon experiment concluded that this type of power is extremely dangerous. Close combat capabilities rank among the top 3 alongside war demons and order demons. However, due to limited experimental data and individual variability among subjects, precise rankings remain inconclusive. A statement from an East Mountain training camp instructor. His danger far exceeds your imagination. You idiots think you can control a lunatic? Let alone one wielding the most dangerous power imaginable. Note, this instructor himself is a demon totem and has repeatedly demonstrated unethical behavior during training sessions, including accepting bribes, falsifying evaluations and experimental data for personal gain, misreporting specialized ammunition quantities during missions, and privately teaching unsuitable theories. Credibility rating, C-level. Final conclusion, approved for participation in the Blood Flesh Rose project. Red warning line, be advised, while this project has been approved for execution, it carries significant uncontrollable risks. At that moment, Captain Weang was riding his newly modified sidecar motorcycle with Uncle Gun toward Wei Wei's apartment building. Weang Jian's expression was grim as he clutched a rolled-up newspaper while striding up toward room 302 on the 3rd floor. Uncle Gun hesitated behind him but didn't dare speak up. As they neared room 302, Weang Jian's expression suddenly changed, his steps slowed, and he turned back to stop Uncle Gun from advancing further. Be careful, don't disturb him. Uncle Gun was startled and about to speak when he too noticed something unusual. Silence. It was far too quiet. The entire uninhabited 3-story apartment building seemed enveloped by an invisible force, completely isolating all sound. Before noticing it, it felt normal, but once aware, their hair stood on end as faint whispers echoed in their ears, an oppressive weight settling over their hearts. It felt like being submerged dozens of meters underwater, where everything became distorted. Only their hearts remained heavy, beating slower, heavier, slower still. Flap, flap, flap. A sudden noise startled them. They turned toward it, and saw a crow that had accidentally flown into the building. The bird had been flying normally but lost control upon entering, crashing onto the floor where it flailed briefly before curling up trembling in a corner. Squeak, squeak, squeak. Shrill cries rang out as 2 rats burst from cracks in concrete walls, biting each other viciously until their bellies were torn open, spilling crimson intestines across surfaces. In window crevices, sprouting blades of grass visibly withered at an accelerated pace. High above, the spiritual barrier rippled invisibly. From Scrap Iron City's western edge, the bell at Faceless God Church tolled softly, its sound drifting hauntingly through space. What is this? Uncle Gun instinctively gripped his hunting rifle tightly while casting a questioning glance at Weang Jian. At that moment, even speaking felt dangerous, as though any sound might provoke something terrible. Weang Jian shook his head lightly before whispering, "He's ascending." Ascending. Uncle Gun was stunned, his disbelief evident as he stared at room 302's tightly shut door. How could someone ascend under such unprepared circumstances? And how could anyone undergoing ascension emit such terrifying demonic radiation? Wasn't Little Wei part of the life sequence? Could this bizarre aura truly come from a life sequence ascension? Worry crept into Uncle Gun's heart as he turned toward Weang Jian with a hesitant expression. Go back, and fetch some stabilizers. Weang Jian ordered sternly without turning around. Stabilizers. Uncle Gun felt relieved momentarily, but before leaving, He turned back worriedly. Captain, he's still young, you won't act rashly, right? Rash my ass. Weang growled under his breath before snapping, I came here today intending to strangle him. Uncle Gun's eyes widened in shock. Weang sighed deeply before muttering, but I'll wait until after he finishes ascending. Uncle Gun couldn't help but smile faintly at that response. Weang sighed again, his gaze complex as he glanced toward room 302, his expression conflicted between frustration and resignation. He seemed tempted to kick down that door, to drag Wei Weii out for answers, but ultimately shook his head instead. The Ascension ritual is too important, we can't interrupt him now. Go back to base, and bring stabilizers, I'll stay here to guard him. Uncle Gun nodded quickly before leaping out through a window while Weang pressed his hand gently against a wall. An invisible force spread softly outward like ripples enveloping all 3 floors. The trembling crow in its corner suddenly took flight, escaping through an open window like it had been pardoned. The bloodied rats retreated into their holes. And within room 302, the human head ornament hanging on its wall hurriedly closed its eyes, as though terrified by what it sensed. Yet across Scrap Iron City, that brief burst of demonic radiation left countless individuals feeling faint unease. From elderly souls teetering on corruption's edge, to witches draped in bones seeking glimpses into fate, to wandering priests strolling Scrap Iron City's outskirts like carefree travelers from afar. Even hidden entities running out of patience, the flesh, and clock alike stirred uneasily. And within some distant church, a priest wearing a red cap sat silently on a pew holding a red-covered book. Some felt ripples within their hearts, others shadows darkening over them. One voice whispered faintly amidst it all. Underscore 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 underscore. Now that I've reached the 3rd state, the activity and control of my blood threads seem to have improved significantly. Does this mean I can now remember a 3rd basic ability from another system? And within the Scarlet system, the ability I just gained is touching the soul. How could such an ability come into existence? Amidst the dense murmurs and dreamlike, illusory images, Wei Weii immersed himself in the world of the blood sea, feeling the subtle changes within him. He didn't know how much time had passed before he suddenly opened his eyes. Blood threads appeared and disappeared rapidly within his gaze. Even the training camp had no records regarding the growth and extension of abilities within the Scarlet system. Thus, Wei Weii had no idea what abilities he would gain after ascending to the 3rd state of Scarlet. What he did know was that according to the classification standards of other demon systems, he had now ascended from a Scarlet Executor to a Scarlet Mentor. At this moment, while sensing the changes in his Scarlet power, he still lacked a clear concept of what it entailed. He could only rely on his perception of this power to analyze and associate based on his self-awareness. Could it be that slaughter targets only the physical body, but when elevated into an art form, it can inspire, shock, and even intimidate others, affecting their minds and spirits? Is that why I've gained the ability to influence mental states and thoughts? A surge of joy filled his mind. It was a peculiar sensation. The changes in Scarlet power weren't defined by rigid words but instead directly impacted his spiritual perception. It felt as though he had suddenly acquired a new skill but needed to develop and practice it himself. It was like suddenly growing an extra hand. Whether to use this hand for hitting people, holding objects, or learning useful crafts depended entirely on one's own will. This was exactly how Wei Weii felt about this newfound dimension. He slowly raised his palm, observing his fingers under the first rays of sunlight. Truly. Had he never noticed how long his fingers were before? Maybe he was born to play piano? Wei Weii realized deeply that perhaps he'd always had an artistic side, it just hadn't been developed until now. However, the imagined scene of blood threads emerging directly from his fingertips didn't happen. Blood threads only activated when utilizing basic abilities like slaughter intuition or death threat. To imbue weapons or other objects with blood thread power required an open wound. He raised his hand and bit into his finger. As blood flowed out, delicate blood threads wriggled forth, a sight both eerie and beautiful. Fortunately, thanks to the cellular vitality ability from the life demon, his body bore far fewer scars than it otherwise would have. Narrowing his eyes slightly, Wei Weii quietly experienced this sensation. The blood threads felt more sensitive and precise than before. A strange intuition told him that they might now be able to touch not only physical entities but also intangible mental forces. Perhaps this was the fundamental change brought about by upgrading Scarlet power? Instinctively looking at the human head ornament hanging on his wall, Wei Weii felt an urge to discuss this with it. However, the poor thing had fainted last time and hadn't woken up since. In that case, he'd have to find some experimental subjects himself. Perhaps visiting haunted places rumored to be ghost-infested would yield cooperative partners. Many demon systems benefited from extensive prior research and analysis. New abilities came with established benchmarks and references to help users quickly understand and master them. Some even came pre-named. But not for him. Wei Weii could only work hard to sense changes in his power while experimenting whenever opportunities arose. Taking a deep breath, Wei Weii retrieved a knowledge demon serum he'd prepared earlier from beneath his sofa. He could clearly feel that with increased activity in his Scarlet power, there was now room for an additional remembered ability beyond cellular vitality from life demons and death aura from death demons. The knowledge demon serum, prepared in advance for dealing with wandering sects, could finally be put to use before it expired. After calming himself down further, Wei Weii slotted the serum into an injector. Before proceeding, he got up suddenly and put on freshly washed SpongeBob underwear hanging nearby. Hopefully I don't end up remembering something useless. He thought, this was a time when luck mattered most. SHHH. As soon as the serum was injected, an invisible force surged into him. Wild yet intangible, it felt like some strange psychic power trying to tear apart his thoughts completely. Wei Weii, long accustomed to enduring pain, silently endured as usual. He sensed how this new force seemed intent on shredding through his blood threads, but those threads feigned helplessness while letting it rampage freely. Just as this force began asserting dominance over him, the Scarlet power suddenly revealed its true ferocity, swiftly entangling itself around this intruding energy before devouring it entirely without mercy, transforming it into part of itself. In that instant, the Scarlet power surged again, and Wei Wei's eyes snapped open. Within them flowed endless streams of data. Beep beep. On a small LCD screen attached to the metallic injector tube, numbers began flashing. Knowledge demon magnetic field radiation detected. Warning, unknown powerful magnetic field detected, activity level at 92%. Record and upload. Wei Weii reached out to turn off the alarm, his expression tinged with excitement. Consciousness bullet. He had just remembered the knowledge demon system's basic ability, consciousness bullet. Wei Weii had first-hand experience with this ability during his confrontation with the combat nuns. This power allowed him to project a fragment of his consciousness into an opponent's mind through eye contact, mingling it with their own thoughts. The greater the disparity between the strength of their minds and wills, the more effective this ability became. For example, during his previous battle, a one-eyed nun from the combat team had used this ability on him. The implanted thought was, stand here and don't move. At that time, Wei Weii had only needed half a second of focus to break free. However, if the nun's willpower and rank had far exceeded his own, that simple command could have immobilized him for several minutes, or even hours. Against stronger beings, perhaps even legendary totems, this ability could potentially keep Wei Weii rooted in place until death. Useful? Wei Weii immediately concluded in his mind. This power could be applied in killing, no, in work. It would undoubtedly prove highly effective in certain situations. You really have to admire them, he thought. Other systems always seemed to have such flashy and versatile abilities compared to his Scarlet power, which was solely focused on slaughter and nothing else. A disdainful smile crept onto his lips as he glanced down at the metallic injector tube, only to notice something alarming. Why is my demonic activity level so low? It had been at 98% earlier, now it had suddenly dropped to 92%. They always said that after completing an Ascension ritual, there would be a significant drop in demonic activity levels. And indeed, it was substantial. Still, it was better than what he'd endured back at training camp when his instructor had forcibly injected him with stabilizers. That time, 2 stabilizer doses had nearly driven his activity level below 80%, leaving him utterly dejected. Taking a deep breath, Wei Weii put away the metallic injector and turned his gaze toward the blood-stained white shoes hanging by his door. Looking down at his fingers, he seemed to feel the lingering sensation of that pinky promise with those small hands. The same mentor. The bloom of the blood-flesh rose? Images began surfacing in Wei Wei's mind, memories from that small monastery where he had fulfilled his duties. The grotesque sacrificial flesh, the accompanying tick-tock sound, and its near-maddened accusations and roars directed at him. At the time, he'd been too preoccupied with unfinished work to dwell on such chaotic thoughts. Only now did he begin piecing things together. After all, he was much calmer now, his demonic activity level had dropped by 6 percentage points. So, there really are secrets in Scrap Iron City that have been brewing for 3 years. And these secrets are indeed tied to my experiences 3 years ago. Taking another deep breath, Wei Wei's mind once again conjured up the image of that scarlet rose. The bloodflesh rose. Life demon sacrificial site. God's death knell, the missing father and that high-ranking life demon entity claiming we share the same mentor. Even the Foundation letting me return so easily, could there be an ulterior motive? Everything seemed like fragmented information waiting to be pieced together, but due to missing key points, it remained incomplete. But that's okay. A gentle smile spread across Wei Wei's face as he raised his right hand, his pinky lightly extended as if making a promise to someone unseen. I don't know what you're doing, but I know what you've already done. I also know they can't be saved anymore. They all died in their greatest pain and fear. You ambitious people never see lambs as anything more than tools, but I'm one of those lambs too. I'll find you for them. I hope you understood the artwork I left behind for you, because... A joyful and expectant smile lit up Wei Wei's face. Bloodflesh rose, it's enough to know you truly exist. Artist Wei Weii is coming for you soon. We are doing a mass release of 3 chapters every day this week. Underscore. Ah, so comfortable. Wei Weii stood up from the sofa and realized that night had already fallen outside. Feeling an intense hunger in his stomach, he quickly changed into cleaner clothes, preparing to head out and grab something to eat. Even 3 streets away, the enticing aroma of street food was wafting through the air. But as soon as he opened the door, he was startled. Right in the hallway, directly facing his door, sat a man with a grim expression on his face. His hair was streaked with gray, his suit impeccably tailored, and beneath him was a battered sofa that seemed to have been dragged over from who knows where. Wei Wei's heart skipped a beat. He immediately straightened up, pressed his legs together, and saluted loudly. Good evening, Captain. Ah, damn it. Captain Weang, who had been dozing off with a scowl on his face, jolted awake and nearly toppled off the sofa. Hastily smoothing down his perfectly styled hair, he looked at Wei Wei standing in the doorway with a stern expression. You're awake. Wei Wei noticed the captain's bad mood and didn't dare lower his saluting hand. Yes, sir. Weang scrutinized him from head to toe with a sharp gaze that seemed capable of piercing through someone's soul. For a moment, it felt as though he could see right through Wei Wei, but what appeared before him was still Wei Wei's earnest and straightforward face, free of any signs that might cause concern. Weang suddenly felt irritated. Running a hand through his hair, he grumbled. No medical preparations, no prior application for team safety measures, not even a single stabilizer prepared, and yet you recklessly went ahead with your third stage ascension. Well, Wei Wei finally understood why Captain Weang had been waiting outside his door. He was surprised that the captain's first reaction upon seeing him wasn't anger over some other issue but rather concern for his carelessness during ascension. A mix of emotions flashed through Wei Wei's heart, complicated feelings he couldn't quite articulate. Not wanting to show it on his face, he simply smiled sheepishly. It just came to me all of a sudden. Inspiration. Weang repeated the word skeptically while frowning at him. Yes. Wei Wei instinctively puffed out his chest, feeling quite artistic about himself for some reason. Weang didn't notice this at all. Instead, he stared deeply at Wei Wei before saying slowly, and what about the villa district in the north? When he spoke those words, his tone grew heavier, as if emphasizing every syllable. If Wei Wei chose to hide anything now, Weang didn't know what he'd do, but he knew he'd be furious. Captain, here's my evidence. Before Weang could say more, Wei Wei stepped back into his room and retrieved two small white shoes tied together by their laces from the wall. Holding them solemnly with both hands, he presented them to Weang like an offering. Then he took a step back and reported loudly. Captain, last night during my patrols, I received information from my colleague Faceless about a suspected wild love demon infectee hunting young women. Acting on the principle of saving lives first, I conducted an initial investigation and discovered 7 victims. Upon learning there might be more victims in danger elsewhere, I instructed Faceless to report this to you while I proceeded with further investigation. I successfully located a sacrificial site where numerous unregistered wildlife demon infectees were gathering, and found clear evidence of human sacrifice rituals taking place. Following Foundation protocols for subordinate investigators, I attempted friendly persuasion, but they refused to surrender and even attacked me instead. In desperation, I was forced to retaliate. Fortunately, thanks to Captain Weang's wise guidance and my rigorous training under our camp instructors, I demonstrated courage and professionalism in completing my mission despite facing terrifying enemies, and successfully dismantled their operation. However, due to certain personal instabilities, I returned early without waiting for your team. For this, I offer my deepest apologies to you as captain, and pledge strict self-reflection moving forward. Captain Weang was stunned speechless, his back instinctively straightening slightly. Wei Wei's overly formal demeanor made him feel like an amateur captain by comparison, almost unprofessional. For a moment, he felt at a loss, but quickly regained composure. After mulling over Wei Wei's words, he sat back down on the sofa, crossing his arms over his chest while letting out 2 dismissive grunts. When you write your report later, make sure it matches exactly what you just said. Especially that part about wise guidance. Yes, sir. Wei Wei replied loudly. And is that all you have to tell me? Weang asked sharply. Wei Wei hesitated briefly before responding earnestly. If there's anything else I've done wrong, please point it out so I can correct myself immediately. I'm willing to write another self-critique on the spot if necessary. Weang snorted but couldn't help feeling slightly pleased by how agreeable Wei Wei was being. Still, something felt off about how smoothly those words had come out of him. What you did last night, the danger involved, the recklessness, and even that artwork left behind. I won't bring those up for now, Weang said coldly before leaning forward slightly. But what about those 21 bullets? Wei Wei froze for a moment. You found out. You call this found out? Weang snapped angrily, his voice rising uncontrollably. Did you really think something like this could stay hidden forever? Captain, I never intended to hide it from you, I swear. Wei Wei replied sincerely, his tone tinged with guilt. It's all because of our training camp instructors. The training camp. Weang frowned deeply. As one of 4 major training facilities under the Foundation, the camps were renowned among transcendents as the Foundation's golden children. Graduates often enjoyed bright futures, even gaining access to classified departments within the Foundation itself. Wild talents like Weang could only dream of such opportunities, and even visiting second-tier defense zones would draw unwanted attention. He also knew that while officially focused on training, the camps held many secrets. Since bringing Wei Wei onto his team, Weang had avoided probing too deeply into his background precisely because of this. Asking too much risked inviting trouble, for some camp secrets were rumored more terrifying than wandering cults outside city limits. So, you kept this hidden because it involves classified camp matters. Weang pressed cautiously. Yes. Were you sent back here on an assignment from them? No. Then why conceal things like this? Seeing hesitation flicker across Wei Wei's face, a red flag went up in Weang's mind. This is bad, he thought grimly. There really is something going on. Determined not to push too far lest he invite danger upon himself, Weang decided silently, if he refuses one more time, I'll drop it entirely. But unexpectedly, Wei Weii seemed resolute as he met Weang's gaze head-on before blurting out bluntly. It's because of bullets. Captain Weang Jian couldn't help but widen his eyes. But it wasn't a question. He was already contemplating whether to stop the conversation entirely when Wei Weii began spilling everything like beans from a sack. Captain, you might have guessed it already, I brought back some bullets, not many. These bullets were made by our instructor in the training camp using some unconventional methods. When he distributed them to us, he strictly warned us. If you benefit from this, keep it a secret. If anyone dares expose me, I'll make sure they can't survive in the Foundation. Captain Weang nearly covered his ears in disbelief. The training camp was the Foundation's golden child, its instructors were untouchable figures. And yet, here was Wei Weii, so honest and straightforward, completely unaware that some things should remain unsaid. Or maybe, had Captain Weang's earlier sternness scared the kid into spilling everything? But don't worry, Captain, Wei Weii said quickly upon noticing Weang's expression shift dramatically. He smiled reassuringly. Our instructor might sound scary, but he's actually quite reasonable. Even though he's not human, he's surprisingly humane. And while this is technically a secret, how could I ever hide anything from you? Rest assured, Captain, I'll report everything to you from now on. You'd better keep hiding things instead. Captain Weang muttered internally. But after a moment of reflection, he thought, it's just a few bullets. Even if he'd accidentally stumbled upon this secret, it didn't seem serious enough for the training camp instructor to come after him for silencing, right? After questioning Wei Weii for what felt like forever without getting any substantial answers, Weang finally waved his hand in exasperation. Just as he was about to say something else, he noticed Wei Weii suddenly grimace and clutch his stomach. What's wrong? Weang asked sharply. Hungry, Wei Weii admitted sheepishly. But please continue, Captain, I'm fine. Sigh. Weang Jian gave him a helpless look before saying, what's the point of talking on an empty stomach? Come on, let's go eat first. Wei Weii immediately brightened up. Captain, you're the best. Weang Jian instinctively smirked slightly. Didn't you just say your instructor treated you well? Isn't your captain just as good? Then he paused and frowned. Wait, why am I even comparing myself to that? Underscore 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 underscore. Little Wei is here. As Wei Weii and Captain Weang Jian entered the base, they saw Brother Zhu Zhe placing the last pot of stew on the table. The other team members were busy with their tasks but paused to glance at Wei Weii, their expressions tinged with curiosity and something else, something odd. Uncle Gun, hello. Lucky Sister, hello. Brother Little Lin, hello. Brother Zhu Zhe. Wei Weii stepped into the courtyard with a warm smile, greeting each person enthusiastically. Hello. The team members nodded and smiled, responding in kind. Looks like everything went smoothly. From the office in the distance, Ye Fifei leapt out joyfully. Brother Wei, you're here. Wei Weii could distinctly feel that everyone's gaze toward him carried a peculiar quality. It was such a familiar sensation. Back in training camp, he'd often experienced this progression. At first, everyone would feel an instant connection with his personality. They'd work together happily on missions. Then, as time passed and his exceptional talents shone through during missions, people's attitudes toward him would shift, becoming more respectful. Or perhaps fearful. Ye Fifei was different, though. Her gaze sparkled with admiration and excitement, completely unprofessional. All right, let's skip the chatter for now, sit down and eat. Captain Weang patted Wei Weii on the shoulder before casually tossing his waist pouch to Uncle Gun. Uncle Gun opened it to find 3 stabilizer syringes intact and untouched. His expression turned to surprise as he glanced at Wei Weii, thinking how mysterious training camp graduates truly were. Weang Jian even pulled a bottle of liquor from his personal stash and reached for a glass to pour some for Wei Weii. Wei Weii, ever perceptive, quickly took the glass from him and poured drinks for everyone else as well. The team members exchanged glances, surprised by how considerate he was, and their expressions grew even more complicated. Having learned that Wei Weii had single-handedly turned a hidden sacrificial site into a slaughterhouse and left behind a visually striking artwork in its center, it was hard not to feel uneasy around him. Now seeing how polite and thoughtful he was only added to their confusion. Killing was one thing, it might just make someone seem aggressive, but killing and adding artistic touches? This kid might be a little unhinged. Pour me some too. Ye Fifei grinned as she held out her cup. Wei Weii looked surprised. I thought you only drank cola. Ye Fifei quickly downed the bit of cola left in her cup and held it out again with determination. At this moment, she was undoubtedly the happiest person in the room. Yesterday's discovery of the Love Demon's lair and the rescue of 7 young women had deeply moved her. However, when the team tracked Wei Weii to that sacrificial site later on, they'd kept her outside so she wouldn't be frightened, prioritizing team cohesion over exposing her to such horrors. As a result, all she knew was that Wei Weii had single-handedly destroyed a fanatical cult's sacrificial site. What did this mean? It meant he was practically a lone hero. Her gaze toward him sparkled with admiration, like stars lighting up her eyes. Fine, I'll pour you just a little so you don't upset your stomach again. Wei Weii teased as he poured her a small amount. Ye Fifei beamed with delight. Lucky sister suddenly cast Captain Weang a worried look. Oh no, a chemical reaction is about to happen. Maybe we should have let Purify see the scene after all. But then again, it might have scared her too much and hurt team morale. Alright. Weang glanced at them both uneasily but still raised his glass. Let's set aside everything we can't talk about for now. Little Wei has only been with us for just over a month, and already he's solved a death demon sacrificial case, made significant contributions during the knowledge demon attack, and now destroyed a life demon sacrificial site all by himself. Purify's eyes widened slightly at this list of accomplishments, and she muttered dejectedly. But I helped quite a bit too. The other team members raised their glasses as well, but their expressions remained subdued. At that moment, they wanted nothing more than to hug Wei Weii tightly and plead with him, please stop being so reckless. Wei Weii, looking slightly embarrassed, clinked glasses with everyone. It's nothing. It's all thanks to Captain Weang's wise leadership and guidance from my senior colleagues. The team collectively gave him a look that said, you earned your credit, just don't drag us into it. After downing several drinks, the group began eating. Having gone hungry for an extended period, Wei Weii couldn't fully hide his appetite this time. Doing his best not to appear too ravenous, he devoured bite after bite until he'd polished off 4 bowls of rice and half the dishes on the table. Brother Zhu Zhe watched in awe, his heart swelling with admiration as he became the first to forgive Wei Wei's enthusiasm for work. Sure, his interests might be unusual, but so what? He had an excellent appetite. As they chatted idly around the table, Wei Weii learned about how this case was being handled. Captain Weang and his team had located the life demon sacrificial site early that morning, and immediately reported it to the Security Bureau for containment. Corpses were being collected 1 shovel load at a time for further examination and identification. Meanwhile, the 7 victims rescued from the love demon's lair as well as demon-forbidden objects retrieved by Purify were being properly secured, with Little Lin providing an official explanation. A grave robber used sedatives to control victims, reminding all women to remain vigilant about personal safety. This might not be over yet, Wei Weii remarked suddenly after finishing most of his meal, and after hearing about everything that had transpired. The atmosphere around the table shifted instantly as countless eyes turned toward him. Suppressing his urge to ask Purify for another bowl of rice, Wei Weii wiped his mouth with a napkin before explaining. My apologies, I haven't had time yet to share what I learned from interrogating that love demon. According to his voluntary confession, he received mysterious instructions 3 years ago to stay in Scrap Iron City awaiting orders, and everything he did recently was part of those orders. I have reason to believe there's an even bigger mastermind behind all this. And if someone has been preparing for 3 years, they're certainly not targeting just one small sacrificial site, or relying solely on this love demon for hunting prey. I suspect there are several other sacrificial sites hidden within Scrap Iron City, and many more low-level transcendents like this love demon hunting people across town. Someone started laying these plans 3 years ago. The room fell silent as everyone processed what he'd said. Having shared everything he knew about these secrets, Wei Weii then settled back into his role as a newcomer, watching how his teammates reacted. Deep down, the blood flesh rose stirred strong feelings of possessiveness within him, as though it were something only he could claim or enjoy, not something he wanted to share freely. But realizing how terrifyingly intricate this plot might be forced him out of selfishness, for if there were indeed other sacrificial sites lurking across Scrap Iron City, or if demons were still hunting people even now while they sat here enjoying braised pork over white rice, he couldn't keep quiet any longer. His gaze turned toward Captain Weang at the head of the table. He genuinely liked this team dynamic, but also wanted to see how Weang would handle things moving forward. One sacrificial site alone had already shaken Scrap Iron City, a rare terror in its history. If there were multiple such sites, and countless hunters like that love demon prowling around, would Scrap Iron City be turned upside down? Captain Weang slowly set down his cup, his expression unusually grave, as he asked softly, Little Wei, is there concrete evidence for what you're saying? Or any confessions? Wei Weii shook his head. He didn't report hearing strange voices or engaging in mental clashes at that hidden monastery, for even he hadn't fully understood what transpired there, and felt those irrelevant details didn't pertain directly to what needed addressing now. Instead, he spoke earnestly. It's all speculation, but I strongly believe these people exist. Pausing briefly, he added, I can almost hear their heartbeats. The room fell silent again, for speculation alone wasn't enough evidence. But Wei Weii wasn't impatient, instead waiting calmly. He'd encountered similar situations before where captains doubted his instincts, which wasn't unreasonable since relying on evidence wasn't inherently bad practice. If no one believed him here today, he'd find other ways forward, but speaking up now was necessary nonetheless. All eyes gradually shifted toward Captain Weang, their leader who often seemed oddly disrespected yet always earned unconditional trust when it mattered most. Weang stared deeply at Wei Weii, not revealing whether he believed him or not. Finally nodding slightly, the captain asked an unexpected question. Little Wei, you left behind that artwork because you believed these people exist. After pausing briefly, Wei Weii smiled faintly before replying. Underscore 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 underscore. This kid is trying to intimidate us. As Captain Weang and Wei Weii conversed, the surrounding team members suddenly had a moment of clarity. except for Wei Weii, who was still pondering, what exactly is this artwork? Ever since they had seen that monastery, every single one of them, including Captain Weang, had been harboring the same question. There just hadn't been an appropriate time or mood to ask Wei Weii why he'd done such a thing. Why had he left behind that artwork after dismantling the sacrificial site? It was an act difficult to understand, one that even evoked fear. But if what Wei Weii said was true, that the sacrificial site wasn't the only one, then even though he had single-handedly destroyed this one, it wouldn't significantly impact the overarching Blood-Flesh Rose plan. The other sacrificial sites would still be operating as usual. In fact, it was possible that dismantling one site might even increase the workload of the remaining sites. Preventing further incidents would be nearly impossible. The core of Blood-Flesh Rose revolved around life demons, but those hunting on the periphery came from various other types, each with unique abilities and hunting methods. Even if they wanted to warn ordinary people to be cautious, it wouldn't make much difference. So was Wei Weii using the transformation of this life demon sacrificial site into an artwork as a way to intimidate others? A unique and unconventional form of intimidation. Initially, his actions seemed terrifying and worrisome, but now, they were still a bit terrifying. Facing everyone's gaze, Wei Wei's expression remained calm and composed. Every piece of art has its purpose, and he certainly did too. Those transcendents hiding in the shadows were incredibly difficult to locate. Even Wei Weii couldn't be relied upon entirely. After all, her first success had been pure luck. Thinking about it, Wei Weii slapped himself lightly before raising his head and meeting Captain Weang's gaze with certainty. Although this method is quite extreme, there's no need to blame yourself so much. Captain Weang glanced at Wei Weii with a hint of sympathy but kept his expression neutral as he turned toward Little Ellen. Analyze this situation for us. If Little Wei's intuition is correct, how significant is the threat facing Scrap Iron City? It depends on their exact goals. Little Lin replied immediately. After discovering that sacrificial site, we conducted an initial investigation. Based on the remaining bones and transaction records, it appears that this small site alone sacrificed nearly 30 lives over the past month, and the actual number might be even higher. After all, they've been actively covering their tracks. This is already a horrifying figure in itself, but if there are several other sites conducting similar rituals as part of one large-scale sacrifice, then their required number of sacrifices could very well reach third tier. Third tier. Hearing this number made everyone's hearts skip a beat. Compared to Scrap Iron City's population of over 1 million, it might seem like a small number, but within the spiritual barrier, this would be an unprecedentedly catastrophic event. Such insane sacrifices were typically only seen in lawless wastelands. While different demonic texts describe varying rituals and requirements for sacrifices, they generally follow 3 tiers. First tier, the simplest level, perhaps just one person willing to offer their soul to a demon. Second tier, usually involves double-digit numbers, the most common and favored by demons being 13. Sacrifices at this level occurring within cities are already considered major crimes. Third tier, requires hundreds of lives, the most favored number being 666. This level triggers intervention from high-ranking Foundation personnel and specialized teams. If such a large-scale ritual were carried out under the noses of Scrap Iron City's security forces, it would constitute gross negligence. Forget about peaceful retirements, those responsible could face termination or prosecution for severe misconduct. They might even end up in laboratories being tested for collusion with cultists. And yet, the most critical issue was that while this ritual had already begun, they barely knew anything about it beyond its potential existence. Smack! The sudden sound of Captain Weang slamming his glass onto the table broke through their mounting anxiety. His face darkened as he asked, "If we wanted to root them out, how long would it take?" Little Lin frowned deeply before replying, "Very difficult." He sighed heavily. Scrap Iron City used to be a scavenger hub, but even after being incorporated into the spiritual barrier plan with administrative offices, security bureaus, and patrol teams stationed here, it's become more chaotic in some ways. The city claims a population of over 1 million, but in reality, it's much higher. On its outskirts lie countless lawless zones where drifters from both inside and outside gather, a buffer between Scrap Iron City and the wastelands beyond. The administrative offices tolerate their presence, nominally classifying them as residents, but they live in areas where the spiritual barrier is weakest, many without official identities. And within Scrap Iron City itself, our proximity to both wastelands and weak points in the spiritual barrier results in an unusually high proportion of transcendents here, especially low-level ones. The spiritual barrier can block high-level transcendents and demon followers, but low-level ones barely register. I once collaborated with the Security Bureau on data analysis, and estimated that low-level transcendents make up nearly 1 in 1,000 here. In such large numbers, even if only 10% were hunting for that mysterious organization, it would still be terrifying. The fragmented nature of these sacrifices makes them hard for the spiritual barrier to detect, and chaotic conditions make finding victims all too easy. Listening intently, the team couldn't help but feel their hearts pounding faster. If large numbers of low-level transcendents in Scrap Iron City had gone mad, hunting indiscriminately for Blood-Flesh Rose sacrifices, how could they possibly stop it? Every day would bring staggering numbers of victims. The sheer horror lay in how each layer of analysis only deepened their dread. Either Wei Wei's intuition was completely wrong, or the city was already crawling with countless maniacs. In that case, amidst countless anxious gazes, Captain Weang finally broke his long silence, frowning deeply as he issued an order. Little Lin, don't suppress today's news, release it. Especially that artwork. Release it. Hearing this shocked both Little Lin and Lucky's sister. They'd been among those who arrived first at the monastery, witnessing its gruesome aftermath firsthand. Normally, they were responsible for educating people to prevent public panic, and had successfully contained information about this incident until now. But now, Captain Weang wanted them to release it? Though they could guess at Wei Wei's intentions, they were still taken aback. Who knew what kind of chaos such bloody imagery might stir up in Scrap Iron City? Wei Wei himself felt pleasantly surprised by Weang's decision, a hint of joy rising within him unexpectedly. This was his first time showcasing his artistic sensibilities, but having his work completely suppressed hadn't crossed his mind. The result was that while some appreciated his art, they were all insiders. None of those who should have seen it got to see anything at all. Normally, he wouldn't bring up such matters himself. He understood others' perspectives often differed greatly from his own, and prided himself on being patient with them because life requires tolerance. But now, to his surprise, Captain Weang had chosen to support him instead. We don't have time for hesitation, Weang sighed heavily. Whether Little Wei's intuition proves accurate or not, we must act decisively. Release this news, even if it only deters one person, or saves one more life, it'll be worth it. Taking another deep breath, he continued. I admit, I'm someone who avoids trouble whenever possible. Under everyone's astonished gazes, he smiled faintly before adding, but just because I dislike seeking out problems doesn't mean I can ignore them when they come knocking. I don't like making waves, but when waves come my way, I won't run either. If such sacrifices occur within our spiritual barrier, and even succeed, we can kiss our pensions goodbye. Hearing this, the team exchanged glances before nodding resolutely despite their shock. Meanwhile, Wei Wei couldn't help but feel his eyes light up. Across the long table, his gaze met Captain Weang's, and he suppressed his excitement as he nodded slightly. What artist doesn't want their work seen? Especially now, as someone newly ascended to Scarlet mentor status, Wei Wei felt an unmistakable clarity. Art isn't complete until it's seen, not just created for oneself, it must be known by others, to truly realize its value. Underscore 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 underscore. Spreading the news about the artwork was a simple task. Usually, the Scrap Iron City base was involved in blocking news and conducting forced education to prevent panic. However, this time, they were releasing the news intentionally. Little Lin handled it efficiently, as he had already taken photos from various angles during the cleanup of the hidden monastery. He selected some good shots, edited them, and wrote the news draft himself. The news was collectively released, and he even informed the guard hall in advance, asking them not to interfere with the reporting. The small news stations in Scrap Iron City suddenly found themselves with a big story. Even though the city was on the edge of the spiritual barrier, the general public remained unfamiliar with demons and supernatural powers. Most people believed in fortune-telling spirits or ghostly rumors, but in the mainstream view, this was still a scientific and logical world. The massive explosion 70 years ago was almost forgotten. However, if there were people with a keen sense of smell, they were the reporters. They had often felt that some events were too bizarre to understand but had to publish reports that seemed nonsensical. Little Lin had endured a lot of criticism from them behind the scenes. But this time, there was such a shocking murder case, a massacre, even. And in the midst of it, an artwork appeared that was the icing on the cake. It was exciting. The 15-district youth massacre case 3 years ago had already been a sensational story for them. Thus, the news about the hidden monastery in the villa spread rapidly across various media outlets, shocking the entire city. Everyone was talking about the overnight massacre at the hidden monastery. Everyone was discussing the unknown skeletons found there. And everyone was mysteriously speculating about the corpse kneeling at the altar, holding its head. It was named the Lamb's Sacrifice. Moreover, as the news spread, various nicknames were given to the mysterious killer. There were Black Robe Butcher, Rainy Night Madman, and even Hell's Flower. Little Lin firmly denied being the one who came up with the last nickname. However, the Lamb's Sacrifice was indeed a name he and Wei Wei had agreed upon. The result was that the people of Scrap Iron City suddenly had a major topic of conversation. At night, fewer people ventured out. They discussed, cursed, and shared rumors, but they also felt a shadow looming over them. It seemed like something was watching them from the shadows. It was effective in increasing the difficulty for the peripheral hunters. This was an unexpected gain. In the Scrap Iron City base, Fei threw away the newspaper in frustration. After reading it, she was deeply shocked by the bloody corpses, the heavy machine guns, and the bullet marks on the walls. It implied a fierce battle. Wei Wei had single-handedly entered such a place and eliminated those lawless elements. Inside, she felt a mix of shock and admiration. Although the artwork named The Lamb's Sacrifice was thrilling, she had seen the girls rescued from the love demon transcendent and their pitiful state. She had already thought that Wei Wei was saving people. Now, seeing the reports making the event more terrifying and sensational, almost portraying him as a pervert, she felt a strong sense of resentment. She hadn't seen the artwork initially, and before the news, she had heard Little Lin say they used all their strength to artistically process the event for maximum effect. So, she didn't take it seriously. The photos were edited on the computer by Little Lin, not created by Wei Weii himself. Clearly, it's a story about a responsible transcendent officer infiltrating a criminal den and achieving a great feat, Faceless thought, feeling indignant on Wei Wei's behalf. Yet, he's being slandered by the people he protects. As she thought more, she felt sympathetic and admiring. Wei Weii has sacrificed so much for this job, and he's not even angry about being slandered like this. I need to learn from him. Meanwhile, Wei Weii, not far away, was reading the newspaper with a smile. He was thinking, my first artwork has been reported, it's really memorable. Should I take it home and frame the newspaper? The incident had become big news, and it quickly caught the attention of higher UPS. In the base, Lucky was looking at Captain Weang with a furrowed brow, asking, you usually like to downplay things, but this time, you're intentionally amplifying the event. What's your goal? How do they react upstairs? Captain Weang asked instead of answering directly. They're very angry, Lucky replied. They think it's our mistake that the news leaked, and we violated regulations. We can explain it to them, Captain Weang said. We didn't break any rules. Our duty is to block news related to demonic powers to prevent public panic, which could weaken the spiritual barrier. But this time, the report is just about a shocking murder case. Although surprising, it still fits within scientific logic. Besides, we didn't report how he killed them. Lucky understood Captain Weang and pondered for a moment. You want to make a big deal out of this to force them to send someone to investigate. Captain Weang suddenly asked, what do you think about this sacrifice? It's indeed a serious event we've encountered in 3 years, but we've handled worse cases in secret, Lucky replied. In terms of scale and impact on order, it's not as significant as the knowledge demon attack last time. But this sacrifice is too bizarre, Captain Weang said, looking up at her. If someone can secretly plant a problem like this 3 years ago, and quietly gather all the life demons around Scrap Iron City, why would they choose to hold such a sacrifice here? This power could easily conduct a larger sacrifice in the wasteland. And judging from their actions, they don't underestimate the spiritual barrier's power. They deliberately divided the sacrifice and used numerous low-level transcendents to hunt for victims on the outside, showing their caution. Lucky's expression turned slightly frightened as she listened to Captain Weang. She thought of something but didn't say it out loud, as if mentioning a certain name required courage. That's right, Captain Weang nodded. Whoever planned this sacrifice must be very powerful. And in a place like Scrap Iron City, the only thing worth such a person's effort is the legendary Demon Forbidden Object 003, God's Death Knell. Lucky's breathing became heavier, her chest rising and falling slightly. God's death knell had been speculated to be in Scrap Iron City, and even the Wandering Sect had taken action. But where was it? Why would such a high-level demon forbidden object remain quietly in Scrap Iron City for 3 years? Captain Weang asked in a low voice. We've always overlooked a possibility, he continued. We subconsciously think that such a demon forbidden object represents terror and danger. But don't forget, this object was initially contained by the church. This means its power isn't at the top of the system. So, is it possible that it's not staying in Scrap Iron City voluntarily, but is being forcibly sealed here? Lucky became tense upon hearing Captain Weang's speculation. Can you be sure? I'm not sure yet, Captain Weang shook his head. But it's not hard to confirm. A trip to the demon trading market would be enough. The key point is that no one could confirm if God's death knell is indeed in Scrap Iron City, let alone its exact location. But if it's sealed, finding it wouldn't be difficult. We just need to determine the nature of this sacrifice and find the locations of the other sacrifice sites. We can find Demon Forbidden Object 003, find God's death knell. Lucky listened, becoming even more tense. Then what about us? She couldn't help but panic. Initially, they had entered Scrap Iron City with this goal in mind but had long agreed to abandon it. Who would have thought that this goal would suddenly reappear? She was worried about Captain Weang's decision. If we confirm that this object is indeed in Scrap Iron City and get its exact location, Captain Weang spoke calmly but firmly, I will immediately submit a report to the higher UPS. Lucky was taken aback. I meant what I said earlier, Captain Weang sighed. I had already given up on competing for it. But if this speculation is true, Scrap Iron City will become the center of a maelstrom. I don't want me, you, or those young people like Wei Weii and Faceless to get caught up in a vortex far beyond our level. So, I just need to confirm the nature of this event and formally submit the report. This report represents our responsibility. After submitting it, regardless of how the higher UPS respond, I will have you all temporarily withdraw. At the same time, Wei Weii was patiently waiting in the courtyard for the impact of his artwork. He was somewhat excited to see how the hunters would react to it. For the general public in Scrap Iron City, this was just a terrifying massacre, but for those peripheral hunters lurking in the shadows, selecting their prey, they would certainly understand what kind of case this was and what it represented. How much deterrent effect it would have, Wei Weii wasn't sure, but he was excitedly waiting for some change to appear. This was his work for advancing to the third stage of the Scarlet sequence. It was also through this that he opened a new door, acquiring the ability to touch souls. So, would these people, upon seeing the work, also unknowingly trigger their third stage abilities? He had a hunch that this was inevitable. However, from the time the newspapers were distributed throughout the city, he waited patiently but didn't see any reaction. Was it not enough, or was something missing? He had thought about going out to the streets to see if there would be any other reactions, but Captain Weang, although supportive of releasing the artwork, seemed to be on high alert now. Even Ye Fei could go out to patrol, but he had to stay at the base. What was he being cautious about? Could it be that he would go out and kill another group of people? Which was unlikely. He needed to stay calm and not rush. He sensed his own anxiety and internally advised himself. During training camp, the instructor often scolded him for being too impatient, and several times, he had killed people before they could be interrogated, resulting in lost points. Now in Scrap Iron City, how could he not notice his own problems? Moreover, he was different now, he had acquired an artistic sense. He needed to be elegant. Just as he was bored and thinking about this, he saw Captain Weang come out of the office, dressed in a sharp three-piece suit and a stunning silver windbreaker, wearing gold-framed glasses. He beckoned Wei Weii from afar. "Little Wei, come with me. Where are we going?" Wei Weii asked. "To work," Captain Weang replied. Wei Weii felt as if his worldview had been shattered. "Little Wei, you're very enthusiastic about your work, but as your captain, I must criticize you. We're nominally law enforcement, but we're actually investigators. Our main task is to investigate." "That's right, Captain. What are we investigating?" "Of course, we need to figure out why these people went to such great lengths. What was their purpose?" As they left the base, Wei Weii initially planned to drive his own car, but Captain Weang had already mounted his motorcycle and signaled for Wei Weii to get on. Seeing the captain's mysterious and unyielding expression, Wei Weii obediently sat down, holding his legs. He wondered if Uncle Gun would be angry, as this was usually his seat. Captain Weang put on his wind goggles and sped through the streets, heading towards the southern part of Scrap Iron City. Along the way, he explained to Wei Weii, "Little Lin and Uncle Gun have collected evidence from the small monastery's altar and the scene. We've made some educated guesses about the case. Now, all we need is to compare and confirm its nature, so we can submit a report that the higher UPS can't refuse." "Captain, you're really farsighted," Wei Weii said, genuinely impressed. He hadn't thought that deeply, he just wanted to find the opponents and kill more of them, or at least have a good chat with them. "What's the plan for the final confirmation, Captain?" Wei Weii asked. "There's only one thing that can give us the answer," Captain Weang replied with a smile. "What is it?" Wei Weii inquired. "The origin book." Wei Weii was taken aback. "We have that here." Captain Weang explained, "The difference between inside and outside the spiritual barrier is significant. Inside, it's impossible to have such large-scale sacrifices, and there are fewer areas beyond our jurisdiction. But here, we have things that are considered forbidden inside." "Like what?" Wei Weii asked. "For instance, the origin books, which are viewed as taboo inside. They're available here, outside the city, at the demon trading market." Captain Weang revealed a cold smile. "You can buy one for 30 yuan. If you're interested, you can even buy it in bulk." Wei Weii was amazed and unexpectedly discovered, in some strange places, Captain seems to have a competitive spirit. Every demon was once a god. Their powers, rituals, and how to please them after inheriting their powers were all recorded by followers and transcendents, forming a kind of Bible for each system. In the life system, it was called the Origin Book. Wei Weii also knew that the Knowledge Demon system had the Book of True Knowledge, the War Demon system had the Hymn of Holy War, the Order Demon system had the Sacred Canon of Principles, and the Death Demon system had the Book of the Dead. These Bibles might contain descriptions of sacrifices that could help them understand the purpose behind the rituals. However, Wei Weii knew that all such texts were forbidden within the spiritual barrier. Not only would wild transcendents be tempted by the power described in them, violating rules, but even transcendent law enforcement officers might be lured into corruption. So, even though he knew about the origin book, he hadn't thought of using it to solve his doubts until Captain Weang mentioned it. And now, he was surprised to learn that it could be bought in bulk. As they sped along, the buildings around them gradually thinned out. Although Scrap Iron City was nominally part of the spiritual barrier, the distinction between it and the outside wastelands was clear. However, the actual separation was just a barbed wire fence, which was often damaged by smugglers and those sneaking in or out. Captain Weang led Wei Weii through a large hole in the fence, familiar with the route. Wei Weii was amazed. "Captain, do we have to leave the city through these smugglers' hidden paths?" "No need," Captain Weang replied. "We can just inform the patrol team." "Why are we taking this route then?" "It's more convenient. If we go to report, we'd have to take a detour and fill out paperwork." Wei Weii, adopting a humble learning attitude, closed his mouth and followed Captain Weang. They reached a place about 10 miles outside Scrap Iron City, where a row of lively lights appeared amidst the endless, dark grass. These lights were hidden in the ruins of abandoned towns, which had been deserted as people moved into cities after the establishment of the spiritual barrier. The town before them was like a ghost town, with crumbling buildings and broken windows, but one street stood out as bustling. This was the demon trading market. Is this really an illegal trading ground formed by wild transcendents, demon followers, and smugglers? Wei Weii wondered. A place where everyone with demonic powers does illegal business without fear of being reported. Wei Weii was getting excited. Pay the parking fee, Captain Weang said, snapping Wei Weii back to reality. As Wei Weii looked around, he saw Captain Weang had already stopped the motorcycle among a clutter of cars. A small figure sat on a stool in the shadows, nodding towards them. Do we really need to pay for parking here? Wei Weii asked, surprised. Of course, Captain Weang replied. This place isn't as safe as the city. If you don't find someone to watch your vehicle, it might be gone when you return. And if the whole car is stolen, you can just chase after it and get it back. But if they steal parts like the wheels, it's a hassle to replace them. Wei Weii suddenly felt that Captain Weang was very experienced. He obediently went to pay the 50 yuan parking fee to the figure in the shadows without questioning it. Captain Weang, who had been watching with some guilt, felt a surge of appreciation for Wei Weii when he saw him pay without hesitation. Cough, this is just an advance, Captain Weang said as Wei Weii returned. You can get reimbursed from Lucky later. 50 yuan is nothing, no need to reimburse, Wei Weii replied with a smile. Underscore 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 underscore. Captain, are you sure this is the demon trading market? Wei Weii asked with great enthusiasm as he followed Captain Weang Jian into the area. However, his naivete was quickly apparent. He had imagined it would be a place filled with illegal demon superhumans, selling items strictly forbidden by the Foundation and the spiritual barrier cities, where anyone caught would be executed 10 times over. But as he followed Captain Weang, he found that while such individuals were present, there were also many ordinary people who weren't superhumans. Some had used demon injections but didn't qualify as superhumans. Moreover, at both ends of the market, he saw vendors selling skewers, sweet potatoes, and even 30G hard drives. It was bewildering. This doesn't look like a demon trading market, it's more like a village fair, Wei Weii thought. Of course, it is, Captain Weang replied, leading Wei Weii through the market while surveying their surroundings. You need to get used to the existence of wild superhumans and these wilderness vagrants. We're accustomed to living within the spiritual barrier, but many people believe those inside are cursed by God. They prefer to suffer in the wilderness, enduring natural disasters and exploitation by the church, rather than enter the city, Captain Weang continued. Wei Weii listened intently, unsure how to evaluate this. The spiritual barrier had a welcoming and tolerant attitude toward wilderness vagrants. These people knew that the spiritual barrier offered far more material wealth than the wilderness, yet they refused to enter. They believed that living in supercities meant being cursed, enjoying life now but destined for hell later. They believed that even if they suffered, God would eventually save them. In the eyes of those inside the spiritual barrier, outsiders were vagrants, while to outsiders, those inside were cursed. Both sides were like different soils, producing different ideologies that grew increasingly divergent. Scrap Iron City, like other third-tier defense cities, lies between these two worlds, Captain Weang said, sighing as he walked forward. Inside and outside the spiritual barrier, though clearly divided, everyone is human and shares many desires. The spiritual barrier needs things from the wilderness, and the wilderness needs things only available inside the barrier. So, countless smuggling groups have emerged, and the administration turns a blind eye. So, little Wei, the world of superhumans isn't simply black and white. Be cautious in your actions. As he spoke, Captain Weang glanced at Wei Weii, his eyes seeming deep and serious. Wei Weii nodded, Captain, you're right. I'll remember. Captain Weang suddenly let out a laugh, feeling that Wei Weii was indeed very obedient and listened well. However, his responses were a bit too quick. As they walked through the trading market, Wei Weii couldn't help but feel a sense of wonder. Growing up in Scrap Iron City, it wasn't until now that he truly began to understand it. This so-called trading market felt more like a village fair, the kind held on the 2nd and 7th days of each month. The atmosphere was lively, with vendors selling vegetables, meat, guns, second-hand TVs, filters, and signal receivers. Some even set up small stands to copy movies. What was more surprising were the unique stalls and shops that blended in perfectly with the atmosphere. Some hung colorful lanterns, with a woman dancing seductively at the entrance. This was a stall selling love potions. Next to it, a large computer was set up for high-tech fortune-telling. There were also vendors selling books and offering mock exams for the high school entrance exam, calling out to passersby, knowledge can change your fate. Buy a book to take home for your child. What if the child is always killing people? Someone asked. Does killing mean they don't need to study? Take this medical reference book home. If they haven't been killed, they must keep studying at night, otherwise, they won't know where to strike more effectively. Captain Weang explained a few things to Wei Weii before excitedly walking around the market with his hands behind his back. He seemed interested in everything, even chatting happily with a vendor selling sweet potatoes. As they walked, a large canvas tent nearby caught their attention. Someone was shouting through a megaphone, a once-in-a-century opportunity? The Love Demon System's corrupted creature, the Siren Banshee, was captured after our boss spent a month and a half and lost 2 teams. Tickets are 100 yuan each for a breathtaking experience. Captain Weang suddenly turned around, his eyes wide. Siren Banshee. Wei Weii was intrigued as well. This was a well-known corrupted creature from the Love Demon System. Technically a biological entity rather than a monster, it was famed for its breathtaking beauty. Those infected by love demons often possessed an unnatural allure, and among them, the Siren Banshee was the most legendary. Just one look could leave an indelible mark on the mind, and a single kiss could erase the memory of all others. Many men described the experience as nothing short of divine. Still, Wei Weii found it hard to believe such a being had been captured and put on display. Was this truly how the demon trading market operated? Captain Weang seemed rooted to the spot, his eyes fixed on the tent. Wei Weii adopted a "if the leader goes, I'll follow" attitude. Captain Weang felt reassured and appreciated Wei Weii more. Just as he was about to head towards the tent with Wei Weii, the megaphone continued, "Today, we're offering a grand opening special. For 100 yuan, you can have a breathtaking experience, and for 1000 yuan, you can." The announcer clapped enthusiastically. Clap, 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 clap. Captain Weang suddenly stopped, turning back to Wei Weii with a serious expression. "Work comes first. Little Wei, don't go over there yet. Just wander around and see if you can find anyone selling the origin book. If you do, grab a copy." Wei Weii let out a sigh of relief, understanding. "That's okay, Captain. You go check it out. I'll look for the origin book." "Good," Captain Weang said, taking a step forward before turning back. "How much money do you have on you?" Wei Weii hesitated. 1,000. Captain Weang's face lit up with a smile. "No need for that much, I have some myself." He paused, then said, "Lend me 980 yuan. Wei Weii turned around, pulled out a bundle of cash tied with rubber bands from his pocket, took out a small portion, and handed it to Captain Weang. Captain Weang was visibly excited, his face flushed. He grasped Wei Wei's hand, saying, "Little Wei, I really feel like we haven't interacted enough before. Don't worry, with me around, everything will be fine." As he released Wei Wei's hand, he took the money and walked briskly towards the canvas tent. Turning back, he said, "Remember to get reimbursed from Lucky Sister later." Wei Weii waved his hand. "No need to reimburse, it's just a small amount, Captain. You focus on your work." Captain Weang was so moved that he almost cried. He pointed at Wei Weii and then at his own heart, pounding it twice. Captain is really something, Wei Weii thought, putting away the remaining cash. He reflected that if he had known this would improve his relationship with Captain Weang, he would have followed him out sooner. When he returned from the training camp, he had only brought a few thousand yuan, which the instructor had provided in case food was scarce in the third city defense ring. Now, after being back for over a month without many expenses, he had spent 1,000 yuan on his first outing with Captain Weang. However, Wei Weii thought the money was well spent. With Captain Weang gone, Wei Weii relaxed and began to stroll around the market. There were various stalls selling antiques, offering services to summon small ghosts, selling love potions, curses to harm others, and even items labeled as mysterious artifacts. On a piece of torn fabric, over a dozen items were laid out for customers to choose from. Wei Weii picked one up, frowning. "What's this?" The vendor whispered, "This is a second-tier demon forbidden object. It guarantees you'll win every bet for just 5,000 yuan. Take it, and you'll never lose again." Demon forbidden object? Wei Weii asked, pulling out his phone to check for radiation. Finding none, he said, "How come there's no radiation?" The vendor grew annoyed, waving his hand. "Leave. This is for fools. You're not stupid, so why bother?" Wei Weii felt at a loss for words and walked away, grateful that his temper had improved. After all, he was an artist and needed to maintain his composure.
Hello, everyone. As we wrap up this video, I want to share a quick note. I have a Patreon account. If you'd like to support me and enjoy on-demand audiobooks, you can become a Patreon member. Alternatively, you can check out my Google Drive link, which has 500+ novel audiobooks available through my Ko-fi or Patreon shop. I appreciate your support.